This story begins with a nightclub that was quite crowded. The bartender barely had time to serve drinks. The music was blaring from the stage. On one of the tables was a large bottle of cognac. The girl splashed it into a glass and asked Mr. Yang to drink it. Sprawled out on the couch, an older man with gold chains put his arm around the girl's shoulders. He apologized for beating up her boyfriend. Smiling shyly, his companion replied that he wasn't her boyfriend at all. In fact, he was a long way from John. The man was glad that the girl was understanding. He pressed her tighter against him and exclaimed that he had bought her so many things for a reason. The girl bowed her head. She was getting embarrassed. She asked Mr. Yang not to grope her so insistently. The man smiled lustfully and exclaimed that her Han Hao was a very pathetic type. He hadn't even touched her hand. Jan pressed his companion against him so hard that she had to pull away involuntarily. The girl said she was in pain. Suddenly, the doors of the nightclub swung open noisily. After beating up all the guards, Han Hao himself appeared and kicked open the doors. He immediately started with insults and wailed that Yang Hua was too stupid, but was allowing himself a lot, and therefore he would die. Yang Hua himself didn't seem to pay any attention to him. The Ling visitors of the club looked at the young man in a puzzled manner. The girl moved, and Yang Hua reluctantly opened his eyes. Recognizing the young man, he frowned and said that Han Hao was interrupting him again. But this time, the young man was serious. He exclaimed that Yang Hua must now pay for his former humiliation. All the events started 2 hours earlier at a fashionable 5-star hotel called Scent of Night Roses. Han Hao was in his 4th year of college and had to earn a living as an attendant. Coincidentally, his goddess Zheng Jiajia entered the same university. Han Hao had been trying to woo her since childhood. Every day, the young man imagined that Jiajia would fall in love with him and be the first to wave cordially at him. To gain the girl's favor, Han Hao even took over all of her homework and term papers. Moreover, every day at the appointed time, the young man invariably came under the women's dormitory building and brought breakfast. Han Hao has been trying to get a relationship with an unapproachable girl for a long time. She finally agreed to go out with him. Zheng Jiajia was walking a little ahead, and the guy timidly trembling hand reached out to her. He really wanted to take the girl's hand. To his horror, it was at this moment that Jiajia withdrew her hand, and Han Hao touched the girl's buttocks out of inertia. Jiajia immediately turned around and slapped his cheek. The girl angrily exclaimed that the young man should keep his temper in check. Han Hao almost cried at the insult he had received. He didn't understand why the girl had acted so cruelly. The young man was mopping the floors in the hotel corridor and dreamed that he would earn money and buy Jiajia an expensive purse for her birthday. Suddenly, near the door of the room, Han Hao heard a woman's voice. He listened to it. The girl asked Yang to take his time. Judging from her voice, the girl was shamefully resisting. Han Hao moved closer to the unlocked door. He was curious to listen. The girl in the blue dress got off her partner's lap and said there was no hurry. She would go close the door. An embarrassed Han Hao struggled to peek through the small slit of the door. He wanted to look at the girl. A large, solid man was lustfully attracted to a girl in a blue dress with brown hair. To his horror, Han Hao recognized this girl. He wouldn't mistake her for anyone else. It was his favorite Jiajia. Without hesitating for a second, Han Hao kicked the room door with his foot and rushed inside. He shrieked and demanded an explanation. Yang Hua turned around unhappily. Zheng Jiajia asked the young man in surprise how he even ended up here. Han Hao, instead of answering, grabbed the girl's wrist and pulled her towards him. He demanded Jiajia to leave with him. At that moment, a powerful kick in the stomach threw him back against the door. The blow was so hard that he couldn't breathe. In addition, Han Hao's back was very painful when he fell, and he was out of breath. On inertia, the young man's head turned and he hit his temple on the hard floor of the room, writhing in pain. Without letting him get up, Yang Hua stepped on his head with his boot and pressed the young man's head into the floor even harder. The man angrily stated that the brash kid had come out of nowhere and ruined everything for him. He suggested that the boy had had enough of life. Trying unsuccessfully to get up from the floor, Han Hao wailed that he was actually this girl's boyfriend. Yang Hua smiled slyly and lit a cigar. He asked Zheng Jiajia to clarify the situation and tell him who it belonged to. The girl raised her head and embarrassedly said that she was committing herself to belong to only Mr. Yang alone forever. Han Hao couldn't believe that he had been humiliated so badly. He had come to stand up for the girl's honor, and it turned out to be for nothing. Yang Hua lightly slapped Jiajia's buttocks and suggested that they go out for a drink since they can't have a proper conversation in the room. The man and the girl left the room, slamming the door hard. Han Hao groaned and started to get up from the floor. Because of this incident, the young man was so exhausted that he could not move. His hands trembled violently with resentment. Clenching his teeth, the humiliated Han Hao wept tears. The entire floor around him was drenched in his bitter tears. Ignoring his snotty nose, Han Hao promised himself that he would make the two of them pay the bill. On a dark evening, the young man wandered thoughtfully through his hometown past dull and gray 5-story houses. There was a solid abrasion on the right side of his face. There was blood caked on the left corner of his lips. Hao was annoyed by this situation. Suddenly, a powerful stream of cold water poured over the young man. It was very sudden and unpleasant. Some woman, pouring water from the balcony, also accused Han Hao of loitering around at night. From behind him, he heard a low, cooing voice. The old man, who looked like a wanderer, saw that the young man was very upset. He stated that he specialized in good luck and was willing to rid him of all negative karma for just 100 yuan. Of course, Han Hao knew that the old man was a beggar, but at that moment, the young man felt pity for him. Han Hao explained that he was poor himself. After giving the old man 10 yuan, the young man said he had nothing else. The old man snatched the banknote from the young man's hands and promised a discount. He turned away and blew into the vial hanging around his neck. In the same second, the wanderer turned back and stabbed Han Hao's neck with 3 fingers. The young man didn't even realize anything. Han Hao's neck was pierced by an infernal pain. He had a feeling that the strange old man had shoved something inside him and it was growing. Feeling the bruised spot, the young man was surprised to notice that his wound was healing very quickly and there wasn't even a scar. In addition, very strange things were happening. Han Hao felt much stronger and much more confident. The old man, with a satisfied exclamation that he would finally get drunk, withdrew. Han Hao shouted after him and asked for an explanation. An inner voice proclaimed the creation of the immortal system. The young man turned around in surprise, but there was no one around. In the pitch darkness, a squinting bright yellow eye informed the young man that he was very weak and asked Han Hao if he wanted to become stronger. Han Hao whirled around in all directions, but still didn't see anyone. He asked fearfully who the voice belonged to. The system assumed that the old man had slipped some jerk in again. The young man shouted angrily that the voice was an asshole. The masked creature hiding his face finally appeared to the young man and informed him that the mortal had no idea who he was talking to. Han Hao stared in surprise in front of him. He understood absolutely nothing of what the system was trying to tell him. The creature gave a friendly smile and informed that they had already merged into one. He represents the system of immortals. Han Hao frowned at the system. This creature was speaking in a very strange and confusing manner. Nothing could be understood. The young man became angry and wailed that he didn't want to know any systems or mergers with him. He demanded that the system go away. The system said it was impossible. If they were separated, the young man would die. Han Hao was scared. He didn't want to die. The creature laughed. The system stated that Han Hao was really quite stupid if he was frightened by such jokes. The young man stated that he was in no mood at all. Whoever the system was, she had better leave their alliance. The system surprisingly reported that the young man had no idea how many people were unsuccessfully trying to find her. Given the youth of the young man, the system decided to forgive him and demonstrate his abilities by showing him the mystic wind. Some unknown force ripped Han Hao from his seat and dragged him along the night street. The dust stood in a column. The next ability was called cloud lightness. Something lifted the young man off the ground like a piece of fluff, and he soared upward. The dazed, unsuccessful lover huddled against the wall watching him. Today, the spouse had come early. The system proclaimed that it would now demonstrate a lightning discharge. A powerful discharge erupted from the young man's palm. He smashed the window behind which the returning spouse was standing. The man outside the window was surprised to think he was standing on the ledge of the 11th floor. The system gently lowered the young man to the ground. Despite the high altitude, he was not injured. Han Hao couldn't believe that this was all real. The sound of a window breaking attracted the man, and he was surprised to find his neighbor outside the window. The system proudly asked the astonished young man if he could finally realize what opportunities had opened up to him today. The system informed him that the main thing was ahead of him. It asked what Han Hao wanted at the moment. Han Hao didn't ponder for long. First of all, he wanted to take revenge on those lowlifes Yang Hua and Zheng Jiajia. The system was very disappointed, but gave the young man a rookie kit with 15 points of immortality. In addition, Han Hao received a pink headband in the shape of Harriers to complete the mission. The system told me that the magic item would only work for a minute and a half. In that time, it should have brought Yang Hua to her knees. There was no way Han Hao could accept such a headdress. He shouted that he was a normal kid and wouldn't wear it. The system smirked and advised him to remember all the humiliations the young man had gone through. The system said that it would grant the young man strength if he obeyed. Han Hao made up his mind. He would make Jiajia regret his decision. And now the moment had come. The young man decisively swung open the nightclub door with his foot and came to the objects of his revenge. Yang Hua hadn't realized that the young man had changed. With a smirk, he assumed that Han Hao had come to ask for a petition. The young man squealed and advised the man to keep his mouth shut. The bodyguards held the young man down. The man laughed and announced that he would consider himself a loser if a single hair fell from him. One of the bodyguards suggested to quickly deal with the arrogant guy, and all 3 of them attacked the young man. Turning aside, Han Hao asked to wait for a while. He was very embarrassed to decide to do such an act. All the guards were overly surprised to see a pink hoop with hair ears in the young man's hand. It was very strange. Hanhao raised his hands with the hoop up and straightened it, trying it on his head. He began to slowly lower it. In fact, the young man himself was very embarrassed to look his opponents in the eye. He put on the hoop with his eyes closed. Yang Hua laughed and said that Hanhao's attempt was not bad, but guys were not his type. The young man asked him to stop talking nonsense. Hanhao stood as red as a boiled crayfish. The system slowly started counting down the time until the magic item was activated. Meanwhile, onlookers came running in from the dance floor and started insulting the young man over his rather odd accessory. One of the bodyguards laughed, tilting his head, and told the others that this young man was clearly of a non-traditional orientation. Even Zheng Jiajia herself looked disdainfully at the loser who made himself look like this. The moment of shame was over. The system reported that the magic item was ready to be used. Hanhao rushed forward. All 3 bodyguards looked at the young man in surprise. They had not expected him to be so quick, and had hoped to beat him up quickly. Hanhao continued to surprise the guards further. None of their punches reached the target. The young man maneuvered between them. At the same time, the bodyguards themselves received many wounds. Each of them had a broken nose. One was missing a couple of teeth. The exhausted guards fell to their knees. It was useless to fight any longer. Blood continued to drip from the young man's fists. Yang Hua couldn't believe his eyes. He immediately realized that this situation had turned against him too quickly. Hanhao swung his fist at the offending man. The man asked fearfully when he had become such a trained fighter. The young man was so angry that he didn't reply anything and only threw his fist lightning fast right into Yang Hua's face. The man didn't even have time to realize it. His eyebrows went up in surprise, and his eyes almost popped out of his head. The impact was so strong that Yang Hua simply stopped thinking for a while and couldn't realize what was happening. The system inexorably reported that there were 30 seconds left. Hanhao angrily told the offender that money didn't solve everything. With a face twisted with anger, he wailed that you can't do whatever you want just because Yang Hua is rich. Hanhao began to beat him up, and this time Yang Hua couldn't catch the moment of impact. It was happening very fast. When the time allotted by the system was up, Yang Hua was sitting in front of the young man, beaten to a bloody pulp and covered in bumps. Hanhao ripped off his hoop and demanded that he kneel down immediately, threatening to continue the reprisal. Yang Hua fell to his knees and began to beg for mercy. Crawling at the young man's feet, the man promised to give all his money. Hanhao demanded not to move. He said that he would take all of the man's money himself, or he wouldn't think of anything else. Pulling out a wallet from his pocket, Hanhao said that he was taking the money as compensation for the treatment and asked for the password on the card. Stammering in fear, Yang Hua mumbled that there was no password on the card. It was enough to simply swipe the card to make a purchase. The man was clear. He no longer posed any threat. Hanhao turned his head towards the girl he idolized. Zheng Jiajia was shaking with fear. She realized that now the young man would not spare her conniving and resting together with Yang Hua. Hanhao stared at the girl and gave her a disdainful look. Jiajia was no longer of interest to him. The young man turned in the opposite direction without saying a word to his idol. She already realized that she had ruined herself. The system reported that the reward for the completed mission would be sent out soon. Hanhao headed towards the club's exit. Some young man was watching him closely and immediately called his boss, briefly describing the situation. Unidentified man sitting in the office. He is informed by phone that they had an incident, and the thing they need was taken by a strange guy. The man clarifies how this could have happened. The agent reports that he doesn't understand how it happened. The man at the desk demands to send people and follow him without making too much noise. The agent states that he will do everything. Through a smirk, the man states that he really wonders who is so brave as to decide to cross the man's path. At this time, the system congratulates him on completing the mission and reminds him that the guy was awarded 15 immortality points and that Hanhao was rewarded with a super big rookie gift. The guy agrees to watch it right away. The system gives out the entire list of items received from the super big gift. Hanhao doesn't realize what he's gotten himself into. Taken on the chin, the guy finds the chaos technique interesting enough to study. The system states that the chaos technique is a spiritual practice, and it will be very useful for a guy to develop physical attacks. The guy also decides to clarify what the system was telling him about the superhuman level. While picking his nose, the system realizes that Hanhao knows absolutely nothing, deciding to explain everything. The system explains that the world of the immortals includes a large number of levels, which will serve to develop it. The system adds that each of the levels is divided into beginner, intermediate, and high levels. The system decides to end it by saying that Hanhao has just started his journey and is therefore at the initial superhuman level. Hanhao declares that he doesn't care, as he's already cool enough. Folding his hands, the guy clarifies whether other immortality seekers have the same system. The system states that Hanhao is the only one with such a folder. The agent following the guy doesn't know who he's talking to. Hanhao shouts, pointing his finger at the sky. The agent decides to poke his head out and see who the guy met. The next day has come. Hanhao is already in his dormitory. The guy decides to look at the chosen wallet. Hanhao couldn't believe what he saw. The guy pulls out a large wad of money, assuming there are about 30,000 yuan in the wallet. Sticking out the whole pack, the guy also notices a strange contraption. Hanhao takes the unknown object in his hand and begins to examine the object. The boy couldn't understand what he was seeing now. In his hand was a strange small golden-colored thing. At that moment, there is a knock on his room. The girl at the door asks if she can enter the guy's room. Hanhao clarified whether Moji was at the door. The girl continued to knock on the door. The guy opens the door and walks out to the girl. Hanhao greets his girlfriend. The girl clarifies if the guy is ready, because it's already time for them to go out. Moji was nicely dressed. The guy, forgetting his plans, clarifies where they were planning to go. The girl sighs and reminds him that it's her birthday and Hanhao squatted her down at the restaurant. Moji clarifies if the guy forgot it. The guy holding the back of his head averts his eyes. Hanhao declares that he couldn't forget such a thing, so he'll take her to a nice place. The girl takes Hanhao's hand and suggests that he should go already. The boy was embarrassed that Moji was clinging to him so tightly. The boy gives up and agrees to go with the girl after all Hanhao had promised Moji. The girl was amazed that Hanhao had brought her to Qingshui's most expensive restaurant. The girl decides to ask where Hanhao got the money from, since he's been saving up for Jiajia's gift all this time. She asks him if he's sure he wants to stay here. Hanhao explains that he has broken up with Jiajia and wants to use the money to take his best friend to a restaurant like this. The girl was embarrassed by such a statement. She was very pleased that Hanhao cared about her. The girl was partly glad that Hanhao had parted ways with Jiajia. The guy decides to open the menu on the table. Hanhao didn't understand what was written on the menu. Hanhao decides to point his finger at what he wants to order. The waiter realizes that the guy is ordering at random, but agrees to everything. The girl apologizes to Hanhao, as she needs to step away for a few minutes. Standing up from the table, the girl touches a passing man and knocks over his glass. The man's clothes were drenched in wine. The unknown man starts yelling at Moza with accusations that the girl is not looking over her feet and is flying in the clouds. The girl confusedly starts apologizing to the man. The man starts shaking with anger with the statement that the girl doesn't even know how expensive this suit is. The man looks at the girl with embarrassment and calls her a beauty. The unknown man was already drunk. The man moves closer to the girl and demands that Moji come with him. Hanhao, not wanting to continue watching the circus, takes the man's hand. Hanhao asks the man to calm down, for they will pay for the damage to the clothes, but the man should not unleash on his girlfriend. The man calls Hanhao a knight in white armor. He explains that his costume costs 100,000 yuan. Hanhao accuses the man of lying because sex rags can't cost that much money. The man states with a smirk that he understands, as the guy is a beggar. The man adds that he shouldn't have to pay, because he will take his girlfriend as compensation. With a sneer, Hanhao clarifies if the man still needs compensation. The guy pulls out 20 yuan and offers to go to the laundromat, adding that if it's not enough, he'll pay extra. The man drops the glass with the statement that the guy is out of line when he talks to him like that. The man abruptly grabs the girl's hand and leads her behind him. The man holds the girl's hand and declares that he will not allow himself to be insulted in public. Hanhao yells for the man to let the girl go or else they will talk differently. Men in suits get up from neighboring tables. The man declares that the first one to put the guy down will get the girl for tonight. Everyone stands behind the man's back and starts kneading their fists. The man looks at Hanhao with a smirk. Hanhao was fine with that. He wished to teach all the guys a lesson with his new power. The guy appeals to the system that he can't do it without it. With a smirk, the system congratulates the guy for activating the secret mission. The assignment says that the guy should not attack with abilities for the next 3 hours. The guy was stunned by such a statement considering the situation he was in now. The entire crowd slowly approached the guy. Hanhao looked at those who were confused. The man continued to hold the girl, demanding to everyone, "Get the guy and bring him to him." Hanhao couldn't believe what he was hearing. The system wondered if the guy was happy about the random activation, the secret mission. The system sighs once again and realizes he should act. The system activates the steely paternal love. The system adds that although he can't break the rules of the mission, however, he was able to throw a buff on Hanhao, increasing strength by 100 times. Hanhao yells at the system that there was no point in increasing his strength 100 times, because he couldn't attack. All the men had already gotten close enough, and one of them even took a swing at Hanhao. The man holding the girl yells at the crowd to beat the guy to death for his long tongue. The guy begins to quickly analyze his options. He realizes that his power has increased 100-fold. With a smirk, the guy looks at the crowd. He had an idea of what to do with this immense power. The boy points his finger at the man sitting at the table. Hanhao demands that he go one-on-one with him, because he is their boss. The whole crowd declares that the guy has no idea who Master Jiang is, and he doesn't care about the underage guy. Some people declare that the master doesn't care about such a guy. Master Zheng abruptly stood up from the table and was behind the backs of the crowd. Without further ado, he scatters the entire crowd in front of him. All the men fall soullessly to the ground from such powerful blows. Hanhao was also astonished by Master Zheng's strength. Some of the crowd flew past Hanhao. The guy was pondering what he should do with this Master Zheng. The boy was puzzled. Where did such a strong old man come from? Hanhao couldn't even think that he would be so strong. Assuming that the master was furious, he even scattered his men. The old man states that no one gave the boy the right to choose for him. The man holding the girl was amazed that Master Zheng had decided to come out to fight. The man describes the old man as a former special forces officer, who can even twist the heads of lions with his bare hands. The girl asks Hanhao to be careful. The old man asks if the boy wants to fight him one-on-one afterwards. The old man declares that there is no person in Qingshui City who can survive his strike. Hanhao mockingly pulls out money and suggests that the old man go outside the city and see the world, for he is deeply mistaken. The guy is sweating slightly. He hopes he hasn't miscalculated and his plan will work, because there's nothing left for him to do but go all in. The old man claims the guy knows nothing, calling the guy an upstart. The old man, not wanting to keep talking, rushes into battle to destroy the pathetic guy. At the last moment, Hanhao counters with a rather dangerous-looking kick. Guy decides to close his eyes before the old man strikes, but the old man stops a centimeter away from the guy's body. There is a loud pop. From such force, the clothes on the old man's arm were torn and bloody abrasions appeared all over his arm. The man could not believe what he was seeing. The old man was thrown back. His arm was badly distorted and disfigured. The old man screamed from the intense pain. The old man is thrown back a few meters behind the man's back. The man holding the girl starts to shake from fright. Hanhao sighs in relief. He adds that he won and didn't quite believe he could survive this death blow. Hanhao realizes that the effect of the buff is not limited to just attacking, but also extends to the rest of him. He also realizes that it's because the power works in both directions. Hanhao finishes with a serious face saying that he was right, and his real action is to reflect the damage. The man still couldn't understand what the guy just did, and how the old man lost. The girl tearfully runs towards the guy. Hanhao hugs the girl and offers to tell the guy, but the guy wants a visual demonstration. The man takes a step back and tries to justify his behavior. He starts apologizing and calling himself an idiot. A guy yells at a man and reminds him that he insulted his girlfriend, as well as the mob attacking him alone. The man was shaking with fear. Such tension made the man wet himself, causing Hanhao to step aside. An unknown man in a black suit comes down to Hanhao and asks him to calm down. The system reminds him that the steely fatherly love effect is over. The man introduces himself as the owner of the establishment, Li Yan, and is also invited to come upstairs for a few words. The guy picks up the girl and heads for the exit. He didn't want to continue to remain defenseless in this restaurant. Already near the exit, Hanhao explains that he doesn't care about them, and let him tell the head that he'll come next time. At the entrance, 2 guards block the exit, which surprises Hanhao. Hanhao reminds him what he did a couple minutes ago, and so he shouldn't touch it better. The man explains that he's seen the technique and is very much impressed with it, but it doesn't compare to Elder Li's techniques. So the man reiterates the offer, for if the man leaves it will be an insult to Elder Li. Seeing no other choice, Hanhao heads to the 2nd floor with the man. He analyzes what he should do next, without a system. The man knocks on the door, adding that he brought a guy. Hanhao meanwhile ponders how he can wait for the mission to end without fighting. A man and a boy walk in. The elder asks Hanhao to wait while he finishes his game. The man bows and walks out the door. Hanhao sits down in a chair and begins to look around the room. The system also notes that it has managed to find like-minded people, suggesting the use of X-ray vision for the inspection. Guy is surprised that this man is also seeking immortality. Hanhao activates his amulet of X-ray vision. Applying the seal to his right eye, the boy considers the man's stats. A small window came up in front of the elder with his description as well as his level information. The elder's level was superhuman high. The lad remarks that the elder is above his level, and in case of conflict, he has no chance of winning. As the man continued his game, Hanhao tried to analyze everything and come up with a new plan. The girl playing with the elder was outraged that he planned to pitch, but ended up winning again. The old man states with a smirk that while the girl was hoping that the one would give in, she relaxed and lost. The girl explains that her grandfather just broke a promise and it's not her fault she lost. The man laughed at this. Drinking his whiskey, he explains that a man teaches a girl about life. Hanhao, unable to keep waiting, declares that the old man feels so bad that he's drinking. The guy asks if the man is bored with life. The girl turns around and squints at the seated Hanhao. The girl stands up and declares that the guy doesn't dare talk to her grandfather like that, and he's the one who's bored with life. The man asks his granddaughter to sit down and slowly heads towards the guy himself. Hanhao panicked a bit, but still trying to remain calm. The guy himself doesn't notice how he started shaking his leg from nerves. The man walks up close to the guy and clarifies what Hanhao just said. The man looms over the guy and repeatedly interjects what Hanhao just said. Hanhao realizes that the man is vastly outnumbered and he can't even get up from the chair. The man asks with a smirk, still repeating what Hanhao said. In the bonus sequence, Hanhao checks with the system to see if the amulet can view other things as well. The system confirms with a smirk. The guy looks toward the granddaughter of the elder and observes the girl's body. Blushing, Hanhao couldn't believe what he saw. He tries to ask the system. The system increases the ability by presenting an X-ray. This makes Hanhao become indignant and ask for it back. The guy tilts his head. He realizes he absolutely can't move. Assuming this is what level-headed domination is all about. The old man looks at the guy nonchalantly. With a smirk, the guy adds that even though he said something about alcohol, it turns out it was all because the man is unwilling to go above superhuman levels. The man frowned, clarifying how the guy knew his current level. The man stops pushing the guy and lets him catch his breath. Hanhao realizes that he used his X-ray vision to see his condition. The boy recalls the entire list with the elder's description. The guy adds that he knows everything about the elder, and even when it starts raining, the man gets aching pains in his chest, because of which he can't go to the next level. The elder didn't understand how the guy was able to find out such information about him. He looked questioningly at Hanhao. The man wonders where the guy came from and knows it all. With a smirk, the guy explains that he's just as much a seeker of immortality, and as a man, Hanhao doesn't plan on revealing all his cards. In his thoughts, the guy realized that he had managed to suppress them with his power, and now they wouldn't be so quick to jump to conclusions. The guy himself couldn't believe he could avoid conflict. The girl comes closer and declares that the guy is misleading them. The girl wants to punish the guy and punch him in the face because then Hanhao will talk normally. The girl comes closer and takes Hanhao by the collar. The boy adds that he knows how to cure this ailment. The girl lets the guy go. The man clarifies if Hanhao can share a bit of his cards and tell it. The guy is trying to come up with an adequate explanation. Taking in his chin, the guy starts walking around the room with a smart-ass look. At this time, he was trying to beg the system for medicine because he needs it urgently. The system states that it is willing to help, but for the sum of 15 immortality points. The guy immediately agrees and asks the system to hurry up with a decision. The immortality points are taken away, and Hanhao has only 10 of them left. The system explains that the old man can't be healed in the usual way, so the system offers to buy an orb of wound healing for 30 points. The wound healing orb could cure most common ailments, but Hanhao was still 20 immortal points short. With a smirk, Hanhao declares that he has a method he can use to cure the man, but it will be difficult. Hanhao explains that in order to heal they will need a wound healing orb. The system notices that the boy is a fast learner. The girl became excited, wondering where the guy planned to get the balloon. The guy asks the girl to calm down because only he can get the cure and it will take 3 days. The man laughingly agrees, adding that if their new friend helps, it would be a great favor on his part. The man puts his hand on the guy's shoulder and offers to come with him and work out some issues. As they walk down the corridor, the elder adds that he plans to thank the boy for his assistance. Hanhao tries to clarify exactly where they are going. The elder sits down on a vacant chair and explains that he has come to solve a recent problem. The man standing in front of him in his underwear tries to say something, but he is too worried. The elder takes a cup of tea and asks the man to sit down first. The man tries to sit down next to the elder, but at that moment, Hanhao clarifies who allowed the man to sit down. Pointing his finger at the man, he explains that he was the one who was told to sit down. After which he silently sits down next to the elder. The girl silently looks at the boy and his actions. The man repeatedly attempts to sit in the chair, addressing his master. Pouring another cup of tea, the elder orders the man to stand up. Frightened, the man rises from his chair and stands in front of the elder. The elder explains that he has figured out the conflict between Hanhao and the man, and has decided to propose. The man gives his villa in the Huangqi area to the guy, and the guy, in the name of respect, will not try to take revenge on the man. The man was taken aback by such an offer. He tries to remind himself that it is a whole villa after all. The elder stands up and looks down at the man. He is waiting for a reason why this offer should be declined. The man agrees fearfully, after which he looks away. Outside with Moji, the girl clarifies exactly what the man wanted from him. The guy explains that everything is fine, and also shows the keys to the new villa. The girl did not immediately believe in the truthfulness of the keys, but the guy changed her mind that they are really the keys to the villa. The girl thanks the guy for saving her. At that moment, a girl is standing on the balcony with an elder. The girl wonders if her grandfather is afraid that the guy lied and will try to escape. The man explains that as long as the boy is in Qingshui, then he won't be able to escape his family's sight. Hanhao reaches home and climbs the stairs tiredly. The system announces the completion of the task and the reward. A guy opens the store and realizes he only has 10 points left to buy wound healing Shra. The system notices that the guy soon realizes how difficult it is to get immortality points. The guy adds that it doesn't make any difference to him right now, as he's pretty tired today. Yawning, the guy opens the door. Hanhao wishes to just go to bed at this point. The boy was amazed at what he saw, for he had locked the door from the outside. Everything in the room was scattered and gutted. Hanhao assumes that robbers broke into his room. A bell rang in Hanhao's pants pocket. It was Moji. The guy didn't quite understand what was wrong or why the girl was calling. The girl explains that her room was robbed and everything was turned over. Mojo was depressed and didn't know what to do. The boy was amazed by this. The guy thinks it's weird because it can't be a coincidence. Guy asks the girl not to be nervous. The system explains that she is not clairvoyant and assumes that Hanhao is interested in someone. The guy asks to wait for him, as he is already running towards her apartment. The system adds that it may be an immortality seeker, and such people may return at any moment. The guy closes the door behind him and heads toward Matza. The next day, Hanhao was already at his villa in the Huankui area. The bedrooms and the rest of the rooms were lavishly decorated, with no money saved. Moji asks Hanhao to wake up, for she has made breakfast for him. Just waking up, the guy struggles to get up, continuing to yawn. Coming out of his room, the guy greets the girl and clarifies how she slept in the villa. The girl standing in front of the guy's door explains that she has not yet recovered from yesterday's incident. The girl also doesn't understand whether she can stay in the house because it's not quite right. Hanhao clarifies what exactly the girl thinks is wrong, because it is his villa and she can live in the house in peace. The boy tried to analyze yesterday's incident. After all, nothing was stolen from them. But the fear that they will come again remains. Hanhao thinks that Moji shouldn't be left alone because it's too dangerous. The guy clarifies why the girl keeps looking at the guy. He thinks it's weird. The girl averts her gaze and denies it. The girl also reminds us that they will be having a reunion, catching the back of his head. The guy clarifies if Moji will go to the meeting, because he didn't feel like going himself. The girl excitedly declares that of course she will go. After all, she was the head girl and it is a duty to come. Hanhao adds that he will go with her then, as the girl should be by his side in the near future to make sure nothing happens. The girl looks away embarrassed, for Hanhao has changed a great deal. The next day, Hanhao and Moji went to the karaoke bar Color, where the reunion was to be held. Hanhao's classmate decided to perform one song. The girl hummed a song while the others clapped and entertained themselves during the meeting. Everyone asked for Hanhao to perform the Green Light song. The guy wasn't too happy about it. Moji laughs awkwardly behind him. Two guys start discussing Jen and Hanhao's relationship. One guy declares that the girl seems rather modest. Shikin adds that the guys are too blind, led by her charms, and it's Hanhao's own fault for not keeping track. The guy reminds her that Sha herself ran after Hanhao in high school. The girl takes her head in her hands and explains that she confessed to the guy, but didn't get mutual feelings. Guy offers to help the girl get revenge on Hanhao for such an insult. During the party, Hanhao sat silently on the couch and read something on his phone. He had little interest in what was happening. One of his former classmates decides to approach and find out why he is sitting away from everyone alone. Guy demands that Hanhao get up and go share his life experiences. Hanhao doesn't take his eyes off the phone to interject what life experience the guy is talking about. The guy mockingly asks that Hanhao tell him how Jen gave him horns. After all, it's very interesting for others to hear it so they don't step on similar rakes. The guy recalls that the girl was repulsed by a rich old man. Many of Hanhao's classmates began to mock him. Hanhao is pretty pissed off by this and stands up and demands that the guy stop. The guy reminds him that they've been together for a long time and know each other better than anyone else, so there's nothing wrong with sharing what exactly happened. The guy stares at Hanhao, thinking that he has had a desire for revenge for a long time, and tonight will finally destroy him. The guy continues to taunt, adding that Hanhao doesn't have much money, so he offers his company a vacancy as a janitor, with a salary of 3,000 yuan a month. Hanhao pushes the guy away with words to calm down, because one more word and he'll have to answer for this. The guy looks at Hanhao angrily. He reminds him that he has a lot of people who will kill him. Hanhao offers to give the boy a try, since everything he has was given to him by his father. Moji comes closer and tries to calm Hanhao down. Shikin is also tired of listening to such arguments, so he asks both of them to calm down. The girl stands in front of Hanhao with a confident look in her eyes. The girl decides to ask if Hanhao regrets not dating her in high school. Looking away, Hanhao explains that he has nothing to regret. The girl looks at the guy once more, after which takes her gaze away. You can see the disappointment in the girl's eyes. The girl also notices exactly how Moji is the one holding Hanhao's hand. The girl decides to end it there, thinking that the club is too boring. She heads towards the exit. The guy doesn't understand why Shuki is leaving so quickly. The guy runs out after Shiki, still trying to find out where she is going. The girl didn't see a man walking by, so she crashes into him. The girl starts accusing the guy of not looking under his feet. Unwilling to continue listening to the girl's outrage, the unknown man takes her by the throat and lifts her off the ground. The unknown man demands that the girl repeat what she just told him. The guy tries to stop the unknown man with words to let go. At this moment, Hanhao is sitting carefree in the club. A call comes to his phone. The guy doesn't realize what unknown number is calling him. Hanhao decides to sit down and try to hear what unknown person is calling him. Hanhao explains that he can't hear well because it's too loud where he is. The elder explains that it's a call and a reminder that 3 days have passed and they need to honor their agreement. Hanhao was confused, for he had completely forgotten about the promise. The guy tries to explain that he's pretty much done and the elder shouldn't worry. At this moment, Hanhao's classmate flies into the club with great force. The guy falls to the ground. His face was badly beaten. The unknown man, along with Shichi, slowly walks in behind him. Holding the girl's hands, the unknown man explains to the crowd that Shichi insulted him and called him blind. The unknown person asks if the others know the girl. The unknown person introduces himself as Fei Lun and also as a very decent person. The man interjects to ask which one of them is blind, him or the girl. Fei's face was badly disfigured and her eyes were small. The music was playing in the hall. Everyone in the club abruptly stopped talking. No one wanted to get into trouble. The boys had a hard look on their faces and didn't know what to say. Everyone preferred to just keep quiet. Fei, still holding the girl, states that all of her friends agreed with him and that Shichi is wrong. At this moment, Hanhao stands at the other end of the hall and addresses the phone loudly. The elder reports that he has arrived and is at the bottom of the club. The elder hangs up the phone. Hanhao was completely unsure of what he should do with this situation. At this moment, Hanhao decides to be approached by Fei with a question. The man wondered if Hanhao had any objections to his question. Hanhao turns his attention to the man, calling him very scary. Stepping back, Hanhao continues to call the man, referring to the man as a sea monster. Fei was furious, for his boyfriend had now insulted him. He starts clutching Shichi in his hands hard. Hanhao observes that an unknown man is holding his girlfriend hostage, which he was not happy about. The man was angry to death, for he had been insulted by everyone from an early age. The man tosses Shichi aside and re-specifies who the guy just called a monster. Man tries to kick Hanhao's leg with all his might. Hanhao calmly steps back, from which the man's punch simply misses. All the people in the hall were astonished by Hanhao's actions. The guy seemed to vaporize, and the man's punch went straight through the air. Fei himself didn't realize what had just happened. He was worried about where the boy had disappeared to. While above Fei's head, Hanhao continues to talk to the man and explain exactly what his concerns are. Guy asks that when Fei opens his mouth, he should also open his eyes. Hanhao lands a foot right on Fei's face with all his might. The man was stunned that some kid had kicked him in the face. Hanhao decides to end his speech on the fact that he still thinks Fei is scary. The man was mortified at such words, for he cared a lot. The system noticed that Hanhao was currently strong enough to handle an ordinary person. All of the boys' classmates were still scared from Fei. Shikin was astonished by such strength, for Hanhao managed to protect her while everyone watched in silence. The system sends an alert of a new achievement to lend a helping hand, for which is rewarded with 10 immortality points. At this moment, an elder also enters the club, and he takes note of the guy's excellent kung fu. The elder continues to praise Hanhao and also calls the guy capable. Hanhao holds out a small box to Elder Li and declares that this is the very medicine, namely a wound-healing orb. Guy explains that if the man has doubts, Hanhao can take him back and double-check everything. Elder Li takes the box and pulls out a balloon. The man thinks it's not necessary, as it was generous of the guy to decide to help him. The man puts the orb of wound healing in his mouth. Elder Li slowly swallows the balloon in anticipation of any effect. The energy of the stone begins to flow through the man's veins. Red energy begins to spark around the elder. The man explains that he has long missed such a pleasant sensation, a surge of energy. The man puts his hand on the guy's shoulder, calling him honest, so Elder Li asks him to call him with any problem. At this moment, Fei tries to get to his feet. Holding his face, the man couldn't ask Hanhao for his words. The man jumps to his feet and runs at Hanhao, yelling that his boss won't forgive the guy for insulting him. Elder Li becomes Elder Li in front of the guy. He wasn't happy with some freak threatening Hanhao. With tears in his eyes, the man demands that they stop calling him ugly. The man wasn't willing to let it go that easily. Fei couldn't bear such a serious insult. The man declares that he is not Fei Lun if he doesn't defeat all the offenders that night. Elder Li looks nonchalantly at the bulky man. Fei does her crowning fist punch, but Elder Li manages to stop it with just one finger. The man's hand rested on his finger and was unable to overcome such a powerful technique. Fei was covered in sweat. He couldn't understand what he should do next. After all, the old man was many times stronger than him. Headman Li asks him to tell Boss Wu that if he decides to lay a finger on Hanhao, he will have to deal with Li Tianhao. Headman Li stares angrily at the man, only one word read in his eyes: leave. Fei was greatly frightened by Elder Li and so immediately decides to run away. With a smile, Elder Li says goodbye to Hanhao, not wanting to alarm him. Hanhao says goodbye to his new friend. Hanhao remarks that the wound-healing orb worked quickly and he should use one himself. The system reminds him that it had said that before. On the boy's shoulder, one of Hanhao's classmates places his hand. The beaten guy apologizes for today's Sora, and from today and forever he decides to call Han Hao his brother. The guy also adds that he's handing over a VIP card to a spa run by his family. Han Hao remarks in thought that this is exactly what he calls reshoeing in flight. Guy also adds that if Han Hao decides to invite someone over for dinner, they should be the ones to go to. Shikin slowly approaches Han Hao and without further ado decides to kiss him. The guy with a bruised face was amazed that the girl was kissing Han Hao so easily. Everyone present was equally surprised at this turn of events. One of the guy's classmates clarifies why those are in such a hurry and do everything in the club. Moji couldn't believe what she was seeing. She was simply in a stupor. Han Hao bounces back against the wall from such a thing with clarification of what the girl is now trying to do to him. A blushing Shichi declares that from now on, Han Hao is her husband and she won't give up so easily. The girl turns around and heads for the exit. The system decides to add that the guy's soul is too sinful, also adding that the biggest attraction will remain strength and power. Han Hao couldn't move away from the girl's kiss. The guy states that he has little interest in anything right now, especially self-development. Han Hao appeals to Mojo that it's late enough and they should leave. The girl nods approvingly, but different thoughts went through her mind. At this point, the unknown man in his office learns that Boss WU's man has been greatly insulted. The man thinks he won't have to get his hands dirty. The man smirks at what he heard with the words for all agents to keep watching and find out all the information. The next day, Han Hao was at his villa. Without explanation, the guy heads for the exit. The girl tries to ask Han Hao who exactly has arrived. The guy explains that his mother's friend has arrived, and so he will be busy throughout the day. The girl tries to say something to the guy, but he silently closes the door and goes about his business. The girl remembers that she still has to go to work, but she couldn't do that since she promised Han Hao that she would only go out with him. Han Hao arrives at Qingshui Airport to pick up a woman. A guy is walking through the airport, at which point a familiar voice starts beckoning to the guy. The woman greeted the guy, as it had been quite a while since they had seen each other. A girl named Wang Shikin was also standing next to the woman. The woman explains that she decided to take Shikin on the trip as well. The guy explains that the woman is a good friend of his mother's, so he will definitely help them in any way he can. Han Hao extends his hand and offers to help the girl with her luggage. The girl asks not to help her because the guy looks too rustic and it could ruin her image in the eyes of others. At this point, the woman takes the girl by the arm and pulls her aside. The woman asks to stop talking to people like that. After all, they came specifically to see Han Hao. The girl explains that she doesn't like the guy, and she doesn't want any suitors, especially lowlifes like Han Hao. The woman explains with a smile that the girl has a temper and he shouldn't take everything personally. The guy was confused after hearing that, especially that the woman calls it a character. The guy explains that his aunt will be able to stay with him for a few days, and in the evening he has made reservations at a restaurant where they can have dinner. The girl mockingly clarifies which house they are talking about because they will have to sleep on the couch, and since they have too much stuff, they still need to book a hotel room. The woman repeatedly asks the girl to calm down and stop being so sarcastic. The girl takes her head out the window. The guy talks to the system and explains that his mother has been trying to match him with his aunt's daughter for a long time, and now they've decided to come after all, which doesn't make Han Hao very happy. Han Hao remarks that even if Shikin doesn't like him, he has little to lose because of it. The system throws up a new secret assignment with the goal of making Wang Shikin fall in love with him. The guy couldn't understand why the system issued such an idiotic assignment. The system briefly replies that it is without options. The system asks not to worry, as it will realize when the task is complete. The system talks about the sympathy system that only Han Hao can see. When the heart reaches 100 points, then the mission is considered completed. As they pull up to the house, the guy explains that they have arrived at his house. The woman and the girl walk out in front of the mansion and take a closer look around that one. The woman was amazed that the guy had gotten such an expensive house in the last year. Han Hao confirms that this is his house. The girl, to her mother's anger, adds that this house fell from the sky. The girl believed that the guy was renting the house. Han Hao remarks that sympathy points are taken away even when he does nothing. The guy invites her inside the house. He asks her to wait while he pours water. The woman decides to look inside the house. The guy brings 2 glasses of clean water. The woman asks the guy to sit down next to her, much to the guy's amazement. Sitting in the middle between the woman and her daughter takes away another 5 sympathy points from Shikin. The woman pretends to remember the forgotten item in her suitcase, then slowly heads towards the exit from the room. The woman winks and asks the couple to sit and talk while she is away. The woman smirkingly leaves the room. Shikin was still unhappy with Han Hao's presence. The guy was embarrassed and didn't know what to say to the girl. Shikin didn't plan to start a conversation with the guy. Above the girl's head, sympathy points are quickly starting to be taken away. The guy can't figure out what to do. The system is already poking fun at the guy for his stupidity. The guy lowers his gaze and begins to ponder. Han Hao decides to make a good impression on the girl. The guy turns to the girl and starts smiling without any words. The girl felt disgusted at being next to Hanhao, causing the sympathy points to continue to be taken away. In her thoughts, Shikin was greatly embittered at the guy's behavior, calling Hanhao a pervert staring at her body. Hanhao held his head in despair, for the sympathy points were decreasing even more rapidly. The guy took a face to remember any useful pickup videos, because he needed to save his position and complete the assignment. The guy opens his eyes wide. He remembered the very thing that was supposed to save him in dealing with the girl. The guy decides to approach the girl and find out what he likes more, cats or dogs. Above Shikin's head was the -50 sympathy point mark. The girl, not realizing the catch, decides to clarify why the guy is asking, but still replies that she likes dogs better. The guy laughingly barked back a few times, waiting for a positive reaction. There was a strange silence in the room. The girl continued to just stare at the guy. Hanhao's situation was in a sad state. A girl with a smile calls a guy a creep. The sympathy score has dropped to its maximum negative value. The guy was covered in ice at this. Hanhao didn't know what he should surprise the girl with. The girl, unable to be around Hanhao anymore, decides to leave. The system adds that such behavior is too risky and should not be repeated at home. The guy couldn't figure out why in the video all those jacking up things worked. The system thinks it would be weird if it actually worked. The guy decides to make the call, as he realized he couldn't do it alone. Hanhao calls Mr. Lee and asks him for a small favor. The guy gets up from the couch and asks his aunt and Shikin to go to a restaurant with him. The guy adds with a smile that their car is already parked outside the house. The woman was glad that Hanhao had called a cab in advance. The guy points to the exit and figures he can't torture his auntie with a cab ride forever. At the entrance of the villa was a luxury limousine amidst numerous rose petals. The man standing beside the limousine invites Hanhao, because the wine has already been poured into glasses, and they should go. The woman was stunned by such an unusual gift. Shikin was also quite astonished. In her thoughts, the girl noticed that Hanhao was trying to surprise her, and it shocked her. After everything, 50 sympathy points were added above the girl's head. The man explains that the wine is a 2002-year-old collector's wine produced in France in the Burgundy wine region. Sitting in the limo, the guy notices that the taste is mild with a long aftertaste. Hanhao suggests that the rest of us also appreciate such an exquisite drink. The woman was amazed that Hanhao knew about wine. Hanhao was embarrassed and explained that he knew a little. The girl continued to think that Hanhao was faking it, and he planned to wait for it to be over. 20 more sympathy points were added over Shikin's head. The guy realizes that the girl is saying one thing but thinking something completely different. Hanhao was glad he had memorized this phrase from the sommelier. The limo pulls into the grounds of Elderly's restaurant. The woman clarifies if it's too expensive, but Hanhao explains that those who do not need to worry. The girl's sympathy increases by another 20 points. The girl was amazed at how luxurious the restaurant seemed. Shikin's attention was distracted by something else. A small puppy walked in front of the car. He was so weak that he was moving around by force. Coming out at the entrance, the guy invites the girls to come with him. There was a waiter at the entrance. The man standing at the entrance asks Hanhao to show his membership card. Hanhao realized that Zhao Yan had already given him this card, and if it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have even come to this restaurant. The guy realizes he forgot this card and is now in dire straits. The girl adds with a sneer that the guy doesn't have that card and he shouldn't break the comedy. Hanhao begins to kindly communicate and explain that he forgot his card, and asks to still let them pass while the driver goes and gets the card. The man at the entrance explains that it is forbidden to enter the restaurant without the card, no exceptions. The guy offers to buy this card right now, but the man was adamant. He explains that the cards are made by invitation only, and there is no other way for them to get into the restaurant. The guy demands that the man call his boss to deal with the situation. The man demands that the guy leave because he looks like a pauper and people like him don't belong in a restaurant. The woman tries to stop the guy and explain that it's no problem for them to have dinner elsewhere. Hanhao explains that he will not stop so easily. The man angrily clarifies if the guy is going to be disruptive. The man starts threatening to call security. 2 guards in black suits appear behind the man's back. The guy covers for the woman and Shikin, which makes the girl's sympathies start to rise to plus 15 points already. A man orders the guards to throw the guy away from the restaurant. An exhausted dog sits down at the entrance to the restaurant. A man at the sight of a dog calls the mongrel that came in another time. A man decides to kick the dog to get away from the restaurant. The girl was frightened by such a thing, for the dog could have been hurt by such a blow. Hanhao grinned at the end of their protest. Hanhao swings his foot at the man without further ado. Guy manages to stop the man with his foot, and the blow lands on Hanhao's leg. With a smirk, Hanhao states that the man should be more merciful to such dogs. The girl was greatly amazed, because of which her sympathy rapidly began to rise to 81 points. Without any effort, Hanhao scatters the guards and the man. All the attackers scattered to the sides. Hanhao nonchalantly looks at the people lying down. The girl was amazed at the guy's nobility. At this moment, Hanhao's classmate comes out and demands to explain who made the whole mess. Hanhao silently turns around to see who exactly is saying this. Guy observes Hanhao and invites him to have a cup of tea with him. The boy greets Hanhao, calling him his brother. Hanhao explains that he has not been treated very kindly and will probably have to leave. The guy starts yelling at his subordinates with demands to prepare a VIP room where his brother can have a proper rest. The man without further ado went to fulfill the boss's demands. The boy asks to be forgiven for such hospitality and explains that he will pay for everything himself. Hanhao hands the boy a dog and asks him to show his courtesy. The boy is trying to figure out what kind of dog Hanhao has just handed him. Hanhao explains that he is fostering the dog because its previous owner was irresponsible and abandoned it. The guy, not realizing what he should do with the dog, looks questioningly at the one. The girl laughed at the guy's reaction to such a strange gift. Sympathy also went up 8 points upwards. At the table, Hanhao remarks that even though they had gone through all the trouble, he liked the atmosphere in the restaurant. The woman is supportive, adding that Hanhao knows how to please a girl. The girl averts her gaze and also agrees that the restaurant is really not bad. Hanhao offers a drink to today. In the girl's eyes, Hanhao had changed a lot and looked more like her ideal. The girl was very confused and couldn't believe that the guy in front of her was the same guy. The sympathy points went up another 10 points and were at 99. The system picks up that the guy is just 1 point away from the finish line. At that moment, the guy gets a text message on his phone. The girl agrees to have a drink together, but she was still embarrassed by Hanhao's presence. The guy decides to open the message sent, and he was greatly amazed at what he saw. In the picture was Moji sitting on a chair. There was a bandage in the girl's mouth and her hands were tied. The message said that Hanha needed to arrive at Big Dragon Cove in the 15th hangar within 30 minutes, or something bad would happen. The guy gets up from the table with the statement that he has to go on an urgent errand. The woman didn't understand what had happened and why Hanhao had decided to leave so abruptly. Without explaining anything, the guy walks out of the establishment and closes the door behind him. Hanhao instantly arrives at the hangar of Big Dragon Bay in search of the 15th hangar. Approaching the hangar door, the guy decides to go in and solve this problem for good. Hanhao looks around and observes Moji sitting in the middle of the hangar. The guy at sight immediately begins to turn to that one. The girl through the gag tries to tell the guy something, but she doesn't succeed very well. The guy starts running towards the girl. Hanhao has arrived to rescue Moji. The girl starts waving her head, which the system notices. The system alerts to the danger behind the guy's back. Hanhao stops abruptly, and a large shadow of an unknown person appears behind his back. It was Faye. The man immediately rushes to attack and tries to stab Hanhao, but the guy manages to dodge at the last second. The guy out of anger calls Faye a cripple who only gets in the way. With a smirk, the man decides to explain that he's well prepared this time. The man abruptly turns around to face the guy and starts licking his knife for intimidation. Hanhao clarifies if Faye plans to hurt him by repeatedly calling the man a cripple. Faye doesn't understand why the guy is so cocky. Without further ado, the man decides to inflict damage not on Hanhao, but on his girlfriend. The boy could not have imagined such a despicable act. The guy immediately manages to react in time and gets off to a fast start. The place where the guy was standing originally kicked up dust and threw up shards of rock from such a jolt. Hanhao manages to stop the man with his hand. The guy takes the blade with his hand. The boy grips the blade tightly, making his hand start to bleed. The guy is visited by a strange feeling. He becomes disoriented. The guy couldn't understand what was happening. He slowly gets on his knee trying to get up. With a sneer, Fea explains that this knife is designed to exterminate immortals and all who seek immortality. There was a strange red energy glowing around the knife that stood out strongly. The guy realizes that the knife has absorbed all his spiritual strength and energy, and he is weakened because of it. The system requires the guy to immediately activate the chaos technique. From these words, Hanhao closes his eyes. The guy feels the energy no longer drain away. He realized that the chaos technique would help him in this situation. The system adds that if the guy had been more serious about training, some toy wouldn't have done him any damage. Hanhao decides to keep pretending with the words that his strength is leaving him and he will die soon. The system calls the guy a great actor. Faye mockingly demands that the guy continue to show off his power because his humiliation has actually come to an end. The guy struggles to raise his head and tries to say something to Faye. The girl tries to call back to Hanhao. She was very worried about the guy's condition. Faye approaches the girl and explains that the knife will soon completely suck out all his strength, and then Hanhao will be finished. Faye takes the girl's face and adds that the guy will continue to slowly agonize in agony. At this moment, Hanhao takes Faye by the shoulder and clarifies who the man was going to torture. The man doesn't understand where his knife disappeared to. He was also amazed that the guy could move after all. Faye demands that the guy give him back the knife, since it's his boss WU's favorite item. Hanhao starts waving the knife in the man's face. Hanhao remarks that Faye will be the one to get in trouble, since he's the one who lost boss WU's favorite knife. The man panics a lot. He offers to make a deal, and after the guy returns the knife to him, then Faye will never hurt the guy. Guy declares that he's not interested in that sort of thing and hits Faye with a U-turn. The guy kicks his foot into the man's face with all his might, causing him to fly off into the distance. The girl through tears hugs Han Hao. She was worried that the guy was really dying. The guy puts his hand on the girl's head and calls her silly because everything is over and nothing terrible has happened. The girl starts wiping her tears with a smile. She was in agreement with the guy. Faye was sealed into the wall. He was asking the guy to give up his knife after all. The girl thanks Han Hao for coming and saving her today. Han Hao decides to apologize for letting this happen. The guy offers to spend the whole day together. At this point, Shikin shows up with questions about what's going on with the guy and why he simply disappeared and left her at the restaurant. The girl gets into a pose and demands that the guy explain his act. The guy looks at the girl confused. He had completely forgotten about Shikin's existence, so also Moji didn't know her. The boy notices that the number 9 is starting to change into something. Han Hao assumes that he will not be able to fulfill this mission. Han Hao was confused, for he had been saving up all the points for too long. The guy looks surprised at the sympathy index, which was the maximum number. The mission counts as completed. The guy gets 30 points of immortality and unlocks new items in the store. The girl sighed confusedly. He couldn't understand where Han Hao had run away from her. In Shikin's eyes, Han Hao was perfect and especially handsome. The system adds that apparently this is love, but he is not a good judge of women and will not be able to help in any way. The girl finds Han Hao and looks indignantly at the one. The boy checks with the system to find out which one is next in question. Shikin and Moji simultaneously ask Han Hao who they are. Han Hao looks away in confusion, not knowing what to say. Without coming up with anything, Han Hao replies simply that they're both his good friends. Shikin reminds her that Han Hao booked a limo for her today, and also invited her to an expensive restaurant. The girl still asks for something to say about it. Not knowing what to say, the guy looks at the girl with a confused smile. Auntie Han Hao greets the boy, for he has already returned home. The guy tries to explain that since Zhu is a good friend of his mother's, he should have taken good care of them. Han Hao clarifies that maybe the woman misunderstood him. The girl was perplexed by the guy's words. She tries to find out why things happen like this. The woman tries to find out from her daughter what happened to her. Han Hao assumes that the girl is very tired and should rest. The guy looks away, realizing that he managed to get out of it, even though it was a hard slip. The next day, Han Hao went with Moji to the Radiant Business Center. The girl clarifies why the guy invited her here. The guy explains that the girl's clothes are outdated, and they should buy something newer. The girl grins sweetly in response. A guy notices a large number of people, assuming there is an event coming up. Looking around, the girl notices something. Pointing her finger, Moji tries to get Han Hao's attention as well. The girl turned her attention to the signage of the large stone games. Han Hao remarks that a stone games festival is being held in a large room. The girl doesn't understand the essence of the event, so she asks if it is legal. With a smirk, the guy calls the girl silly and explains that of course it is allowed. The guy adds that it's called risky investing, where you try to find out if there is jade in the stone or not. The girl listens attentively to the guy. The girl decides to ask if she has to saw the stone to find out. Han Hao explains that there is no technology in the world that can detect the jade inside the stone, so people try their luck. Guy adds that in this art you can lose it all or get rich in one time. The system notes with a smile that since technology can't see, doesn't mean Han Hao can't see. Han Hao agrees, for he has a system to help him. The guy decides to use an amulet of X-ray vision and views all the stones with his eyes. Guy examines each stone and realizes that there is too little jade at this table. The man offers to try his luck and purchase a single stone. The girl points to one of the rocks and asks the guy to look closely. The girl shows a stone that had some jade on the outside. The guy also notices a green glow, assuming he got a little bit off while carrying it. After looking through the stone with his X-ray vision, the guy notices that all of the jade in the stone has already been drilled out and filled with something else. The guy takes this stone and another one. Han Hao notices that they have different weights. Several men turn their attention to Han Hao's statement. The salesman asks to leave the guy guessing and make up his mind whether to buy the stone or not. The guy explains that he plans to buy, but not the offered stone. Han Hao remarks that everyone knows about the dirty tricks, but no one exposes them, because there could be trouble. Han Hao continues to pick out the stone with the words that the man will not be able to guide him. The guy pulls out one stone with the desire to acquire that one. The man was outraged that the guy wasn't picking out the stones, but was price gouging himself. The guy smirkingly declares that the money will appear after the man saws that stone. The entire crowd comes to watch the newcomer stone sawing, all discussing Han Hao's inexperience and naivety. Han Hao smirked as he looked at the cutting of the stone, for he knew what was inside. The stone turned out to be completely full of jade. No one could believe what they saw, for it was a very expensive specimen. The girl cheered Han Hao for his luck. The boy was also approached by an unknown man. The man wished to purchase the Han Hao stone for 200,000 yuan. The girl was amazed that Han Hao was being offered 200,000 for such a small stone. Han Hao didn't know what to say. At this moment, a guy's voice came from behind the man's back. He was explaining that it was not noble for Mr. Lee to act. The guy explains that a stone of this quality is worth at least 500,000 yuan. The man became very nervous. The man with a frightened face adds that he was just about to offer 500,000 for this copy. Mr. Lee transfers the funds to the guy's card, which Han Hao notices. Han Hao shows respect and thanks the guy. But in his mind, he already knew that the stone was worth more than 200,000 yuan. The guy asks not to be thanked, because he has long been pissed off by such cadres profiting from newcomers. With a laugh, Han Hao adds that the man he bought from is just one of those. The guy clarifies that Han Hao knew everything, but bought the stone anyway. Han Hao chalks it up to serendipity and his extraordinary luck. The guy suggests that Han Hao look at a couple more unusual stones and test his intuition. Han Hao agrees with the guy. There were other stones on the table, but more expensive ones. Han Hao also remarks that these are quite good stones, but he planned to single out the best one. Han Hao stops on a rock in the middle, assuming the one in the middle is the most expensive of them all. The guy observes a large cluster of jade inside the stone, which will be worth at least 2 million. The guy asks to provide him with a selected stone for sawing. The girl reminds him that he has 300,000 yuan with him, specifying the method of payment, card, or cash. The guy holds Han Hao's shoulder and asks his friend not to worry, because he will pay everything himself. Han Hao already realized that he would have all the money in his pocket. Everyone watching was amazed that Han Hao was able to find out where the jade was again, and it was so expensive. One of the men offers to sell him the stone for 2,300,000 yuan. Han Hao agrees to sell the stone to the man, but the guy also adds that he is selling the stone. Han Hao reminds him that it's his rock. The guy doesn't quite understand what this is all about, since he's the one who bought the stone with his own money. The guy grinningly reminds her that he was the one who paid the money to buy the stone, and therefore his money. The girl returns and hands the guy's card back. Gritting his teeth, Han Hao adds that if the stone turned out to be empty, he would pay, and if with jade, he would take it. Han Hao remarks that the guy has made good money. Not wanting to continue listening to Han Hao, he leaves with the words that he needs to visit the auction as well. The whole crowd begins to taunt Han Hao, for he has been cheated out of his money. The girl asks Han Hao if he's okay. The girl asks Han Hao if he's okay, but he smirks because he's been scammed. Han Hao planned to play more stone games with Lee until the end. Mr. Lee is on his way to the auction as it is due to start any minute. Several guards escort the man. The girl at the entrance informs Han Hao that a deposit of 2 million yuan is required to participate in the auction. Moji doesn't understand why so much money is needed. At this moment, Han Hao was wondering where he could get 2 million yuan. The guy comes up with a plan and asks the girl to follow him. Mojo silently follows Han Hao. The girl at the entrance does not understand why it is a minute matter for the guy. After all, the amount is not small. At this moment, another stone was being sawed in the hall where the stone games were being held. The man was puzzled by what he saw inside his stone. There was nothing in the stone. It was completely empty. The man who sawed the stone explained that this happens quite often. The man takes his head and suggests that the stone games are not for him at all, for he has failed to win anything in 3 times. At that moment, Han Hao walks in and asks everyone to disperse, for he has come back to play stone games. The guy asks to have all the rocks he's holding at the moment sawed off. The whole crowd was not happy, for they also wanted to participate in the stone games. The man who lost 3 times before is yelling at Han Hao. He reminds him that this is not a market, but a stone game where people are looking for jade. Han Hao doesn't pay attention to him, but tells him that he bought these stones for 500,000 yuan. The man was very upset. He realized that it was impossible to get rich in the stone games. After all, if it was so easy, why did all people go bankrupt? After sawing the Han Hao stone, the man was surprised to find jade inside. This was the 4th stone that Han Hao sawed, and it turned out to be jade. Han Hao asked for absolutely all the stones to be sawed. Jade was found in every one of them, much to the amazement of the crowd. The man couldn't understand how Han Hao knew where the jade was every time. The man wanted to know where the guy came from. Han Hao decides to call everyone to buy jade, and Moji asks to accept money. The girl had no idea how much money they would have now. A crowd of like-minded players were very unhappy about the beginner's luck. A lot of people went broke because of stone games. Another part of the crowd marveled at such luck and wanted to purchase the jade specifically from Han Hao. The guy presented all his goods with a smile and asked us to approach him one at a time. Funds began to flow into Han Hao's card. Everyone was able to purchase a jade stone. In the end, Han Hao sells all his stones and earns 4 million yuan from it. The girl was interested in how Han Hao always knows where the jade is. Han Hao decided to ask with a smile if the girl was sure she wanted to know how he guessed. The girl loudly declares that she really wants to know exactly how he does it. The man, who had lost several times before, was eager to learn Han Hao's secret to success. The boy didn't understand who this man was and what he wanted from him. The man holds Han Hao by the shoulders and asks him to teach him stone games. Han Hao agrees, but first asks him to let him go. The guy figures out how he can explain the secret of success. Hanho explains that you don't need to look at the appearance of the stone, but just need to close your eyes and feel the heart chakra. The man listens to the guy carefully and accepts this as the truth. The man closes his eyes and tries to feel the very chakra of the stone. Hanho explains that the man needs to calm down and catch the energy particles of the jade. Hanho slowly walks away while the man stands with his eyes closed, trying to feel something. The guy goes back to the right floor, because in addition to the auction, they needed to look at one more place. Hanho explains to the girl with a smile that this method is secret because no one knows it. The girl clarifies why they are walking near the store, since they have to go to the auction. The guy reminds her that he already promised the girl to go shopping. The girl takes a closer look at the store window. Visiting one of the stores, Hanho declares that Moji can buy any clothes he likes. The girl picked out a few outfits and went to the fitting room. Hanho asks if the girl has finished getting ready. The girl pulls back the curtain and reveals herself standing on her heels. The guy was surprised at how beautiful a girl could be in an outfit. The girl is interested in Hanho's opinion. She was concerned if the man liked the way she looked now. The guy was very embarrassed, for he didn't know how to emphasize all the beauty of the girl. Hanho simply replies that Moji is very beautiful. The boy looked away embarrassed, because he had never thought that his girlfriend had such a beautiful figure. He was used to seeing her in ordinary, everyday clothes, unremarkable. In Hanho's mind, there is a shot of a girl in plain clothes standing across from him. The boy continues to sink into his thoughts in confusion. He adds that the girl has grown up a long time ago. Hanho is only now beginning to realize that they have grown very close during this time. The couple walks back to the entrance of the auction. The girl was amazed that the guy was already able to raise the required amount. Walking inward, the couple hears that the last 3 lots for today are scheduled to be drawn. The auctioneer notices that several new guests have arrived. The man reminds them that only stones from the stone games are being auctioned. The guy notes that he doesn't have to inspect the rocks. He can just take one look to see what's trash and what's worth real money. The man conducting the auction thinks the guy is good enough to make a joke, inviting him to take an empty seat in the hall. Hanho also helps his girlfriend to sit next to him. The man puts up a new lot numbered 131, the starting price of which is 500,000 yuan. All the people start shouting out different numbers and interrupting each other. Lee asks Master Wu what they should do with the stone. With a smirk, the guy points out that the stones inside the jade come in different hardnesses, so it's hard to tell them apart. The guy decides to approach Hanho and find out why he doesn't raise his price, since that's what the auction was for. Hanho explains that because of the deep crack, he's not going to bid. The guy was surprised, for he hadn't even paid attention to such a crack. The man standing on the stage announces the winner, and also announces the next lot number 251. The starting price of which is 800,000 yuan. Master Wu remarks that the stone was scratched and would not sell for much. The guy sitting next to him thinks that they won't be able to buy anything this year. At this moment, Hanho still decided to make his bet. The bet was 1,800,000 yuan. The guy thought he had decided to buy the stone. The man on the stage makes a report, after which the lot number 251 goes to Hanho. Hanho decides to shout that he is ready to open the stone in front of everyone. The man on the stage decides to invite his workers to open the stone and show it to the people. The man turns on the TV and shows the Hanho stone being sought at the moment. Cutting the stone in half, the man notices that it is ice jade, and it was absolutely pure without any impurities. Master Wu couldn't believe what he saw. After all, the stone was worth at least 10 million yuan. The guy couldn't understand how Hanho was constantly guessing. The man decides to present the last lot numbered 378, the starting bid of which is 2,300,000 yuan. The stone was quite weighty. Everyone in the audience immediately started raising their hands and trying to interrupt each other. Master Wu believes that any price under 8 million is acceptable to them. The guy agrees with his master. Hanho decides to raise the price to 3,500,000 yuan. The guy immediately started interrupting the guy to point out that most likely Hanho knows what is in the stone again. Hanho raises the price again to 4 million. The man on stage remarks that Hanho has enough assets to take the lot further, even though he has a rather expensive stone. The man adds that Hanho is no longer authorized to take part in the auction and add prices. Hanho to clarify whether he can continue to participate in the auction if he proves that he has enough assets. Hanho stands up from his table and adds that he arrived today with a small amount for fun. The guy claims that he has a villa in the Huangshu area and that it's worth over 100 million and is one of his many assets. Hanho asks him to stop embarrassing him in front of the girl he loves because he always gets what he wants. The girl was embarrassed that the guy was saying these things. The guy sitting with Master Wu was also surprised, for Hanho was more like a redneck without any money. Master Wu learns from his men that a couple minutes ago, the guy opened a dozen stones and all of them contained jade. The guy sitting next to him was also surprised. The man on the stage apologizes. and also takes into account his bid of 4,200,000 yuan bid. People continue to try to outbid Han Hao. With a serious face, the guy adds that he always achieves what he wants. Han Hao stands up from the table and pronounces that this stone will be the best jewelry for his girlfriend. So the guy makes a bet of 100 million yuan. The whole room fell silent. No one could believe that the guy was willing to give 100 million for a rock. The man on stage starts counting down the end of the lot. The guy sitting next to Master Wu raises his number, calling out a bid of 100,500,000 yuan. Master Wu says you can't bet that much money. The guy says that since Han Hao guesses a lot, he should still be outbid. The guy was trying to humiliate Han Hao in front of everyone because it's not acceptable. Han Hao, unwilling to stop, raises the bet of 120 million yuan. The guy, without admitting defeat, also raises the bet to 120,500,000 yuan. Han Hao had little interest in the guy's desire. He wanted to beat all those assets out of him, so you raise the bet another 140 million yuan. With a sneer, the guy doesn't want to stop. He makes a last bet of 150 million yuan. With a smirk, Han Hao sits back in his chair and sighs, for his plan worked, and the guy turned out to be a lot stupider than he thought. The countdown comes to an end and the lot goes to the guy. He scoffs at Han Hao's defeat, for he was unable to outbid him. Han Hao adds with a touch of irony that for him, Mr. Wang was much stronger, and it was impossible for him to handle him. Han Hao also suggests opening the stone and finding out what was inside after all. The guy declares that he will not be intimidated by such statements and is ready to open the rock right on stage. The boy begins to suspect that there is something wrong because Han Hao gave up too easily. After the sawing was finished, everyone was greatly distressed at what they saw, for there was nothing inside. After the last lot was finished, all the people slowly made their way towards the exit. The man on the stage announced the end of the auction. Han Hao decides to approach the guy calling the stone promising, but also adds that other than Mr. Wang himself, no one is to blame. The guy realizes that Han Hao will do it on purpose and sets him up with the purchase of the stone. Han Hao pretends he doesn't know what he's talking about because all of the failure is on the guy's shoulders. Han Hao also thanks the guy for his hand, because if it weren't for him, Han Hao would have lost his life. Han Hao decides to give the boy his stone as a thank you. The boy doesn't believe that Han Hao wants to help him. Han Hao declares that he doesn't need a pointless feud with a smile holding out the stone. The boy doesn't believe in Han's good intentions, but still dares to reach out his hand to the stone. Han Hao pretends to accidentally drop a rock. The jade immediately shatters and the whole jade becomes unusable. Han Hao explained that it was quite pitiful after all. This stone held approximately 100 million yuan, but he didn't care. Han Hao hopes that the guy is not offended by him. After all, there is all the jade on the floor, and it is not difficult for Mr. Wang to collect it from the floor. Han Hao says goodbye to the guy and reminds him that he was not sorry to provide the guy with a stone for 300,000 yuan. The boy was greatly angered by Han Hao's actions. He was going to be further humiliated. At this point, the guy takes some weird rock in his mouth and swallows it. The guy pushes himself off the floor and moves swiftly towards Han Hao. The girl notices Wang running away and asks Han Hao to react. Han Hao notices at the last moment the very guy approaching his back with attempts at revenge. Guy throws a punch on the inside, but Han Hao manages to block the punch with his shoulder. Han Hao remarks that this is not human power and he has used something for the immortals. The system swipes that it was a life energy pill, and in an instant, it can concentrate all of the person's life force into a punch. Han Hao falls to the ground from such a blow. The guy angrily tries to deliver another blow like that, concentrating all the force in his fist. The girl decides to stand in front of Han Hao, blocking him with her body. The girl was afraid that Han Hao might die. Han Hao holds his side. The guy, because of the grave danger, asks the girl to leave. The girl reminds him that the guy was the one who cheated them first. Han Hao did it to make the guy feel all the pain. The guy doesn't know what to answer the girl on this one. Silently lowering his head, he was greatly disappointed. The girl was standing across from the guy, which made him very embarrassed. The guy lowered his gaze and saw the figure of a girl. This started to confuse him even more. The guy embarrassingly knelt down, not knowing what he should do next. Han Hao, through force, managed to get to his feet and blocked the girl's body. He clarifies if the girl is all right. Han Hao was extremely angry at the guy's actions. The system noticed that the life energy was no longer concentrated in the pill, and the guy started to gradually lose his immortal power. The guy doesn't understand why his nose started bleeding. The system adds that he doesn't know how the side effect of the pill works. Han Hao declares that even if there is the slightest danger to his girlfriend, he will not let her be harmed. Moji looks at Han Hao with loving eyes. Han Hao starts balling his fists with the words that now it's his turn to have some fun. At this point, the man who was selling the gambling stones. He tried to continue to deceive everyone about the authenticity of his goods. The man was offering another of his customers a chance to try his luck. But at that moment, Mr. Wang flies in his direction completely beaten up, which strongly discourages the buyer. Mr. Wang falls right on top of the man. He doesn't understand where the man came from. Also, two more strangers come to the man and introduce themselves as security guards. They suspect that the man is cheating and selling fake stones during the stone games. A man who has lost 3 times in a row before confirms that he is a fraud and is willing to testify as a witness. The man states that he has been sitting all day looking through his chakra at the stones and has not seen anything in them, so he is definitely a cheater. The guards were startled to hear what the guy was trying to say. They're asking the guy to come in and testify. At this point, an unknown man in the office gets notices that their stone games have been phased out. The man slammed his hand on the table because he knew who this was all about. A man wonders if it's definitely the guy's fault. Man resents that some guy can invade his territory. Out of anger, the man clutches the glass. It just bursts and all the wine spills over the table. Hanhao thinks they taught the guy a good lesson. The girl notices that the guy has changed a lot. With Hanhao explains that he's never shown that before, he's always been like that. The girl remembers what the guy was like at the auction. Hanhao clarifies exactly what the mojo is talking about. The girl's trying to imply that the guy said something about her when he yelled out. The guy can't remember exactly what he said at the time. He's trying to find out from the girl. The guy assumes the girl wants that jade. He assumes he can buy it next time. The guy smilingly suggests that next time we come up with something together. At that moment, a call comes in on his phone. The guy apologizes as he needs to take a call. The girl was confused by what he said. She didn't fully understand what the guy meant by the word together. Guy sees the phone number but hesitates to answer right away. The girl clarifies who exactly called him. His aunt explains that they left earlier this time because something doesn't fit, and she is very unhappy about it. The girl is still trying to find out exactly what the guy meant by the word together. The guy blurts out with his head held high that he finally remembered. The girl doesn't understand what exactly the guy could have remembered. The girl by the shoulders and looks and in the eyes. A guy looks right into a girl's face and asks her to make sure she says yes to him. The girl was very embarrassed. Her face flushed. She knew where this was going. Guy asking a girl to let him look at his term paper in a moment, the girl snickered. The boy just now remembered that tomorrow was the first day of school, and he hadn't done anything at all. The girl couldn't believe what she heard because she expected something else. She sighs with a smile, realizing he didn't mean it at all. The guy offers to go shopping again next time, and this time to buy Jade for the girl. The girl understands now what he is talking about and what place he was talking about. She refuses the offer and they slowly head home. The next day, Hanhao and Moji went to Tsinghua University. The guy had a Moji backpack hanging from his shoulders. The girls all looked over and looked at the couple. Moji walked behind the guy and tried to convince him to give her backpack to her since she could carry it herself. The guy declares with a smile that if it weren't for her, he wouldn't have made homecoming, so he's obligated to help her. At that moment, a yellow luxury car stops in front of the university. This doesn't surprise him one bit. He silently lets the car pass him by. Hanhao looks at who exactly is getting out of that car because the person inside was trying to get his attention. It was his former classmate who greeted Hanhao. The guy confusedly states that they haven't seen each other in a while and it's good to see him. Hanhao reminds him that they saw each other yesterday. Hanhao hears a car speeding up behind him. Hanhao manages to grab the guy by the tie and pull him away from his car. The car behind Hanhao crashes into his classmate's car and then they stare at each other in silence. The guy couldn't believe his car had been mutilated by a Hanhao ready to avenge it. Exiting the car, the guy calls the car a Jiao bucket, and such a car has no place in the parking lot. The guy was outraged because his car was ruined. He doesn't understand why he's doing this. The guy leans over to Joao. He thinks he's in his way. Jiao claims he's pouting because his family took all the business away from him. The guy claims that the business that Jiao's family owns can't lose with his... The guy, expecting something more, suggests that Jiao punch himself. He's sure the guy doesn't have the guts to do it. Galhao puts his hand on the shoulder of the squeezer. He doesn't understand what the guy wants to do. Hanhao asks the guy to move away because he crushed his briefcase. There was a pink briefcase under the guy's car. The guy says that if he needs the briefcase, he can push his car out of the way. Honeyhouse agrees, heading to the car. Everyone else decides to watch it happen. The guy kicks the car, which hits the others hard. This impact pushes the car to the side, making the backpack accessible. Hanhao lies down next to him and pulls out his backpack with his hand. Hanhao falls at the feet of the guy, saying he's hurting the poor students. The boy demands that Hanhao stop because it's not proper to pretend to be poor in broad daylight. Hanhao steps out of character for seconds and gives a thumbs up to his classmate, confirming that everything is under control. Jiao and the girl were puzzled. What is Hanhao doing now? The whole crowd is paying attention. Hanhao is yelling at the whole university that the rich guy crashed his car and now he's hitting him. The guy demands that he let go of his leg and stop messing around. Punching the Hanihao, the guy starts yelling back. Joe and the girl realizes Hanhao's plan and decides to start taking pictures of everything going on. Hanhao continues to pretend to be in pain. Jiao shows that everything's going perfectly according to plan. He keeps making videos. The guy's indignant that they're trying to set him up and it's not appropriate. Hanhao explains that the way he behaves, they decided to deal with him, and such a scum only has to be explained by such methods. The boy noticed that Han Hao started to knuckle his fists. He reminded him that his father is a member of the school board, and that he has connections with the rector, so Han Hao shouldn't joke around like that. Han Hao pretends to be scared of what the guy claimed from his father's position. Without waiting for a response from the guy, Han Hao charges his fist at the guy's face and adds that he's not scared at all. Han Hao also adds that the guy will have to pay for treatment and fixing the car, or else this video will be all over the university. On the same day, the council was held, and in view of the above, all came to a unanimous decision to punish the student to teach everyone a lesson. The man reminds that Han Hao will be penalized by expulsion from the university due to damaging another student's property, as well as damaging heavy things. Everyone present did not understand what was going on. Many supported Han Hao because the father of the major was in the council and it was clear that he was the one to blame. Han Hao sighs that we're all so obviously the guy who started it first. Han Hao demands that the guy show some evidence of his beating. The man declares that he personally knows Jan and knows him better than anyone else, because the guy is an obedient student and the one is not able to harm anyone else. And another man sitting next to him on stage confirms what he said. The man was outraged that the guy is demanding proof. The man thinks that since the guy is lying in the hospital at the moment, this is indisputable proof. The man wonders who allowed Han Hao to get up from behind the seat and demands that he get back in there. Han Hao explains that Yang crashed into his friend's car and started the fight and threatened him because his father is a university board member. With a smirk, Han Hao pulls out his phone and adds that he has video evidence. Everyone abruptly begins to whisper. Many of the students have already seen this video clip. The man gets up from the table and states that Han Hao is violating discipline and doesn't care about the rules of the university and is trying to slander an innocent man. A guy turns to the students. Is it right that a poor student can become a punching bag for the rich? The man calls him a little asshole and also thinks he's talking nonsense and he's not going to get off with just a suspension. Han Hao remarks that the man is trying to threaten him and that with such leaders it is better not to study at all. All the students start shouting and criticizing the words of the council member and calling the rector worthless. The rector was puzzled by the man's words. The man demands that the rector stop looking at him like that because the man got angry. At that moment, the elder walks in and wonders what all the fuss is about. Is the oldest interested in what's happened at the moment? The rector rises from the table and greets Mr. Whether the man repeatedly wonders why everyone is fighting. The rector is holding his head and doesn't know where to start. Han Hao supports the screaming crowd. All the students were unhappy with the rector's decision. The rector declares that the semester commencement ceremony is over, and Han Hao is requested to go to his office. Han Hao turns towards the rector with a smile. Elder Lee wonders who's Han Hao. Rector asks to go with him and deal with the stubborn boy, whether the elder is interested in this discussion. In the rector's office, a man tells Han Hao to listen to him carefully. He demands a public apology from the guy and that he's the one who caused the whole mess. The reactor starts threatening that he has leverage to use against the guy. Picking Han Hao's ear, Han Hao declares that the guy got what he deserved and he punched him for a reason. The councilman thinks the guy needs to be taught a lesson. Han Hao decides to use his X-ray insertion amulet and notices that the man is completely harmless and not seeking immortality. Han Hao realizes that a man's only advantage is his fighting prowess. Han Hao recalls that the man was actually looking for an excuse to expel Chao and that their families have been competing with each other for a long time, so it was the man who told the guy to crash into Zhao's car. The guy realized that everything was happening for a reason, and that he had interfered with the plan, and it had gone off track. Elder Lee pays attention to Han Hao's words. The man turns his hand away and says it's all pure slander. Han Hao mockingly states that he realized this from the man's surprised face. The man could no longer tolerate the insults against him, and decides to use martial arts. Han Hao was also unwilling to be on the sidelines and decides to respond to the fight. The man and Han Hao bumps palms together and there is a small surge of power. With a smirk, Han Hao declares that the man forgot to eat his porridge in the morning, or the man's body is too decrepit. Men couldn't bear such an insult, and he didn't understand why his stone pendant couldn't overpower the guy. Han Hao silently takes the man by the arm. Then with a slight movement of his hand, he twists out what's making your hands crunch. The man begins to shake with pain, because his arm was dislocated. With a little mockery clarifies if everything is all right. The man was even more angry and said that next time he would take revenge and finish the guy off. A man pounces on Han Hao trying to get in his face, but the guy manages to dodge. The system detects that the man is trying to attack Han Hao's internal force, and is most likely emitting chaos techniques. Guy already knew that, the system could have said that before. The man's hand was already near the guy's face, but he once again pulled away. And a man about mine walking away. The man also noticed that his strength was scattered, and he didn't understand exactly what Han Hao had done. The man lost his strength from exhaustion, falls to the ground, hightailing it with his hands in his pockets, looking at that one. The elder decides not to interfere in any way and simply watches what happens. Han Hao is dying because he had to take that hit and he doesn't know what would have happened if he hadn't done it. The system says the most he could do is scratch Han Hao. The man thinks that Han Hao has been tricked again by his boyfriend. Not wanting to continue to communicate with him, simply sends him away and walks towards the door. The rector noted that the man was not as strong as he said he was, and was ashamed that he could be overcome by some youngster. And yet he also decides to teach the rector a lesson. The man didn't know what he was talking about. Han Hao recalls that the rector used his official position to help his friend's dirty deeds. A man demands the guy get out of his office and never come back. Does the elder put his glass on the table and demand that they end with it? The man gets up from his desk and adds that the rector has thrown some kind of tantrum in his office. The rector runs up to Mr. Lee and asks him to ignore what's going on because he's just lying. The rector is sweating and trying to explain to the elder that he never handed over reconstruction work to his relatives. Han Hao remarks that he didn't mean that, but that the rector is ripping off all the students for money, and he couldn't even think that he was doing something worse. The rector tries to justify himself to the elders that it never happened and he should listen to him, but the elders think it's no longer necessary. The man recalls that he is the largest investor in this university and is very grateful for the help provided by Han Hao. The man looked angrily at the leader and added that he could have stayed in this whole ignorance with a bunch of parasites. Without waiting for the reactor's response, the man closes the door behind him. With a smirk, he also heads for the exit, noting that he's pleased to have someone behind him. Han Hao falls on his bed and notices that he is very tired. The system thinks it's too early to go to bed. Han Hao is interested in his system. What else can he do since he was kicked out of the university? Han Hao adds that since he was kicked out of the university, he has nowhere to go tomorrow and so he has time to rest. The system reminds him that he needs to seek immortality. I note that it's already chapter 15. He still hasn't practiced on his own. The system adds that he needs to practice his self-development and improve himself every day. Not wanting to keep listening to the Han Hao agrees with the system, Han Hao decides to focus and immerse himself in the study of immortality. He sits on the floor and tries to meditate, concentrating his power. The system supports the guy and says it's much better because he starts to concentrate all his energy and circulate it through his body. The guy closes his eyes and sinks into meditation. A guy falls asleep during meditation and wakes up after an indeterminate amount of time. The boy had a good night's sleep and noticed that it was already dawn. Han Hao didn't realize at what point he had fallen asleep. The guy noticed that he had gotten a little stronger and felt a lot better. The system will notice that if a guy continues to put more effort into self-improvement, he will become much stronger and reach a whole new level. The system adds that the guy should learn the first volume of chaos techniques, which will be enough for the end of the superhuman level in the future. He can buy everything with immortality points. The guy notices that looking for immortality points wasn't as easy as the system said it would be. The system believes that it is impossible to compare the study of chaos techniques with the usual office Plato, as here you get much more serious knowledge, and the ultimate goal of seekers of immortality is to reach the level of absolute enlightenment. The guy's trying to get back on his feet to notice that he didn't plan to achieve absolute enlightenment by practicing. The guy screams all over the villa that he plans to achieve free creation, so he can do absolutely anything he wants. The guy goes out on the balcony and flies above his villa in the air. He observes an unknown man approaching the house. The guy turns his attention to the man and watches as he waves to him. Was it the elder who greeted the lad, for he had business to attend to? Han Hao invites the elder into the house. The man wonders if the boy is practicing in the villa now. The man wonders if the guy has gone from superhuman level to soul awareness. With a smile, the guy declares he's still on a superhuman level. The boy asks what business the elder has come to his villa for. The man says with a smirk that it's no big deal. He's not here to tell you, just to let you know that he solved yesterday's problem and that the rector has already been removed. With a laugh, the elder adds that the boy now can walk as usual in class. The guy keeps the conversations going by thanking the elder. The man recalls another councilman trying to attack the guy. The elder adds that the lad should be more careful after yesterday, if he has any more problems, to go to him. Upon reflection, Han Hao confirms that he will be more cautious while at the university. At that moment, an unknown man was sitting in a dark room. The man wondered why his subordinate failed to teach the guy a lesson, because he wanted to know what he was capable of. The man was beaten and had a cast on his right arm and could not say anything more than that. John Doe wonders how good Hanko was. The man explains that none of his moves worked on the guy and he couldn't overpower him. A man gets on his knees and demands that his boss help him since Han Hao beat up his son too. The man silently exhales the smoke of his cigarette. Throwing the cigarettes into the ashtray, the unknown adds that for the stone wings for other aspects of Hanko will already have to pay the bill. The man asks if the pill his boss is talking about is the one that the chick originally had. Unknown explains that this pill was taken from one of their couriers and is being held by Uhonku, but because of the amount of publicity they have had to temporarily suspend the search. The unidentified man demands that a man contact Mr. Wu, but without mentioning him, and order hitmen to kill the hunks. But before he does, John Doe asks that the man find out where the pill is. At this moment, Han-ho is walking around the city. He had a phone in his hand and was talking to Moji, wondering what happened to her. The girl wonders if the guy is going to return to the university because his expulsion has been cancelled. The guy explains that he's not coming today because he has other things to do. The guy with the smirk explains that it's not every day he gets expelled, so he'll pretend he didn't know and come back tomorrow. In the room sat a strange man with a green haircut. He squinted at the entering Han-ho. Another unknown man sitting at the table was also watching the incoming Han-ho. A guy finishes talking on the phone and says goodbye to a girl. Han-ho asks for 1 glass of lemonade but no lemon, to which the waiter asks to wait a little longer. The guy pretends not to notice and just waits for his lemonade. At this point, he carefully tries to look around and consider all suspicious individuals. There was complete silence in the room as the hi-ho continued to wait for his drink. The waiter brings up the guy's order, to which Han-ho thanks him. Han-ho extends his hand to the waiter, but in the moment of stopping his hand, it seemed one moment odd to him. The guy noticed a strange moment because the waiter didn't even ask if he needed to sweeten or add ice. Not wanting to disclose everything clarifies whether he had previously worked in this establishment. Under the bar at that moment lay the real waiter. She was tied up. Something up the guy's sleeve glowed red. The waiter began to smirk. A small shuriken flew into Han-ho's face, which Han-ho immediately noticed. The guy manages to dodge at the waiter nonchalantly continued to stand across from him. The guy thought he'd disguised himself competently enough not to arouse any suspicion. Honeyhaw adds that since the guy made pretty scary lemonade, it made him even more doubtful. The guy also spotted a rather ugly man with green hair reading a newspaper. And there were 2 other thugs who kept stirring the sugar, which was suspicious enough. Hanho wondered, what was the purpose of them waiting for him in this establishment? The guy takes off his hat because they've been exposed. All 4 boys became one and called the Goldenwood Water and Fire 4 brothers. With a smirk, the older of the 2 adds that one man bought the contract on his life. Hai-Hu clarifies whether it was indeed ordered on A, to which he immediately receives an approving reply. Hanho states that he is quite weak and he doesn't understand why he was attacked. Hanho covers his face and asks, at least before he dies, that they tell him who ordered it anyway. The leader of the gang says that their professional ethics do not allow them to disclose the name of the customer. The green-haired guy blurts out that he doesn't even know who ordered them. Hanho wonders exactly who their boss is. One of the attackers claims that Horsehau can't know who their boss is. The green-haired one slips up and calls him Mr. Yu. The gang leader then beats him up and demands that he shut up. Green-haired tries to apologize to him. Hanho tries to remember who he's heard by a similar name. The ringleader says it doesn't matter because it's time for him to die. Hani Hao keeps making innocent faces and begging for mercy. Unwilling to listen any longer, the ringleader thinks he's deceiving them. He's an unusual man. The ringleader unleashes a large number of shurikens, leaving no chance of saving the Hulk. Hao didn't think they could declassify his perfect acting. Han Hao continues to dodge multiple streams of shurikens. Han Hao notes that the guy's aim is off, to which he grinningly replies that he wasn't aiming at him at all. Han Hao manages to raise his head and sees something strange. All the shurikens were all around him and surrounding him. He couldn't get out, for they created a kind of grid. Han Hao was completely surrounded, and one of the brothers asks the others to attack him. The guy in the hood offers Honey how to appreciate his high-quality craft superglue. Han Hao's feet were stuck to the floor. He didn't understand what he should do in this situation. The remaining guys decided to finish off the hi-hat with alcohol in a fire whirlwind. Both guys are setting fires and throwing weird fire products at him. Unable to resist, Han Hao silently watched the Molotovs flying at him. Bari watches as several explosives fly toward his head. The guy smirks, calling it a pathetic combo attack. Han Hao decides to stick his feet out of his clingy boots. He takes off sharply above the ground and rushes upwards to catch a strange explosive substance. Hanihel manages to catch all the bottles at the last moment without breaking a single one. The men couldn't understand how he did it. It was the first time they'd ever seen such a high jump. Han Hao reminds the shadow not to relax and watch his every move. Han Hao throws an explosive substance at a gang of mercenaries. It shatters and coats them all. One of the brothers fails to put out his lighter at the last moment. The guys notice flames forming around them because of the liquid. One senior among the whole gang manages to bounce off. He watches the others burn. At that moment, Han Hao is at his back, which startles him greatly. Han Hao clarifies if the blade in question belongs to his boss. The boy realizes that this is the knife that belongs to slay the immortals of Mr. Wu. One of the bandits is trying to figure out where the guy got Mr. Wu's sword from. Han Hao asks the same question of them as well. Han Hao decides not to end it there and takes absolutely all of the mercenaries' shurikens. Taking all the strands of shuriken, he begins to spin them above his head. Then, with a sharp movement of his hand, he throws it towards the mercenaries. One of the mercenaries was confused as to what they should do next. All the shurikens and barbs were launched directly into the crowd. The clothes on the pink-haired girl slowly began to tear. Hanhao remarks that he had just planned to achieve a similar effect. The rest of the mercenaries were amazed at the appearance of their so-called brother. Hanhao looks at the girl in silence. The girl says that's no reason to be happy because he hasn't won yet. The girl says she'll hold the guy while they have to contact Mr. Wu. Looking around, she doesn't see any of the mercenaries who came along with her. All the mercenaries were facing Hanhao. They were planning to attack him with all their might. The girl, through her tears, was glad they stood up for her. At that moment, Hani Hao appears behind the girl's back and asks if they remembered to ask his permission. The girl turned around frightened and found the guy at her back. All the mercenaries threw immediately at Hanhao. They demanded that the girl leave. The mercenary asks to be rescued from Hanhao. Hanhao is already tired of this kind of entertainment and decides to put an end to it. With one blow, he takes all 4 mercenaries to the street. The girl was lying soullessly on the ground, whereupon the guy comes over and covers her with his jacket. Hanhao calls the police and asks them to solve the problem of muggers lying in the street. The guy explains to the police that he has already subdued the robbers. They just need to apprehend them because they have completely destroyed the store. After a while, a reporter comes in and tries to interview Hanhao. After all, everyone was wondering how he was able to deal with the robbers. Hanhao tries to decline the interview as he was not interested. Hanhao suggests just taking a picture and stopping there. The guy specifies that you take a picture of him in a photo that makes him more handsome. The guy on the front cover of the paper was scary and moody enough. The unidentified man hits his image with his fist. The man was unhappy that his mercenaries had failed because it was the first time he had ever seen anyone try to oppose Mr. Wu's force. The head of the university committee tries to reassure his master that the firstborn is nothing of the sort. John Doe begins to question and suggest that the guy was originally Mr. Wu's man. The man offers to forget this guy for a while and take care of more important matters. Unidentified men demand that he leave his office. The man's pissed off and heading for the exit. He wasn't happy with the way things were going. The next day, Hanhao went to meet his friend Zhao. Guy suggests that Hanhao sit down at the same table and discuss important matters. Hanhao wonders why Zhao has become so polite to him. Zhao explains this politeness after the incident with Yanbin. The guy was glad that he had such a friend who stood up for him. That's why Zhao decided to thank Hanhao. Hanhao was surprised that Zhao decided to thank him. The guy clarifies whether Hanhao is interested in running his own business. Zhao offers to take over the karaoke bar, offering his money and valuable footage from the guy. Hanhao was astonished at such a suggestion. The guy notices that the karaoke bar is quite close to his university, and it is a favorable offer. After analyzing all the options, Hanhao decides to accept the offer. Zhao remarks that he didn't call Hanhao his brother for nothing. Hanhao adds that all the formalities are on the guy, to which Zhao immediately agrees. They toast to a new beginning. Having finished a business meeting and having eaten to the ground, the guy with difficulty gets to the villa. Without further ado, Hanhao returns to the room and falls on the bed. The system reminds him that the guy needs to practice, which makes Hanhao jump off the bed in fear. The system issues a task to pump the chaos technique up to level 2. The guy thinks that this mission looks like a bribe and that such tricks will not work on a person. With a smirk, the guy sits down in a meditation pose, noting that he'll earn immortality points fairly quickly. In the morning, the lad lies sleepy on the floor again. The boy struggles to wake up and opens his eyes. Hanhao walks out onto the balcony rather defeated. It's starting to piss him off that he keeps falling asleep while practicing. The system lying in his bed notices that the guy keeps falling asleep during meditation because of his weakness. The guy was pretty exhausted after a night of meditation, and he has no idea how he's going to practice in the future. Hanhao thinks it's too hard for him to train. His system is actually very good and he sleeps soundly. At that moment, the guy's cell phone goes into a call. It was Zhao. Hanhao asks what's up. Zhao shouts into the phone to come to him quickly. Hanhao has no time to talk to Zhao on the phone and assumes that he is in a hurry to open a new business. Hanhao quickly arrives at the karaoke bar. Standing at the door, Hanhao stares at the unobservant Zhao. Hanhao hears glass shattering at his back. The guy could not understand what was going on at the moment because he was all alone in the building. At that moment, a man from the head of the college and an elderly foreman enters the building. Hanhao was amazed at this encounter. He couldn't understand what they were doing in this place. A guy notices a ponytail on an older man's head. The guy compares it to a desert island, which makes him laugh a lot. The head screams that this is the master who can defeat Hanhao. The guy claims he doesn't understand why he brought the old man and offers to fight him. The elderly man claims that Hanhao doesn't know him at all. The people who came to the ruckus notice the master calls that Janbai. They really wanted to see a fight between the master and the guy. The master smugly asks the guy to admit his mistake and kneel before them. Hanhao clarifies, "What exactly is this master known for? I assume it's a common scammer." This made the elderly man very angry, which caused him to change his face. The man was greatly angered, and he slowly approached the lad. The master had no tolerance for such insults. The master finds himself next to Hanhao, then takes a sharp swing trying to scare the guy away. The guy's a stormtrooper, powerful enough and it could be disastrous for him. This time the master decides to take a full swing and try to hit the guy, which the Hanhao manages to dodge. The man abruptly changes the trajectory of his arm and attempts a low blow. From such a blow, Hanhao has to get up on his hands and jump backwards. The elderly man's blow hits the floor, causing it to crack into small pieces. Hanhao decides to keep his distance to study his opponent. The man himself didn't realize how the guy managed to avoid his crowning blow. Hanhao remarks that he is finally seeing the results of his training, and that it was not all in vain. Putting his hands in his pockets, the guy thinks that the master isn't as dangerous as he first thought he was. The master still thinks he's underestimating him in return. I throw a few point stones at him. The master calls it his own piercing point technique. The man adds that with this technique, he makes the organs suffer pain. Han Yihao begins to shake. The guy realizes that his body is numb, and he feels every pain. The system suggests the guy use chaos techniques to defeat the men. The older man thinks the guy is totally underestimating his opponents. Hanhao tries to endure all the pain and become stronger. The head of the university comes closer to the guy, and he notices that he got what he deserved. The man tries to punch the guy on the shoulder, adding that he's already done all he can do. At this point, the guy manages to use a chaos technique that makes him an order of magnitude stronger. With a slight movement of his hand, he guides his finger into the man's palm. This unremarkable blow causes the man to writhing in unbearable pain. At this point, the system counts the completed task as 36 immortality points. The system also notices that everything is on time enough, and the second level of chaos technique will allow him to win the battle. Hanhao wondered with a smile whether a man needed a second hand to poke around with it. A man through tears tries to explain that he needs a hand. At that moment, Zhao runs down the hallway as he realizes who has arrived in his building. On the way, he meets the secretary and clarifies why the girl notified Hanhao's arrival. The guy watching Han Yihao in the lobby is worried about his condition. Zhao tells the boy to be careful because Yan Tangxin has come with his teacher to take revenge. Zhao doesn't have time to tell his friend that he has prepared a black car. Hanhao is holding the same master. Hanhao looks questioningly at Zhao, not sure what his friend is talking about. The master and his ward lay soulless on the floor. Jody realizes how the guy managed to handle such a serious adversary. He was glad that the Hanhao was intact, and he managed to point his finger upward. Hanhao clarifies behind it, or Zhao called him out on it. The guy's trying to explain that there's a much more serious reason. Hanhao wondered what exactly it was that Zhu wanted to tell him. The guy explains that he's forbidden to tell outsiders, but after what he saw, he feels he must tell Hanhao. The guy pauses for a moment in his speech. He asks the guy to help him save his father. Hanhao says with a smile that he'll help Daddy's boy. Zhao says don't joke around like that. The guy tells the story of how there was a years-long war with Cheng Ye, and in the end his father managed to drive him out of town. But quite recently this man has returned and decided to massacre his father. This man is now the head of a group of assassins. Zhao is worried because his father has stopped drinking and eating for the past few days. And when they made inquiries about the man, they also learned about Yan Tianxing's plans. Hanhao assumes that's what his friend called him for, so he thinks he's left in debt. Hanhao agrees to help his friend and solve his problem. The guy was very happy about it. But the guy had something else to say besides that. The guy reminds that this is a huge organization of killers and he doesn't want to offend Hanhao, but it seems that he can't handle it. I don't want to listen to my friend Hanhao kick his ass because he's ready to deal with everything himself. Zhao offers to give his friend a ride home, so they set off in his yellow sports car. Zhao offers to stay at his place tonight. I assume Hanhao has no plans for tonight. Hanhao checks his phone. He's a little worried that Moji's all alone. At this moment, Moji was in the bathroom and completely failed to hear her phone. The phone lying on her bed was ringing vigorously. A girl comes out of the bathroom at the last minute and hears a beep on her phone. The guy was glad to hear Moji's voice. He asked if she was okay. The girl asks if Hanhao is coming home today. He explains that he's away on business with Zhao. Hanhao explains that he's worried about the girl, so he has sent several people to her. The guy says goodbye to the girl. At this point, Zhao decides to turn to Hao. The guy was interested in whether the Hanhao lived with the girl. The guy starts thrashing around on the road. He was very concerned in what kind of relationship he is in Moji. After a short while, they reach Zhao's house. It was a luxurious, huge mansion. Hanhao couldn't believe what he saw, for it looked more like an imperial palace. A guy walks his friend and introduces him to his father in the living room. A man greets his son and specifies who this young man is. The guy explains that this is a very good friend of his. He explains that this guy is supposed to help them. Hanhao greets the man kindly. The man puts his hands in his pockets and greets the guy as well. The man is grateful for the attempt to help him, but he realizes the guy won't be able to handle his case. Hanhao with a smile to at least spend the night at their place. The man explains that it will be very dangerous in their house this evening. Zhao confirms this and informs his father that Hanhao is a master of this business. The man sighs. In his mind, he doesn't believe some kid can help them with anything. Hanhao wonders what do people in costumes do. The man notices several workers doing something to the doorway. The man explains that the workers are installing cameras on all approaches to the house and in the house itself, asking him not to worry about his father because the defense system must be to protect them. The man's worried that this time she'll kill herself and try to get revenge on him. Han Hao decides to go outside and take a walk. Han Hao decides to check with his system to see if he has anything against the assassins. The system says it can't happen. They have absolutely everything, listing all the possible techniques. The guy declares that of course he will take the rack because it is most likely not disposable. The system explains that the trapper's rack costs 100 immortality points, which he doesn't have. Han Hao is angry at the system. After all, he has no choice. The system claims that the guy chose to be an idiot, and no one forced him to be an idiot. The guy adds that he knew the system wasn't that kind. Guy buys a shadow catcher scroll and spends 30 immortality points. A guy notices that his heart's seizing up like this, wasting money. The guy puts the scroll on the ground, seals it. The guy puts his hand on top of the scroll and tries to spot the strange visitors in their house. He notes that he can see absolutely every movement anywhere in Zhao Manor. The guy decides to go back to the manor and pick out an empty room. He wakes up in the middle of the night and he hears something strange. The guy decides to check out the whole area with his new vision. The guy notices they've made a moat underneath the estate and someone's already managed to get in. He watches as 4 men dig a digging hole and are already under the estate. The guy realizes that their target is the security room where Zhao is sitting. The boy abruptly stays in his bed and runs to help. For now, the Han Hao planned to show them all his strength. Han Hao reaches the first floor and sees the window to the guard room where Zhao's father was already located. The boy kicks out his feet indoors because he's come to help a man. The first thing he sees is Zhao's father's laptop. The man puts on the stop and turns his attention to the incoming guy. There was an awkward pause between the man and Han Hao. The guy was shocked at what exactly his friend's father was doing at such a serious moment. The guy didn't realize at what point they'd already managed to get into the building. Guy assumes the mercenaries decided to take a smoke break. Han Hao resents that they could have worked faster. The man closes your laptop and goes out to the guy. He's asking why he's in his office this late in the day. The guy tries to apologize for his intrusion because he didn't mean to disturb the man. The man explains that he was trying to stay awake because he was waiting for the killers to arrive that evening. The guy notices that they've already broken into the compound. The man assumes the guy was just scared out of his mind. He's a man. Explains that every corner of the house is under a security system. The man explains that if the unsubs had gotten in, they would have seen them on the cameras. The guy points his finger down, explaining that the camera won't be able to see what's going on underground. There is a shout and a small report from outside the door. The guy keeps talking to the man in his office. At that moment, 3 unknown mercenaries burst into the office threatening death. One of the men adds that this is the day he will kill Zhao. The guy doesn't understand why the mercenaries came in from the front door and then call themselves hit men. The men notice that Chung dared to come to his house after all. The mercenary explains that he's come to take his worthless life. The man claims he's a pervert who thinks about his wife and tries to kill him, calling the mercenary unconscionable. Han Hao starts to get into the details of this whole scuffle. A man tells a tragic story where he and his wife were separated. The man adds that the only person a woman truly loves is him. At that moment, the computer receives a call from the man's wife. Han Hao suggests asking for her opinion as well. The man responds to that immediately. The woman asks for more money to be transferred to her because she has run out of money on her card. While in New York, a girl declares that she didn't have enough money for all the entertainment and needs 2 million more. Noticing this, Chung decides to walk over to the monitor and also ask. The man tearfully clarifies what the girl feels for him and whether she remembers their vows. The girl doesn't understand why the man is with her husband. She explains that her name is Nancy, not Guixiang. The man was lost in the moment and didn't know what to say next. Han Hao adds that his legend doesn't match reality much. The man couldn't believe it was another woman. He didn't want to admit his guilt. The man pulls out his blade and decides to massacre Zhao. Zhao is unable to fight back, just stares at his killer. But all the blades fly into the regular table. Han Hao manages to cover Zhao's body. He assumes the man is completely unreceptive to him. The man is trying to clarify who the unknown guy is and why he wants to die as well. The guy claims the man's caused him to get hurt twice already. A man doesn't know what a guy's talking about, and why fool around? In his mind, Han Hao realized that he had spent 30 points on all this nonsense, which he was not happy with at all. The man claims the guy's had enough of life, so he's gonna fight him. All the mercenaries abruptly start pelting Han Hao with shurikens. A guy tries to cover a man with his body from a large stream of shurikens. Han Hao employs his signature chaos technique, after which he immediately tries to push all the shurikens back towards his attackers. The unknown mob of mercenaries quickly becomes defeated and falls soullessly to the ground. Chung is the only one left, sitting on the floor, unable to believe what is happening. The man decides to call security, so Chung won't escape. Han Hao suggests taking your time and seeing where the time goes. The man in his thoughts can't understand what the guy is talking about after all. They have already escaped. Han Hao adds that they should be careful of the earthquake. All the mercenaries are trying to rush down the tunnel prepared in advance. The tunnel abruptly collapses, and all the mercenaries fall underground. From the side of the building, Han Hao himself rises into the air. The guy doesn't wonder where the bandits are going in such a hurry, because he's in the building. He lands sharply on the ground all. The stone slabs start abruptly producing a small earthquake. The man couldn't believe what he was seeing. The guy adds with a smirk that it's better to kill them all together than individually. All the mercenaries lay in the pit pinned down by rocks. They couldn't move. The man slowly walks up to the guy and notes that they snuck into the house through the ground. And at that moment, Zhao runs outside as well as several guards. Han Hao notices that the man's guards are running a little late. The man thanks the guy for saving him, because without him, nothing would have been possible. Han Hao accepts the thanks and heads to the room to sleep for the rest of the day. The next day, Han Hao goes out to meet Zhao's father. The man is once again thanked for his rescue and decides to give a small gift from the whole family. The man calls it a sacred tree that brings people luck and also suggests that there are other uses. The system notes that this magical tree is a giant and it increases the effect of practice 100-fold. Han Hao notes that the stick looks quite interesting. System states that it makes no sense for him to cheat the guy. Han Hao adds that he doesn't know what the system has in mind. The system decides to explain that if the guy doubts, it's only his problem anyway. At that moment, Zhao enters the room. He suggests that the guy should head back to the city. The guy doesn't understand where Han Hao went because he knew he was in this room. At this moment, Han Hao was in an incomprehensible place. The guy clarifies the whole system of where he is at the moment. System explains that he is in a place where it will be easier for him to concentrate on practice. The system also adds that it's already set up, and to get the guy out of this place, he'll have to learn a new ability. The guy realizes the system caught him, and now he has to be in this place. The guy decides to waste no time and start practicing. He sits in a pose and starts meditating. The guy notices after a while that the stick isn't helping him at all. The system recalls that although the guy has become an immortality seeker, he still hasn't had time to work with the spiritual component. Han Hao reminds that the system said everything will be learned without problems. The system asks not to be picky about the little things. The guy re-explains whether he needs to master the ability to leave the place, to which he gets a positive answer. The system also explains that without the magic tree, it would take about a month. Han Hao shouted from the burrow. He was not happy with this arrangement. 3 days later, on another day when Han Hao was practicing, a golden glow could be seen. The guy once again sat and meditated to pump up his new skill. The system couldn't understand how the guy managed to master the ability in just 3 days without using a magic tree. At these words, Han Hao simply smirked. The action moves to Li Tianhao's house. The guy notes that the more money you have, the farther you live. Elder Li greets Han Hao. He was happy to see him. Han Hao thanks them for their hospitality and for inviting him. The man considers it a mere trifle. Man explains that the girl is together with Xiao Shuang. The man recalls that he has a granddaughter that he previously saw. The boy remembers the girl in Elder Li's office. The man asks the guy to invite both girls over while he orders tea to be prepared for them. A guy is walking down the hallway and doesn't realize which door he should go in. Han Hao notices that one of the doors was open. Deciding to test his luck, Han Hao drops by in search of Moji. Elder Li's granddaughter was in the room. She was changing her clothes in her room. The guy was amazed at what he saw. It wasn't what he expected. The girl blushed with embarrassment, for the guy kept looking at her. Han Hao abruptly leaves the room while apologizing. The kettlebell flew after him. The kettlebell hit the railing, causing it to be badly damaged. Han Hao was a little frightened by this. At this moment, Moji came out to Han Hao. She was happy to see Han Hao. The girl was trying to find out where the guy had gone for all those days because she was worried. The guy explains that he had to go on a trip. The girl wonders if Xiao Shuang screamed. The boy averts his gaze and tries to say that nothing happened. There's a scream over the door which confuses the guy a lot. The girl notices that Xiao Shuang is the one screaming. She offers to check on her. Han Hao remarks that he's ready to go into the room, but it's not his fault. The guy notices the open window. Xiao Shuang was no longer in the room. The guy would realize that the girl had been kidnapped. Han Hao then heads to the window to see the kidnapper. Stepping out onto the balcony, Han Hao surveys the area. The guy's running his eyes around. The boy turns his attention to the departing figure on the road. It was a strange unknown man in a black cloak. The guy's looking at the shoulder of an unidentified girl. Without thinking, Han Hao jumps off the balcony and follows the kidnapper. The girl doesn't have time to say anything to the fleeing Han Hao. Afterward, she decides to shout for the guy to be careful after all. Han Hao, trying to catch up with the kidnapper, yells at him to stop. The guy adds that he won't let a girl be kidnapped in front of him. Guy explains that he won't back down and will run all the way until he catches the kidnapper. Unknown decides to stop and turns around in front of Han Hao. Guy assumes that Kidnapper Exhale has decided to take his fight. Unknown was breathing heavily because of the rush. He laughed back at the boy. The guy adds that if the kidnapper lets the girl go and brings her back, he'll pardon him. Attendees points the finger that he refuses this offer. The guy realizes that almost you're not going to, and that's why Hanhao she seems so brazen. Hanhao also wanted to test his new skills acquired while away. Hanhao activates his new ability, his hand becomes golden in color. The protagonist activated his magical ability called weightlifting. He grabbed a tree with his hand. Thanks to Hanhao's tremendous strength, was able to pull the tree out of the ground and lift it up. The guy easily held the huge tree on his outstretched arm and glared at his captor. The kidnapper was surprised. He said the boy was still capable of a lot. Hanhao raised the tree on his arm and prepared to throw it. He shouted congratulations to the kidnapper. The protagonist shouted that the answer was right and launched the tree with all his might. The kidnapper with the girl in his arms was able to dodge nimbly and the tree flew past. A man in a hoodie told the guy that he didn't belong to the Lee family. He asked why he was bothering him. The guy explained that Mr. Lee was his friend. For that reason, he wouldn't just stand by. The kidnapper angrily said that if the guy decided to help the old man, he would also deal with him. The protagonist pulled out 2 more trees and shouted to the kidnapper that he could approach. Then the guy threw 2 trees at the kidnapper with all his might. The kidnapper with the Xiao Shuang girl in his arms was able to calmly run away to the side. The protagonist noticed that the kidnapper abruptly began to move away from him. Hanhao looked around. He didn't understand where the man with the girl on his shoulder could have run off to. The main character noticed a huge rock lying in the woods. He ran up to it. Suddenly, Hanhao had a good idea on how the stone could be used. The kidnapper was running through the woods at top speed. He thought he was out of pursuit. Then the man noticed the protagonist appearing in the sky along with the stone. He shouted for the kidnapper to stop. And then the guy launched a rock from the sky. The kidnapper managed to run away in time. Hanhao said menacingly to the kidnapper that a huge rock could have smashed his head. The protagonist told the man that he's not going anywhere and can return the Xiaohuang girl goodbye for now. The kidnapper turned around and gave the protagonist a piercing look. He pondered his answer, after which the man launched the lilac mist towards the protagonist. Hanhao was surprised and a little scared. He didn't realize what the kidnapper had just used. Having cheered up a bit, the main character said that the kidnapper decided to hide in the smoke. Then the guy ran in the direction where he last saw the man and the girl. Hanhao stopped and looked around. There was only purple mist around him. The boy glanced to the side and saw the outline of a man in a black hoodie. Hanhao shouted joyfully that he had found the kidnapper, and with all his might tried to kick him. When the fog cleared, the protagonist noticed that the kidnapper had disappeared. Only his hoodie remained. Hanhao Grozno shouted to the kidnapper. Why was he hiding if he wanted to get rid of him? The system informed the guy that the amulet of X-ray vision would help him deal with the smoke. Suddenly, the lad felt as if he had stumbled upon something lying beside him. Hanhao turned his head and saw that Xiao Shuang, the girl who had been kidnapped earlier, was lying there. The protagonist was standing next to an unconscious girl. He looked around, looking for the kidnapper. The guy thought and realized that the girl's kidnapper couldn't have gotten far. Hanhao lifted the girl with his hand and shouted for her to wake up. The protagonist noticed that the girl was staring at him with a blank stare. He realized that she hadn't just fainted. The guy couldn't decide if he should continue the chase now. He decided to stay, as the girl was not feeling well at all. Suddenly, the boy felt as if his whole body had become mute. Hanhao wanted to lift the girl, but he couldn't. His body was numb and he couldn't move. Hanhao couldn't understand what had happened to him. The system informed him that the smoke around the guy was not smoke. The system informed the protagonist that very small insects were flying around him. The system added that the kidnapper had put poison gnats on Hanhao and they paralyzed his nervous system. A man came up quietly from behind. The kidnapper, he told the guy, he'd lost as soon as he burst into that smoke. The kidnapper told the protagonist that he wouldn't get away alive from the insect cloud. Hanhao turned to the kidnapper and asked him angrily, what was his purpose? The kidnapper approached the guy and said he had no special purpose. The man then grabbed the unconscious Xiao Shuang girl by the hair. The man grabbed the girl by the hair and said that he would bring her body to Lord Li Tianhao as a gift. The protagonist became angry and frightened after hearing words from the kidnapper. The kidnapper cheerfully said that he could finally avenge his older brother's murder if he killed the girl. The kidnapper's name was Xuan Xiao. His older brother named Xuan Hong was the only one in the family who could pass the poisonous insect charms on. But he was killed by the old man Li Tianhao. The younger brother asked the older brother, why doesn't he have the same talent for poisonous insect charms? Xuan Hong replied to his brother that he should be what he is. The elder brother told Xuan Xiao that he would definitely find a direction that suited him personally. One day, the family received the news that Xuan Hong was dead. The family's pride was gone. The younger brother heard that Xuan Hong had been killed by a man Li Tianhao from Qingshui City. The young boy was very angry. He realized he had to follow in his brother's footsteps. The boy found the direction his brother was talking about. He went with his friends to the cave. His friends said that inside there was a nest of poisonous insects. No one ever came back alive. Xuan Xiao replied to his friends that he didn't care at all. He was completely confident. The insects in the cave bit Xuan Xiao. As a result, he was able to control them freely. The evil charms of the Xuan family have been undiscovered for hundreds of years. Xuan Xiaogai realized that for the sake of his brother and for the sake of honor and family, he would do anything. After much agony and despair, Xuan Xiao was able to survive. He had mastered the most brutal, ferocious form of poison insect char. The kidnapper told the guy that he, along with the girl, is only the first step towards revenge against Li Tianhao. Xuan Xiao told the guy that he might not be able to hear him anymore since the insects on his body were paralyzing his senses. First, the protagonist loses his sense of touch, then his sight. Last of all, he loses his hearing. Han Hao realized that he can't feel anything anymore. The protagonist turned to the system. He asked the system to give him something. Han Hao turned fearfully to the system daddy to tell him something. The Xuan Xiao kidnapper at this time was looking at the girl he was holding. The man angrily thought to himself whether Tian Hao would finally pay him blood for blood. Han Hao felt as if hanging in space he was still addressing the daddy of the system. The protagonist asked for a daddy in the system to respond if he's here. Suddenly, the guy saw a bright light. The system daddy told him he couldn't have gotten anywhere since they were one piece. The protagonist was overjoyed when he realized that system daddy would help him. Daddy told the kid he wouldn't leave him while he was still alive. He clarified what was going on with Han Hao. After that, Daddy told the guy that his senses were paralyzed by insect poison, and he should do whatever he told him to do. Han Hao should maximize the circulation of Qi energy through his body. Then the protagonist will need to use the heat from the energy circulation while the kidnapper pulls the girl's hair. Xiao Shuang girl was completely unconscious. The man was pulling her with him. Suddenly the kidnapper sensed some very interesting odor he thought was delicious. The man turned around and saw the protagonist and realized the smell was coming from him. Han Hao looked at the kidnapper and asked if he liked the smell. He said it was a roasted insect. The kidnapper looked over and saw a pile of burnt insects lying around in the clearing. The man was surprised because the main character was able to wake up and was able to deal with the insects. After which the guy launched a rock in the man's direction. The stone flew close to the kidnapper's head. Han Hao wondered with interest what the man would do next. The kidnapper got angry. He pointed his finger in the direction of the protagonist. The man menacingly told the boy that he wanted to let him live, but now it was his hour of death. The protagonist pretended to be very frightened by the kidnapper's threats. Han Hao replied cheerfully to the man that he had heard such threats many times before. The protagonist got bold enough to call the kidnapper to come to him. The protagonist looked around and noticed that the neighborhood was empty and a man had disappeared somewhere. Han Hao angrily shouted after the kidnapper for playing a trick on him. The protagonist activated the amulet of X-ray vision to find a man and a girl in the woods. Thanks to his special eyesight, the boy could see through the trees to a house deep in the thicket. The protagonist noticed a man carrying the kidnapped girl Xiao Shuang on his shoulders. The protagonist headed for a house in the middle of the woods. Han Hao watched the house carefully. He realized that the man and the girl were here. The protagonist activated his physical skills and was able to leap to the second floor from his seat. A guy landed on a second-story balcony after a high jump from his seat. System Daddy advised the guy to take his time. Han Hao cheerfully said that the kidnapper is alone and everything is under control. The head player opened the door and entered the room. The kidnapper was frightened and surprised. The girl was still unconscious next to the kidnapper. The man asked the guy in wonder how he had found this place. The protagonist looked up at the kidnappers and shouted that he had nowhere to run. Han Hao looked at the kidnapper and said he was making him whole now. Suddenly the protagonist felt as if something had completely entangled him. Han Hao couldn't understand what had entangled him. It was something sticky like a spider's web. After that, the guy felt like he couldn't move anymore. His body started to go numb. The protagonist couldn't stand up anymore. He realized that the web had some kind of poison in it. The man grinned evilly when he saw the fallen guy. The kidnapper shouted to the guy that he was very easy to fool, and added that he had brought him here to show him a special surprise. Han Hao asked with a commanding voice at the man what kind of surprise the man wanted to show him. Then the protagonist was attacked from all sides by snakes and a poisonous insect. The kidnapper told the guy that he was preparing this surprise for the old man Li Tianhao, but he's sick of the guy too. The kidnapper told the protagonist that there's a very arrogant immortality seeker here. The man grabbed the guy and asked why he was so reckless seeking immortality should temper the mind. The protagonist screamed his last breath at the kidnapper to let him go. Then the guy raised his arm and grabbed the kidnapper's shoulder. He kept resisting. The kidnapper said he was in pain. He asked grudgingly, "Why does the guy still have so much strength?" After that, Han Hao's strength finally left him, and he collapsed unconscious on the floor. The man said angrily to the boy that only the grave could fix him. The poison had already spread through his body. The man angrily shouted to the guy that he should never overestimate his strength. He put his foot on Han Hao's head. The protagonist looked at the kidnapper with anger and hatred. He didn't have the strength to stand up. The kidnapper looked angrily at the boy. He said he was about to die as there was no escape from the lethal mixture of poisons. Suddenly from the side came a male voice. Someone was looking for the Hanhao guy. The kidnapper was slightly surprised. The protagonist realized that the voice belonged to Mr. Lee. He realized that the Moji girl could have told him. The man realized that Mr. Lee was able to find them quickly, and it was not yet time to fight him. The kidnapper looked at the Xiaoshuang girl lying unconscious and realized that he could not carry her away in such a state. Then he had an idea. The man carefully made a wound on his arm with his long fingernail. Blood began to drip from a small and fresh wound on the kidnapper's finger. Then the man walked up to the Xiaoshuang girl and grabbed her head with his hand, after which the man began to bury the blood from his finger inside the girl. The protagonist shouted at the man with all his might not to do it. The kidnappers further buried his blood in the girl's mouth. The guy yelled at the man to stop. Hanhao felt his mind fogging up. He thought the poison had taken effect. He begged the system daddy. The system daddy showed up and told the guy he wouldn't die while he was here. The guy was surprised that he could see Daddy. Daddy then calmly explained that they were now inside the system. The guy's body is lying on the floor unconscious. Daddy warned the guy that he may soon die a dangerous situation, and so the protagonist must make a choice. System Daddy can fix the guy, but then he'll become a regular person. The protagonist was suddenly transported to his childhood memories. The young Hanhao opened his eyes and saw a beautiful summer landscape in front of him. The sun was shining in the boy's eyes. He saw the fruit of some tree hanging above him. When the protagonist was a boy, the fruit of the neighbor's plum tree hung from the wall. None of the boy's friends could reach for the fruit, so the young Hanhao plucked plums from the tree. The guy ended up being the center of everyone's attention. He thought he was very special because of it. All the protagonist had to do was pluck the neighbor's plums and run away from the orchard owner. The kid always got good grades in junior high. He got praise from his teachers. The guy's goal was to accumulate as many different awards for his studies as possible. The protagonist always considered himself a special student. Young Hanhao couldn't just be ordinary. He was always different. Maybe the kid did have some undiscovered superpowers. That's what he thought in high school. At one of the contests, the host announced that they were inviting a winner named Hanhao. There was a sudden hiccup. The host told his assistant that he had the wrong paper. In the end, the protagonist received a consolation prize. The winner stood next to him at the awards ceremony. Afterward, the lad was unpleasantly amazed and mortified at such a blunder of his. Young Hanhao realized he wasn't worthy of the top spot. He never got over it. After the loss, the schoolboy realized what desperation tasted like. The boy prepared to eat the watermelon, and at the same time he realized one important thing. Consuming watermelon, the schoolboy realized that he was a very ordinary person without any special superpowers. If nothing unusual happens in Hanhao's life, he will spend his whole life as an ordinary person. Hanhao listened as System Daddy offered him to become a normal human in exchange for him fixing him up. The main character pondered the words of the System Daddy. He realized he had a difficult choice to make. The kid firmly told Daddy he was turning down his offer. Daddy was surprised to hear such a decisive answer. He asked the boy if he could think about it some more. Hanhao said he knows the difference between first place and consolation prize. The protagonist, given a choice, will never again agree to become an ordinary person. System Daddy angrily asked the guy, "Has the guy decided to commit suicide?" Hanhao asked the daddy, "What's the second option?" System Daddy asked the guy, very surprised, "How does he know?" The main character said judiciously that Daddy wouldn't let him choose if the choice was between dying or becoming an ordinary person. System Daddy said the guy got it right, but only the second option wouldn't be easy. Daddy explained that insect poison can kill a guy. For this reason, he must use Qi energy and get the poison out of his system. Daddy added that the process of withdrawing the poison will be painful. The guy will spend a lot more strength. If the protagonist endures everything, he will survive and become stronger. At the same time, if Hanhao fails, he will die. Guy touched Daddy in the face and said that his appearance was very much funny and not serious. Daddy turned into a monster with a Hulk figure. He told the kid he could take any shape he wanted. He shouldn't care. After that, the main character was very surprised. Daddy seriously asked the boy if he had decided on an answer to his proposal. The protagonist confidently and convincingly said that it was no problem and he agreed. Daddy asked the guy, is he not afraid and is willing to forfeit his life to save the system? Hanhao said it's not that he's not afraid at all. The guy decided that if he was going to die, it wouldn't be so easy anymore. The main character said that after he met the System Daddy, he felt something new. Hanhao said cheerfully to Daddy that he felt he wasn't so ordinary anymore either. Daddy told the guy in all seriousness that he got to this point because of his arrogance and underestimation of the enemy. The main character said that if he were a wimp, he would have chosen the first option. Hanhao asked Papik if he was the strongest immortal system. The protagonist added confidently that he would be the strongest immortality seeker. That kind of smart-ass answer from a guy like that really appealed to System Daddy. Daddy told the kid that he should try to get through the current trial first. After that, the protagonist returned to the current reality. He began to try to fight the poison in his body. Han Hao, he felt very heavy and in pain. The poison was affecting his body and senses. The protagonist calmed himself and reminded himself that he needed to be patient and circulate the chi energy. To reduce the pain, the guy decided to increase the activation of his energy. To do so, he folded his arms. The protagonist closed his eyes and completely surrendered to the process of energy circulation. While activating the energy, the guy's magic wand lit up. The wand took off and hovered over the protagonist while he was in a state of meditation. The system informed the guy that he had successfully passed his probationary period and received the right to use it for life. Han Hao also received the second level of weightlifting ability. Suddenly, the main character woke up lying on the bed. He could not immediately realize where he was. Han Hao lifted himself up and saw that there was a Moji girl lying on the bed beside him. The protagonist saw that the girl was deep asleep and didn't notice that he woke up. At this time, the door opened and Mr. Lee entered the room. He was glad that the boy was finally awake. At that time, the girl also woke up and opened her eyes. She noticed that the guy was next to her. The girl asked Han Hao how he was doing. The protagonist replied that he had slept and felt better. The boy noticed that Xiao Shuang's girlfriend was lying next to him. The Moji girl said that the doctors had not yet determined the cause of Xiao Shuang's illness, and it was not clear when she would recover. The main character sadly said it was his fault because the girl was kidnapped and is now unconscious. The guy said that if he'd assessed the enemy correctly, maybe things would have been different. Mr. Lee said that the guy got into trouble when he was rescuing the girl. He added that he was the one who didn't look out. Han Hao remembered that he still had the last amulet of X-ray vision left. He decided to see what was wrong with the girl. The amulet revealed that the reason Li Xiaoshuang's girlfriend was sick was because of charm magic. The guy asked the system, what kind of enchantment magic is this? System Daddy said that such enchantments connect the enchanter and the enchanted. If such an enchantment is forcibly disengaged or the enchanter is killed, the girl Li Xiaoshuang will immediately die from the poison. The protagonist realized that the kidnapper was using his dirty tricks. The protagonist clenched his hand into a fist and said that with that fist he would smash the face of the girl's kidnapper. The protagonist showed Mr. Lee a pill. If the Xiaoshuang girl takes it, it will temporarily break her bond with the warlock, but she won't recover until the charms stop working. Han Hao said that charm magic can only work on one person at a time. Lord Li asked the guy, what ideas does he have? The guy said the pill is only good for 1 day. In that time, they must find the kidnapper named Xuan Xiao. Mr. Lee said confidently that they had no more time to waste and were moving out. The guy asked the Moji girl to watch over Xiao Shuang while they were away. The girl wished the man and the guy to be careful. The main character was walking down the hallway with a man. He said that the kidnapper wanted to take revenge on the man for his brother. He asked that Mr. Lee tell him what had happened. Mr. Lee said that at one time his influence in the city of Qingshui was great. He had envious people who wanted to remove him, and for this purpose, they turned to a sorcerer named Xuan Hong. The warlock wasn't very powerful himself, but it was very difficult to defend against his sorcery. By the time Mr. Lee found out everything, the parents of the Xiao Shuang girl had been fatally poisoned. Then Mr. Lee found the poisoner of Xuan Hun and did not deal with him for a long time. Mr. Lee chopped the sender in one blow. He avenged the murder of the girl's parents, but the man himself became infected. He was able to survive, only thanks to some immortal techniques. After that, Mr. Lee decided to quit the game for good. He wanted to live in peace and raise the girl Xiao Shuang. Mr. Lee threateningly said that there would be no mercy for the girl's kidnapper this time. The man asked the protagonist, where could the kidnapper have gone? The protagonist said it was best to start with the road the kidnapper took. Did Mr. Lee ask the boy what the girl snatcher looked like? Han Hao reported that the man was pale thin and dressed in some rags. Mr. Lee replied that he understood everything. While in a city park, school children were beating up a man in a bear costume. One of the students decided to rip the bear mask off a man in a costume, and then the guy very quickly ripped the bear mask off the man's head. The guy was very surprised to see a man under the bear mask. He was on the phone. Man in a bear costume received a message from Mr. Lee. He told his interlocutor to contact all the brothers. There were still some surprised school children sitting on the ground. In one firm, the boss would tell a subordinate to redo his order for him. A man received a message on his phone that Mr. Lee was asking for his help. The boss demanded that the man submit a couple more projects to him before the end of his shift. After which the man grabbed his supervisor's head with his hand and shoved him away. The man told the boss to fuck off. If something needed changing, he should change it himself. Another person received a call from Mr. Lee. He said he would definitely come to help. The man in the office said they would send people out and then collect all the surveillance footage and examine it. Afterwards, the man cheerfully told his interlocutor on the phone that he was getting nostalgic for the old days. Mr. Lee ended the call and disconnected the phone. He called everyone he needed to call. Mr. Lee, holding the phone in his hands, said that there was a little time left to wait. The protagonist was surprised because the man dialed a couple of numbers hoping to find the kidnapper. The boy and the man approached a high-rise building. Mr. Lee said that the kidnapper was last seen entering the neighborhood. He asked the boy if the kidnapper had a small wound on his arm. The main character was surprised because Mr. Lee had such connections, and they found the right house so quickly. The man looked at the house. He said he didn't know which apartment the kidnapper lived in. Does each one have to be checked individually? Suddenly, the guy noticed something. He pointed his finger at the man's house and said he wouldn't have to check every apartment. A guy and a man noticed a lot of insects circling near one window in a house. There was a whole huge swarm of various insects flying near the window of the room. The kidnapper sat in the middle of the room and meditated. There were many insects around him. Suddenly, the kidnapper opened his eyes. He heard something that alerted him. At this moment, Mr. Lee kicked the front door of the room with a powerful punch. A surprised guy stood beside him. The kidnapper stood up and told the man named Lee Tianhao that he didn't expect the man to find him first himself. The main character looked around the apartment. He found it very disgusting because of the large number of insects. The kidnapper was very surprised because the protagonist didn't die from the poison. The protagonist cheerfully told the kidnapper that he was here again. The kidnapper called his guests undead and said they couldn't do anything to him anyway. Then the kidnapper said that he had cast a spell on the girl Xiao Shuang. If a guy and a man touched him, the girl would be finished. After that, the kidnapper ordered Mr. Lee to kill the protagonist. Otherwise, he threatened to kill his granddaughter Xiao Shuang. The kidnapper once again demanded of the man to start soon, or his granddaughter would die, while the protagonist strode leisurely across the room toward the kidnapper. The kidnapper was surprised. He asked the guy, "Did the guy decide to beat him up?" The kidnapper quacks to Mr. Lee that the protagonist wants to talk his granddaughter to death. The man looked at the kidnapper completely calmly. He was silent in response. The kidnapper looked at Han Hao and asked the guy, "Does the guy really want to hit him?" After that, the kidnapper wanted to ask the guy, "Does he have the guts to hit him?" At that moment, Han slapped the kidnapper in the face. The protagonist angrily grabbed the kidnapper by the head and pulled him to the side. And then the guy punched the kidnapper in the face again, knocking him headfirst into the wall. The protagonist was angry. By beating up his opponent, he was able to calm down a little. Han Hao told his defeated opponent that he could only play his charms, but he would not be understood that way. After a blow from the protagonist, Kidnapper punched the wall with him and lay unconscious. Coming to his senses, the kidnapper asked the old man, "Does he not care about his granddaughter?" Whether the old man threateningly told the kidnapper that he would not live if he did anything to his granddaughter. The kidnapper laughed at the threats from the old man. He did not believe that he would do anything to him. The insect lord got to his feet. He had fully recovered from the blow. He asked his opponents, did they really think they could beat him like that? Then the kidnapper used magic to direct a huge swarm of insects against the guy and the old man. Old man Lee covered the boy and shouted for him to be as careful as possible. A huge swarm of dangerous insects flew towards the protagonist and old man Lee. The man realized he needed to activate his special abilities to protect himself. The old man used a special spell to send a magic wave against the insects. The main character was very much surprised and amazed at Mr. Lee's abilities. Han Hao grabbed the man's shoulder with his hand and shouted for him to stop. The guy told the man that there was a trap under their feet. The man noticed a pink glow coming up from the floor. The insect lord shouted menacingly to his guests that they now had nowhere to hide. Then the snatcher menacingly commanded his insects to fly to the attack. The protagonist replied to his opponent, surprised that he wasn't going to hide. Han Hao dodged the flight of insects. He shouted to Lord Lee to move away. The protagonist decided to activate his new ability called weightlifting. The guy in his hands began to activate his magical skills. Han Hao added that he would use the reverse chaos technique Po Maximal Area. With the help of a special spell, the protagonist was able to capture all the insects in a huge yellow ball. The swarm of insects frozen in a huge yellow magical mist. The protagonist gradually tried to move the cluster of insects in the yellow ball closer to him. Han Hao decided to use his own weapon against his opponent and launch insects at him. The kidnapper was surprised. He asked the boy, does he really want to throw his own insects against him? At the same time, the insect lord was blown away by a huge swarm of his own smaller creatures flying back. The impact from the insects was so strong that the snatcher flew far to the side. After falling, the snatcher snagged his clay pots that stood in the next room. The impact shattered the clay pots. Inside were human bones and skulls. The kidnapper was lying on the floor and was being eaten by insects. Lord Lee said that the insect lord was crazy and was testing his charms on living people. The lying snatcher said in a weak voice that the enchanted insects were very heavy and he couldn't move. The villain was frightened. He realized that the insects were no longer moving or obeying his orders. The protagonist looked around. He saw many different boxes and pitchers on the shelves in the room. He said that they were all poison spells. Han Hao demanded of the villain to tell him where the binding charms lay. The kidnapper was having fun. He shouted to his enemies that there was nothing they could do to him. The insect lord said the guy with the man, nothing he can do as long as the spell is cast on the girl. The protagonist said that among the poisoners must necessarily be the binders. The kidnapper told the guy that he could try the charms himself if he chose to fall victim to them himself. The man told the guy he could try it if he wasn't afraid to die. Mr. Lee said to the guy, "Does he really want to risk it for the Xiao Shuang girl?" Mr. Lee said that the boy was completely innocent of what happened to the Xiao Shuang girl. He added that he himself could try. The protagonist wondered if the old man was wondering what he was talking about now. The boy suggested feeding the insects to the villain and letting the kidnapper experience the binding charms for himself. After that, the guy grabbed the villain by the face. He prepared to pour spells from the jug into him. The protagonist shouted cheerfully to the villain that he could say nothing. The protagonist said happily that he had finally stuffed everything into the villain's insides. The kidnapper said his insides were already full of insects, so the charms won't work on him. The protagonist was surprised. Then he remembered excitedly that he had almost forgotten about it himself. The guy told the villain that he had to give him the antidote and then the spell would work against him. Hanhao told the villain that he would put his ki energy into him and squeeze all the poison out of him. The kidnapper was frightened. The kidnapper fearfully told his enemies that he had actually tricked them. The guy started using his energy against the villain. The kidnapper shouted for him to stop. The protagonist held a session of using his energy against the villain. The villain shouted back, and it was heard far away. After the procedure was done, the insect lord lay unconscious on the floor and trembling. The protagonist picked up the phone and called the Mojo girl. The villain was lying immovably on the floor. The guy asked with interest to the Moji girl, "Has the Xiao Shuang girl come to her senses?" Mr. Lee rejoiced when he heard the news. He said it was all very wonderful. The protagonist, accompanied by Mr. Lee, arrived at the hospital building. The old man was very happy to see his granddaughter finally awake and sitting in the room. Xiao Shuang girl greeted her grandfather. Beside her sat a Moji beside the bed. Did the old man tell his granddaughter that she was fine, and that was the most important thing? At this time, the main character put the bound villain on the floor. The main character told the girl that they brought the insect lord just in case. Old man Lee told his granddaughter to thank the Hanhao guy as it was all his doing. Xiao Shuang girl silently looked at the guy. She felt awkward. The protagonist remembered how he unexpectedly caught the girl in her bedroom. Out loud, he said that he wasn't worth thanking. After a short pause, the Xiao Shuang girl said shyly words of gratitude towards the guy. The main character told the Moji girl to leave with him. This will give Xiao Shuang a good rest. Moji's girlfriend told the man and the guy to leave. She'll look after Xiao Shuang. Mr. Lee told the boy that he would never forget his kindness. The protagonist was flattered. The main character, walking out the door, waved to the man and the girls and said goodbye to them. Xiao Shuang girl looked at the departing guy with excitement and admiration for a very long time. The protagonist returned to his home in the mansion. He decided to rest. Hanhao, lying on the couch, thought he felt really good when he washed himself. Suddenly, the guy saw a glass of water on the table right next to him. The guy got excited. He felt just how thirsty he was. Suddenly, the protagonist looked closely and noticed water droplets near a glass of water. Hanhao realized that the water had been poured into the glass just before he got home. The protagonist was startled to feel that there was an intruder in his cabin. Like nothing happened, the guy drained the water glass completely to the bottom. Suddenly, the guy got very sick. He missed the glass and it shattered. Hanhao felt really bad, as if he was out of breath. The main character fell to the floor. He was on his knees and couldn't get up. Suddenly, the boy heard an evil laugh in the hallway next to the hall. With difficulty squeezing out words, Hanhao asked the uninvited guest who he was. The protagonist saw a young, smiling guy walk up to him. The guy said his name is Xuan Yi. He is the brother of Xuan Xiao, who was kidnapped by the protagonist. The protagonist angrily said that the Xuan surname family is not easy to get rid of. Xuan Yi said that their families were part of the elite Scarlet Matter clan. The guest demanded the protagonist to tell where Xuan Xiao was or else death would await him. The protagonist angrily asked his guest, "Is he really threatening him like that now?" Xuan Xiao said that the glass of water the guy drank had his enchanted crabs in it. As a result, Hanhao would suffer from abdominal bloating and severe pain. The protagonist felt as if the poisoned water was starting to work its way inside him. The main character started screaming that he was very sick and had a stomachache. Xuan Xiao told the guy that he would ring a bell that would activate the crabs, and they would enlarge in Hanhao's belly. The guest was ringing a bell. He warned the protagonist that the crabs would tear him up from the inside. Suddenly, the protagonist said in a healthy voice that he'd had enough of the ringing. He got to his feet. The guest with the bell was very surprised. The protagonist said that everything was much simpler than he thought. After that, the protagonist kicked Xuan Xiao with all his might and with a swing. The guest was very surprised and angry. He couldn't understand why his crabs in the water didn't work. The protagonist explained to the defeated opponent that he immediately realized that something was wrong with the water. For this reason, Hanhao didn't drink a drop of water from the glass. He poured it all into the vase. Xuanxiao said with a smile at the protagonist's very early rejoicing. A bound guest told the guy that he would experience the loss of a loved one. The main character asked the guest, how could he have a favorite person? At this time, the guy remembered his familiar girlfriend. He immediately got excited. Xuanxiao shouted to the guy that his favorite girl had been kidnapped a long time ago. The guest then told the protagonist angrily that he wouldn't tell him anything about the kidnapping. The protagonist pulled a cell phone from the guest's pocket and read the message. The protagonist read a message in which the kidnappers confirmed that they had stolen the girl. Xuanxiao told the guy that he was not playing by the rules and was invading his privacy. In farewell, the protagonist slapped the intruder across the face and left the house, slamming the door shut. The main character was running through the city. Mr. Lee informed him that when the Moji girl went down to the supermarket, she never came back. Guy running down the street. He decided to try to call Xuannan, but then immediately changed his mind. The main character was running down the street and could not understand the route he saw on his phone and where to go. At that time, a white car was approaching from behind. The car was traveling at full speed. The main character shouted to the driver, "Is he in such a hurry to get to the other side of the world?" The guy looked ahead and got really excited. He saw someone standing in the road. Hanhao saw a car rushing down the road with a small child in front. The protagonist ran as hard as he could down the road, but he realized he was running out of time. A girl in a white tracksuit appeared in front of the car. A girl bravely protected a small child who was being run over by a car. The stranger was full of determination. She prepared to beat off the car. The girl swung her leg and hit the car with all her might. She was protecting the baby. The girl's impact caused the car to stop and fly off to the side. The little boy was stunned. The main character was extremely surprised. He could not understand how the girl was able to stop the car. After the impact from the girl's foot, the car flew very high and flew off to the side. The car was lying on its side. At that point, the driver kicked the door open and got ready to get out. A young guy jumped out of the car. He started walking towards the girl. The rescued boy ran away screaming. The driver angrily asked the girl, "Where did she come from?" The guy told the girl that she was the daughter of the Chu family. He asked her how she was going to compensate him. The girl looked at the guy very angrily and distrustfully. She asked, "Does he really want compensation?" After a brief pause, the stranger told the driver that she could compensate him with a punch from her right hand. The protagonist took a closer look and realized that the people arguing on the road were not ordinary. Hanhao realized that he needed to urgently now to save the girl Moji and find a man named Xuannan. He prepared to run away further. At this time, the girl shouted threateningly to the driver named Xuannan to take his hands off her. The protagonist was very surprised and excited when he heard Xuannan's name. Xuannan told the girl that he would trade his car for a night with her. The girl threateningly told the driver that she would beat him up if he touched her. Afterwards, Xuannan said that he first wanted to go and find the one who had kidnapped his brother. Suddenly from behind, someone came up to the driver and put a hand on his shoulder. The main character smiled at Xuannan and asked quietly if he was the one he was looking for. Xuannan was very surprised by surprise. At this time, the guy prepared to hit him with his hand. The driver of the car couldn't dodge the protagonist's attack in time. Xuannan was able to bounce back very quickly. Hanhao asked the driver, "Who was he?" The driver of the car said that he was the strongest warlock of the Scarlet Mother clan. The driver shouted to the protagonist that he was too late for a sneak attack. Hanhao told Nan that he didn't have time to dodge. The protagonist threateningly told the driver that if he didn't want to get punched in the face again, he should tell him where the Mojo girl was. The driver of the car said that the girl Moji is in a place where the protagonist will never find her. Hanhao noticed that the driver had just said that he had driven the car out of the house. That meant that he was now on his way back. The protagonist sternly asked the nanny, "Did he take the girl to his brothel?" The driver of the car laughed. He shouted that the protagonist must have been joking just now. Xuannan informed cheerfully to the guy that he was joking and nothing of the sort had happened. The protagonist realized with complete calmness that he had guessed where the girl was. The driver shouted to the guy that only members of the Scarlet Mother clan knew the location of the shelter. The protagonist took out a cell phone he'd taken from the poisoner who'd come to his house. It had a mailing address. The protagonist showed the phone to the driver and said that Xuan had a postal delivery address written down. Nan was surprised and angry. He remembered that the owner of the phone was willing to give his life to preserve the clan's privacy. The protagonist explained very simply to his opponent that times change. Afterwards, the protagonist yelled for the Nan driver to taste his fist. After a heavy blow from the protagonist, Xuannan fell to the ground unconscious. Hanhao, standing beside the lying driver, said cheerfully, "The man went down from a single nudge." The girl told the fellow that she thanked him for his helping hand and would not forget his kindness. The girl bowed to the protagonist and said that she would repay him. After that, she said goodbye. The stranger turned around and started running down the street. The protagonist thought he had helped her for his own purpose. The main character realized he didn't even know the girl's name, but he decided it didn't matter. The guy called Mr. Lee and told him that he had already killed 2 members of the Scarlet Mother clan. He also added that he had a clue about the Moji girl. The protagonist added that he would go and deal with the members of the Scarlet Mother clan right now. To catch up with the clan members, the protagonist traveled far outside the city into the woods. The main character was dressed as a letter carrier with a package in his hands. He was surprised that the clan members lived in such a dump. The protagonist noticed some guy standing near a tree with a hat and a pipe in his hand. The guy asked, "What business has the Hanhao come here for?" The main character told the guy that he is a delivery guy and he has a package with home delivery from Mr. Suan Q. After a brief pause, the guy told the protagonist that he'd walk him through it. Hanhao followed his guide along the forest path. They walked for a long time. After a walk, a guy pointed the main character to a mansion standing in the woods and told him he needed to go there. The protagonist thanked his guide and headed for the front of the house. The protagonist calmly passed the front door and went inside the building. There was no one there. Hanhao said words of greeting to the people in the house and added that he had delivered the package. Protagonist received a message from System Daddy that he was going on vacation and leaving a colleague behind. The protagonist was surprised by the strong light from his phone. The guy saw a girl in white with bunny ears appear in front of him. She asked the guy if he wanted to buy something. The main character asked the girl, "Is she the one the system is replacing his daddy for?" The girl said her name was Liner. She added that the guy would have to take an aptitude test. The first question for the guy was what should his girlfriend do during periodic pain. Hanhao answered that the girlfriend should drink more hot water. In the second question, the girl said that her best friend bought her a delicious cake, and what should the main character say to that? Hanhao shouted that he asked that the girl leave him a piece. The third question was, what would a guy say to a girl if she wanted a period-colored lipstick? The main character yelled that the questions were stupid. He asked the lingerer if she could tell the difference between a Donatello and a Michelangelo. Linaire told the guy that he was hopeless and nothing would help him. She decided to leave. The guy asked Linaire to help him. Linaire informed the guy that a summer gift set for the beach had been ordered for him. Its starting price was 130 Linarics. The girl offered the protagonist a discount. Hanhao would be able to make the purchase for 13 Linarics. The protagonist agreed very quickly and happily. He thought to himself that he didn't know what Linarics were. After that, the protagonist made the payment and saw that he had spent 1,300,000 yuan. The main character annoyedly said that 1 Linaric is worth 100,000 yuan. He asked angrily to the assistant, "Why didn't she say it before?" Lina explained that the guy himself didn't ask Slash. After calming down a bit, the protagonist said he wanted to see what he had bought. The assistant showed the protagonist the swim trunks that can increase male attractiveness. The protagonist grudgingly told his assistant that he'd rather die than wear one of these. Suddenly, the main character found himself on a sea beach under the bright sun and blue sky. Hanhao stood on the beach in his purchased swim trunks and cheered the sun and sea. The main character decided to buy himself a sinking Pokeball. Such a Pokeball makes the target sink and immediately saves it. After that, the protagonist launched the Pokeball towards the girl walking in the water. The girl in the beach suit turned around when she heard something fall into the water beside her. The main character was very much surprised. He realized that he now saw a Moji girl in front of him. The girl from below was grabbed by tentacles and started drowning. The girl screamed for help. The main character swam towards the girl and shouted that he would save her. At the same time, a girl in a purple swimsuit rushed into the water from a high rock. The guy didn't notice it. Hanhao saw someone dive into the water from a great height right in front of him. In the end, the drowning Moji girl was rescued by her girlfriend, who brought her to shore. The main character was very puzzled and dissatisfied. He realized that he had failed. Hanhao bought a surfboard to help him do all sorts of difficult tricks. He thought he'd get it right. The main character very realistically imagined himself floating on a board and being spotted by familiar girls on the shore. Full of optimism, the protagonist with a board in his hand ran towards the wave that was crashing on him. In the end, the wave threw the guy onto the shore and his board broke. Hanhao asked Linner's assistant what had gone wrong. The lineman told the guy judiciously that if he couldn't surf, a board in his hands wouldn't help him. Afterward, Hanhao purchased for himself a special candy, which has the effect of affectionate speeches and tender words on all those around him. The main character was walking along the beach. Suddenly, some guy asked if he'd seen his volleyball, after which the protagonist angrily told his interlocutor that he hadn't seen the ball. Then a special candy he bought started working inside the protagonist. Hanhao told the guy that although he hadn't found his ball, his heart had finally found it. The main character kept saying romantic compliments to a strange guy. He couldn't understand why he couldn't control himself. The guy noticed that the main character was emitting gentle rays of light. He decided it was true love. The whole romantic scene was being watched by people standing not far away. The main character was rushing down the beach, and a strange guy was running after him. Han Hao yelled at the guy to get away from him. Looking at everything that was going on, the laner shook her head and said that none of this was any of her business. From deep within the earth, suddenly huge roots began to crawl out en masse. Big roots were coming out of the ground all around the perimeter of the lot around the house. Han Hao was very frightened. He didn't understand what it was. In the end, the boy found himself surrounded by a cage of roots. The protagonist realized it was all the fault of the guy who brought him here. Han Hao asked the guy standing next to him if he was Xuan Ku. Guy Xuan Ku menacingly shouted to the protagonist that he had the audacity to come in person. He also added that Han Hao will leave here, in addition to the package, also a life. The main character said he immediately wondered how it could be that there was not a single person in the big house. The plot was surrounded by bamboo roots. The protagonist asked Xuan Ku how he was able to figure him out, since he was so well disguised. Xuan Ku told the protagonist that he had made a big mistake. Han Hao asked what was his mistake. Xuan Ku angrily said that only DHL can reach this place. At the same time, the Shuntong company has never delivered parcels to this place. The protagonist thought about it. He couldn't understand how he could have made such a simple mistake. Han Hao said he took into account the high-tech information component, but forgot about the infrastructure features. After that, the protagonist shouted that he had come to take down the Zhuan family. He demanded that the girl be returned to him. Xuan Ku smiled at the guy and told him to go over and try to take the girl himself. The protagonist was surprised to see his rival disappear somewhere in the blink of an eye. The protagonist looked around carefully. He couldn't figure out where Xuan Ku had gone. The system gave a message to the boy to look under his feet. Han Hao looked under his feet and saw piles of insects and snakes crawling on him. He didn't understand where they could have come from. Venomous snakes and spiders at full speed were on their way to strike the protagonist. The protagonist has activated special magical skills to stop an invasion of dangerous creatures. After activating the magic skill, all the snakes and insects dropped dead on Earth. Afterward, the protagonist noticed a bunch of very dangerous insects flying at him from the side. A whole swarm of poisonous mosquitoes, butterflies, and dragonflies were preparing to strike the Han Hao. The protagonist activated a special skill called Chaos Technique. Thanks to his magic skills, the entire insect swarm fell dead to the ground. Han Hao walked over to the wooden door in the wall and carefully opened it. As soon as the protagonist opened the door, he was immediately enveloped in a dangerous purple mist. The protagonist noticed that Xuan Ku was standing inside. He was laughing at Han Hao. Xuan Ku told the protagonist that he had encountered their clan's most powerful poison spell. Han Hao will die in 5 seconds. Xuan Ku told the protagonist that's why he lured him into this room. The poisonous spell was dispersed by a fan from a jug. After that, Xuan Ku intensified the rotation of the fan so that the protagonist would die quickly. Xuan Ku said that he was able to easily trick the protagonist, but although he could torture him well in doing so. Han Hao stood behind him as if nothing had happened. After that, Xuan Ku turned around and saw the healthy protagonist. He was very much surprised. Han Hao said irritably he couldn't hear anything at all from behind the fan. What was Xuan Ku saying there? Xuan Ku could not understand how the protagonist could survive and how such a thing was possible. Han Hao prepared to attack his opponent. Xuan Ku asked the guy, who was he anyway? The protagonist in flight with a powerful kick to his opponent's head. Xuan Ku fell unconscious to the floor after the powerful blow. The protagonist decided to ask him about the girl. Han Hao asked the lying opponent, where's the girl Moji? Xuan Ku decided that he had better pretend to be dead. The protagonist told the lying Xuan Ku that he was a complete weakling if he passed out. At that time, a huge group of young clan fighters appeared in the doorway. The leader of the warriors held the Mot's girl. He asked the protagonist if he had dared to invade their clan's sanctuary. The main character turned around and looked carefully at the clan fighters who had arrived. The guy noticed a Moji girl screaming for him to save her. The leader asked if this was the girl the protagonist was looking for. Han Hao was frightened and angry. He thought that he would have to fight against the clan warriors. The ringleader shouted to his subordinates to release the enchantments against the protagonist as soon as possible. A huge swarm of dangerous insects flew towards the protagonist. Han Hao was surprised to be attacked again by the same charms. The protagonist activated his magical skills. He asked the disgruntled opponents, can they think of anything other than releasing bugs? Han Hao activated a spell called Reverse Chaos Technique against the clan fighters. After that, the protagonist commanded that his magic flow be directed against the clan fighters. The spell launched from Han Hao struck the warriors and knocked them all down. The protagonist said calmly that he wouldn't fall for the same trick a second time. Moji girl was very much surprised by the way the protagonist dealt with her kidnappers. The excited protagonist happily ran up to the rescued girl and asked if she was okay. Moji embraced the protagonist joyfully. Han Hao was a little embarrassed and pleased. The girl hugged and thanked the guy. Han Hao didn't notice anything suspicious. Suddenly, the girl jabbed the guy in the neck with the needle from her ring on her finger. The main character felt sick. He couldn't believe the girl could have poisoned him. Han Hao began to weaken and fall. The girl Moji looked pleased and contentedly at the protagonist. The last thing the protagonist saw was an evil smiling Moji girl. The girl sternly shouted to the lying warriors to get up as soon as possible. The fighters rose from their seats and greeted the girl and called her clan leader. At the same time, the girl took off her mask and wig. She told the protagonist that he fell for her. The clan leader said cheerfully to Hanhao that he was able to get caught like a sweetheart. One of the warriors asked the girl, what were they going to do with the main character now? The guy sat on the ground silent. He didn't even have the strength to get to his feet. After saying that, Hanhao thought angrily to himself that the chaos technique had long since saturated his entire body. He couldn't be hurt by poison gas or poison needles. The clan head ordered her subordinates to lock the guy up along with the kidnapped girl Moji. At the same time, the protagonist said that he found everything initially strange. The girl was very much surprised. She couldn't believe that the main character was still conscious. The girl angrily shouted that Hanhao should be lying unconscious and completely immobilized. The protagonist remembered that the clan leader had ordered him to be locked up with the Moji girl. He decided to take the opportunity to play along with the kidnappers. In the next instant, Hanhao collapsed to the floor without strength. He shouted that he had been hit hard by the poison and couldn't take it anymore. The warrior leader and the clan leader looked at the protagonist in surprise. The man said that Hanhao was barely on his feet. The protagonist was taken to a dungeon. It was wet and dark, and everything was lit by torches on the walls. The guy was thrown to the ground next to the girl. Then the door slammed behind the kidnappers. The protagonist got up and looked around. He saw Moji lying nearby. The guy tried to wake up the girl. He excitedly yelled for her to wake up. The protagonist went to the system daddy and asked him to help him. Daddy said that he needed to buy an amulet of X-ray vision for the price of 5 immortality points. After that, Daddy reported that the guy had 0 points, and his purchase was denied. Hanhao suggested that the system should be negotiated. Daddy said that he could lend the guy immortality points. Afterward, Daddy informed him that for the amulet of X-ray vision, the lad would owe 50 points of immortality. The protagonist angrily reminded the system that the amulet cost 5 points. Daddy replied that that was the retail price, and he was offering him a percentage. Daddy told me that the spell placed on the girl is called Sleeping Beauty. It can be easily broken. All it takes is a kiss from a lover. The protagonist asked excitedly, now how can we find out who the lover of the Moji girl is? Daddy said it would take a love test amulet, and its starting price is 20 points, but a guy can buy it for only 200 points. At the same time, the protagonist and his girlfriend were being watched by the kidnappers through the window. The clan head said angrily that the protagonist was pretending in front of them. After that, the protagonist felt he was being watched. He realized it was time to run. One warrior said the Hanhao had some kind of immunity, or maybe they didn't use enough poison. The warrior turned and started to run away. He shouted that he would come and bring more poison. The protagonist took the Moji girl in his arms. He had to find a way to get out of his confinement. The clan head, looking at the protagonist, asked with interest, where would he be able to escape to? The protagonist realized he couldn't escape through the door. He looked the other way. Hanhao knocked a hole in the wall with a strong punch. He prepared to escape through it. The protagonist, carrying the girl in his arms, said goodbye cheerfully to the kidnappers who had run in. The clan head shouted to the guy that he could only dream of escaping. She prepared to use spikes against him. After that, the woman swung around and threw the spikes in the direction of the protagonist. Hanhao realized he was in danger. He had to protect himself from the thorns. The protagonist was able to dodge the flying spikes with a quick and agile movement. Hanhao turned his head and looked at his pursuers with great excitement. The clan leader shouted menacingly to her subordinates to grab the guy as soon as possible. The protagonist noticed a whole pile of wooden firewood lying on the path in front of him. Then the guy had a good idea that would help him escape. Hanhao set fire to a pile of firewood and was able to get out of the building very quickly. The main character ran outside with his girlfriend and noticed a bunch of expensive cars parked there. The guy needed to find a descent from the mountain. At this time, the kidnappers could not run outside as they had to first put out the fire in front of them. At which time a warrior ran up to the kidnappers with 2 jugs of poisonous gaza. The warrior with the jugs asked where the protagonist had disappeared to. There was flammable gas inside the jugs, and the warrior stumbled and dropped the jars of dangerous substances from his hands. The clan head along with his subordinates were very frightened, but they wouldn't have time to run away. The main character drove a girl around in a race car. Motzi woke up and opened her eyes. The girl woke up and wiped her eyes. The protagonist driving the car was glad that the girlfriend was awake. The main character remembered kissing a girl. He couldn't believe he could have been her lover. Moji anxiously asked the guy, did she give him trouble again? Hanhao replied to his girlfriend that they were just out for some air and there could be no trouble here. Moji got a little shy and told the guy cheerfully that she agreed. The main character drove off at full speed with a girl in the car. They were laughing merrily. The main character raced in a race car down the road with a Mojo girl. The main character was walking down the street with a big sack. The weather was hot, and it was very hard for him. The guy asked grudgingly, why would he take these materials? System Daddy explained to the guy that he had helped him, and now Hanhao had to perform his tasks. The protagonist grudgingly said that he was able to get out with his powers. System Daddy told the guy to talk less and pay back his debt. Hanhao thought dreamily to himself to get back under the air conditioning soon. After completing his tasks a couple days later, the protagonist returned to his home. Hanhao said cheerfully that life without debts was wonderful for him. He was even able to earn an extra 30 points. The main character told the System Daddy that he would lie on the bed all day today and nothing would make him get up. At that time the phone rang. Hanhao picked up the phone and heard his friend Zhao Yang say they were in trouble. He asked the protagonist to come to the karaoke bar as soon as possible. After that, Zhao Yang hung up the phone. Lying on the bed, the guy thought he didn't feel like going anywhere at all right now. The main character went to System Daddy and asked him to give him a ride. Daddy said he'd do it, but only for points. Hanhao was walking down the street. He decided to himself that he should spend more time outdoors while he was young. It was good for his health. The protagonist arrived at a large building, where inside was a karaoke bar of color. The guy excitedly shouted to the main character that a new karaoke bar had opened up next door and poached a lot of their customers. The protagonist calmly said in a bored voice that he first thought something serious had happened. The guy said excitedly to the main character that something serious happened to them. Hanhao asked his friend, what kind of room is underneath them? The guy said there was a VIP room underneath them. The distinguished guests were to arrive there today. The main character said there's bad insulation in the building. He can hear every song from downstairs. Hanhao noted to himself in surprise that the people below were somehow singing very sadly. From the VIP room downstairs, I could hear a very pitiful singing about a merry lamb. The guy grudgingly asked the girls, who let them cry? He demanded they sing louder. The guy shouted angrily to the girls that they were brought here to sing songs, not to squeak. At that time, one of the guys took out a knife and threatened the girls with it. The girls continued to sing pitifully. At this time, a woman entered the room and asked Manager Zhang what he wanted to discuss about the contract. The manager called a woman named Lu Min and said that she was his celebrity. The woman replied that if there was nothing else to discuss, she was going. The manager then moved closer to the girl and asked, doesn't she want to sit with her investor? Afterward, Manager Zhang put his hand on the woman's leg and told her that they would have a long, long time today. The Lu Min woman very abruptly and rudely flung the manager's hand away from her, after which the woman angrily shouted at the manager to get off her back. The manager told the girl that he had poured a lot of money into her. He demanded that Lu Min not be so ungrateful. Lu Min woman angrily told the manager that she didn't force him to put anything into it. After that, Manager Zhang approached the Lu Min woman and grabbed her by the shoulder. Manager Zhang angrily told the woman that he had given her money, and she was squeamish about it. The manager then grabbed the woman and demanded that she follow him. The guests on the sofa watched the manager's behavior with interest. He shouted to the girls to keep singing and not to stop. At the sound of another song, Manager Zhang grabbed the girl and took her to the restroom. The manager yelled at the woman that if she didn't want to do it the hard way, he'd do it the hard way. He hit her with his hand. The Lu Min woman looked at the manager with great anger and hatred, at which time the main character swung open the door to the VIP room with karaoke. Hanhao asked the audience in surprise, how could one sing such a joyful song and cry? The main character asked the audience if they could sing. If they couldn't, he would teach them. One of the guys got angry. He asked who had let the main character into their room. Hanhao said calmly that he would never be allowed to show his talent for singing. The guy with the knife said angrily that it was the protagonist who didn't understand in a nice way. The guy with the knife started threatening the protagonist. He asked, does Hanhao realize what is about to happen to him? The protagonist, without thinking long, grabbed his opponents and smashed their heads together. Hanhao then told the hooligans that their bar operates under the rule of law and violence is forbidden. Afterward, the main character calmly asked the girls if they were okay. One of the girls very excitedly pointed the protagonist to the restroom. The main character got very excited. He immediately ran towards the toilet. Hanhao tried to open the door. It wouldn't budge. He realized that the door was locked from the inside. The protagonist got worried. He took a piercing look at the door and decided to break it down. The front door was blown to smithereens by the protagonist's mighty blow. The guy noticed a Liu Ming girl standing inside. She was resisting Manager Zhao's attacks. The girl was trembling and was very scared. Manager Zhao was surprised and turned around. The main character was very amazed and angry. He decided to help the girl Lu Min. Manager Zhao angrily asked the protagonist, who is he, and what is he doing here? Hanhao silently looked at Manager Zhao with anger and hatred. Manager Zhao shouted to the protagonist that he better mind his own business. The protagonist punched the manager with all his might. He flew out of the restroom and into the wall. Zhao then told the protagonist that he would give him money and do anything to get him released. Hanhao shouted at the manager for giving the wrong answer and kicked him with all his might. The beaten manager pleaded with the protagonist. He said he was guilty and asked to be let go. The main character told the manager that he had to ask for forgiveness from the girl Lumin. The Lumin girl looked at the protagonist with great surprise and admiration. After that, Manager Zhang fell to his knees in front of the girl and apologized to her. The protagonist formidably commanded the manager to scram. Zhao ran towards the exit with all his might. Manager Zhao shouted goodbye to the protagonist that he dared to touch him, and he wouldn't let it go. Han Hao angrily said that he didn't attach himself to the manager well enough. The Lumin girl breathed a sigh of relief. Lumin looked at the main character and expressed my gratitude to him. The main character asked the girl how she was feeling. She said she could finally breathe a sigh of relief. After that, the girl asked the protagonist with a smile what his name was. The main character happily told the girl his name. He told her he was the owner of a karaoke bar. Han Hao took the girl's hand and said he would take her upstairs so she could rest. Then the main character told the girls on the couch to go back since their workday was over. The frightened girls said in trembling voices to the protagonist that they agreed. When the protagonist went to the exit, he was met by his familiar friend. He was surprised. A friend said surprised Han Hao came out with the famous Lumin girl. The Lumin girl once again asked the protagonist by name. The guy cheerfully confirmed that it was him. The girl said fearfully that she was grateful to the protagonist. But Manager Zhao would not just calm down. Han Hao said cheerfully back to the girl not to worry about him. After that, the main character told the girl Lu Min that he would take her to the police and she would file a report. The Lumin girl excitedly told the guy that she totally agreed. The protagonist and the girl drove up to the police building. Han Hao told the girl that her statement should reduce Manager Zhao's desire to molest her again. Liu Min's girlfriend apologized to the protagonist for causing him a lot of trouble. Afterwards, the girl told the protagonist that she wanted to repay him and show her gratitude. Han Hao replied that the girl need not worry. After that, Lu Min grabbed the guy's hand. They walked together towards the entrance of the police station. The Lu Min girl told the protagonist that she would do anything. Lu Min added that she is willing to do anything she can for the protagonist. She added that she doesn't like to be in debt. The protagonist replied to his companion that if she was so insistent, he had a request to make. The protagonist was still walking while holding hands with the Lu Min girl. He decided to tell her what he wanted from her as a token of his gratitude. Han Hao asked the girl Lu Min to perform at their karaoke bar. The girl was very surprised and happy at such a request. She couldn't believe that the guy had asked her to perform. The main character thought to himself that the girl probably wouldn't agree to perform, since she's a big star. The girl happily and cheerfully replied to the protagonist that she agreed to his proposal. Han Hao asked the girl how she would find the time according to her performance schedule. Lu Min replied that she was going to perform here anyway. At the end, the main character asked his new acquaintance for her autograph. The girl said excitedly to the guy that she had simply forgotten to bring a pen with her. Han Hao rummaged through his pockets and said he didn't have a pen either. Lu Min told the main character that she would autograph his clothes with her lipstick. The main character asked the girl, "Is that really possible?" While she left the guy an autograph on his t-shirt. The guy ended up with the singer's autograph and some number on his shirt. Han Hao asked the interlocutor in surprise, what were the numbers below the autograph? In parting, the Lu Min girl kissed the protagonist and started to leave. The girl said she wrote down her phone number. She added, the guy could call her if he needed her. In parting, the girl winked slyly at the guy and told him not to tell anyone. Han Hao assured the girl that there was no way he would tell. System Daddy told the guy that he was less nervous when he was fighting against an entire clan. The guy hissed back, so Daddy would shut up. The girl asked the guy, what did he say to her? Han Hao said he didn't say anything like that, while someone from the bushes was watching the protagonist and taking pictures. The man with the camera was very pleased with what he was able to photograph. The next day, the main character woke up at home. He decided to watch the news. Han Hao was drinking coffee and reading the news on his smartphone. Unexpectedly, he was very surprised. A news site reported that singer Liu Ming was seen kissing Han Hao, a student. The protagonist wondered. He thought in amazement how such a news had already hit the trends. A Moji girl was washing dishes. She asked the protagonist, what happened? Han Hao said, he simply turned around. The girl listened to the boy's answer in surprise. She pretended to believe him. The protagonist thought that Moji hadn't read the news yet. He figured the girl would find out sooner or later. Han Hao thought that the spell should have worn off by now. As a result, the girl should have loved him by now. The system daddy said that the charms could simply expire. Han Hao was surprised that the charms could also have an expiration date. Daddy said that the charms weren't poisonous. The guy thought he might have made up his own mind about the whole thing. System Daddy suggested that the protagonist go and ask him himself. The leading edge walked up to the karaoke bar. The guy asked Han Hao, is the singer Lu Min really coming? The protagonist asked the friend, does the friend not trust him? The guy said confidently that if Han Hao was in charge, no star could resist. At this time, the protagonist decided to call the girl back. Hanhao called the girl and asked the girl Lu Min. A male voice answered. Then the interlocutor told the protagonist that he was the singer's producer, and the girl had been kidnapped. The main character asked the producer where he was, and he said he'd be there soon. Hanhao then excitedly asked his friend for his car. He said that the Lu Min girl had been kidnapped. Then the main character drove at full speed to the location the producer told him to go to. Hanhao ran up to a man lying on the road. He clarified whether he was the producer of singer Lu Min. The producer, in a weak voice, apologized to the guy for the disrupted performance. Hanhao asked the man, "What happened here?" The producer said that first they went with Lu Min to perform at a karaoke bar. The producer said that some car blocked their way. A group of people beat him up and then kidnapped the girl Lu Min. The producer's car was also totaled. That's why he couldn't pursue the kidnappers. The main character asked the producer, "Who could it be that kidnapped the girl?" The man said the kidnapper's ringleader's name was Menge. He opened a martial arts center in the city. The man also added that Meng might know the manager of Zhang. The protagonist remembered manager Zhang to himself. He thought that he had never learned his lesson. After that, the main character asked the producer to take him to the leader of Manga. The protagonist turned to the producer. "Can I ask him something?" The producer asked, "What does the protagonist want to know?" The guy reminded the producer that he knew that manager Zhang was a very uncool person. The main character asked the producer why he sent the girl Lu Min to meet with the producer. The producer was frightened and embarrassed. He said the incident made him very angry too. The man said that yesterday one of manager Zhao's subordinates had summoned him to his office. The producer thought to himself that the protagonist really thought he was in league with Zhao. Afterward, the producer said he was very happy that the Lu Min girl had friends like the main character. The producer told the guy that he wouldn't just worry about the girl. He also reminded that Lu Min kissed the main character and that means she likes him. The main character asked surprised at the producer, "Did the girl really just say that directly?" Hanhao told the man that the morning news started to spin things. The producer told the guy not to worry as things would clear up very quickly. Man advised that the main character should express his gratitude to the fans. Hanhao asked the producer, "Doesn't he want to explain everything to the fans himself?" The producer told the guy unhappily that journalists don't care about the truth. They often make up conjectures. There are times when journalists ruin an artist's future career. The man said he has been with the singer since the beginning and knows her character well. The protagonist realized why the Lu Min girl didn't scream and call for help. Hanhao demanded that the producer speed up. The producer said he couldn't vouch for the car. The main character and the producer drove up to the training center building. A man got out of the car and told the protagonist that this was the place. The main character said he would go himself. The producer replied that he could go along with Hanhao. Hanhao explained that he had a personal vendetta against Menge. If someone sees the producer near him, they might start harassing him too. Walking to the door, Hanhao said that the fighters would most likely no longer have that opportunity. The producer told the protagonist that he could go in by himself. He thought to himself that Hanhao was very cold-blooded. A group of karate fighters in white kimonos were practicing in a large gymnasium. The leader stood and looked at his charges. They were practicing a kick. The leader demanded that the athletes shout louder. At this time, the protagonist entered the room and asked for Meng Ji. Menge listened to Hanhao's voice and said that this scream was loud enough. Menge looked at the incoming guest with displeasure and asked who he was, and what did he want. The main character sternly asked Meng Ji, "Where is Lu Min's girlfriend now?" Menge replied grudgingly to the protagonist that he didn't know what he was talking about at all. The surrounding athletes listened to the whole conversation. They started whispering and laughing among themselves. The main character looked at the karate guys and said, "Man-Ge not going to talk until he gets a good punch." Menge was very much surprised and cheered up after the threats from Hanhao. Menge turned to his athletes in surprise and said that the protagonist wanted to punch him. Menge then threateningly asked the guy if he was aware of where he was. Hanhao told his opponents to stop talking and let them all attack him alone together. The karate guys laughed. They thought the protagonist had just watched too many movies. Mengjai asked the protagonist if he knew what a 9th Dan black belt was. At that time, the Karate Kid brought up concrete tiles. Then Menge smashed every single tile with a huge swing. The karateka began to clap for their leader. Someone said that Meng Ji is a real man. Afterward, Menge waved his hands and told the athletes that this was just business as usual for him. The protagonist started to get sick of it all. He thought it was disgusting. Hanhao decided to smack his rival. But first he had to find out where the kidnapped singer Liu Ming was. Menge raised his hands up and told the protagonist that this is the name of the power of the 9th Dan black belt. The protagonist hit the floor with all his might. There were huge cracks in the floor. Menge was very surprised by this blow. He didn't expect such a thing from the protagonist. Then Hanhao struck the floor again with all his might. Cracks appeared around the point of impact. Karate athletes were very much surprised and amazed by the guy's skills. Hanhao continued to strike the floor. The concrete floor covering cracked and shattered. The protagonist looked menacingly at his rival Meng Ge and asked what kind of Dan was he. The karateka were very frightened. They realized that the main character was the monster and decided to run away. The main character sternly said that Mengai was now alone and asked if he would speak. Mengai replied that he would say everything. Meng Jae said the kidnapped girl is in the upstairs closet. The protagonist said he would deal with Mange on the way back. To himself, he decided to run away quickly. Meng Jae took out a magic ring. He thought that the protagonist wouldn't be able to just destroy his reputation and leave. Meng Ji cracked the magic ring. He shouted that he only had all hope for Boss Wu. A battle master emerged from the magical ashes. Meng Ji ordered the master to destroy the protagonist. The protagonist remembered that the boss is the master of the immortal fighter. The boss accelerated and prepared to attack the protagonist at once. The martial arts master Boss Yu decided to hit the protagonist with his hand from the get-go. Han Hao was able to dodge the blow in time, causing Boss Wu to hit the wall with his hand. After that, the boss accelerated for another attack. The protagonist slowly ran back. Han Hao noticed that his opponent was throwing unusual punches. He wondered who Boss Wu was. Meng Ge menacingly shouted that Boss Wu had sealed his illusion with the immortal technique, and this was the artifact he had given him. Meng Ge shouted to the protagonist that it was time for him to die. Han Hao thought to himself that Boss Wu had turned out to be an immortality seeker as well. The protagonist realized he was going to fight another immortality seeker. The guy realized that the boss was not going to let him go so easily. The protagonist decided in his mind that he should beat his opponent first. Han Hao prepared to strike Boss Wu with a strong flying hand punch. The martial artist easily deflected the blow. Han Hao as if he had struck into the void. The protagonist's arm just went down after a bad punch. The protagonist was surprised by his opponent. He realized that the boss was able to absorb the full force of his blow. The martial artist, without any emotion, was ready to repel further attack from the Han Hao. The protagonist was surprised. He decided not to back down and decided to try to hit the master again. Han Hao pushed off with his foot and prepared to hit Boss Wu once more with a sprint. The martial artist was once again able to calmly repel the blow. The main character's punch seemed to hit the void once more, and Han Hao was thrown back. The protagonist began to back away. He realized he couldn't break his opponent with a normal punch. Han Hao felt his arm go numb. He couldn't understand how some illusion could have so much strength. To increase his power, the protagonist activated a weightlifting spell. The martial artist prepared to fend off another attack from the protagonist. Han Hao, with an advanced kick, decided to take down Boss Wu again. The martial artist activated his special skill to defend against the enhanced strike. The protagonist ended up pounding his fist into the master's palm without any effect. The main character couldn't break through the battle master's defense. The boss wouldn't even budge. After that, the martial artist shoved the protagonist away from him with all his might. Han Hao flew backwards from the master's powerful push. He couldn't hold on. Meng Ge happily shouted for Boss Wu to finish off the protagonist as soon as possible. The protagonist realized that his skills weren't even helping him in battle. He decided that the boss had surpassed the superhuman level. System Daddy explained that the battlemaster was already at the peak of superhuman level. The protagonist asked System Daddy why his techniques didn't work on the boss. Daddy replied that the master had cool powers. Daddy warned the kid to stay put, or the master would already be attacking. The boss had dispersed and prepared to use the immortal killing finger technique against the protagonist. The protagonist was terrified. He fully realized that he would not be able to dodge in time. The protagonist found himself alone with the threat. He had no strength or skills to defend himself against the master. Han Hao noticed that the martial artist's hand in front of his face began to dissipate. The protagonist was very surprised because of the fact that he was fine. The martial artist began to fade away little by little. He said that his time was up. At the end, the boss said he was sorry, so he was just a little short. The protagonist thought happily that everything had worked out for him. System Daddy said that the illusion had expired. As a reward, Hanho received 80 points of immortality. The System Daddy offered the guy to kneel before him. The protagonist menacingly told his rival that he deserved it himself. Meng Ge was startled to think that the guy had also turned out to be an immortality seeker. He realized that he was definitely finished. The fighter wanted to make a neat escape, but slipped as he backed up. In the end, Meng Ge couldn't escape and fell backwards onto the floor. Meng Ge lost consciousness after a heavy fall. The impact caused him to foam at the mouth. The protagonist was surprised. He couldn't understand how Meng Ge had fallen down like that. After that, the guy decided he didn't have time to think about his defeated rival. He ran to save the girl. Han Hao ran and excitedly thought to himself that the Lu Min girl was still waiting for him to save her. At this time, on the upper floor, the girl Liu Ming was in a separate room. Next to her stood manager Zhao. Zhao told the joyfully frightened girl that they were just meant to be together. Zhao hadn't yet healed the wounds from the last beating. He told the girl that he would find her wherever she was hiding. The girl's mouth was tied shut. She yelled something incomprehensible back. Zhao told the girl angrily not to stare at him like that. He added that Lu Min wouldn't be able to escape this time. Zhao then told the girl not to hope that the protagonist would save her. At this time, Han Hao opened the door to the room. The protagonist said very angrily towards Manager Zhao that the latter never got his way. Manager Zhao and the girl Liu Ming were very much amazed when they saw the protagonist. Zhao menacingly asked the protagonist how did he find this place. He also added that his friend Meng Ji was at the bottom. The manager wanted to warn the protagonist that he would be protected by Meng Jie. At that time, the protagonist kicked Zhao's head with all his might. The protagonist, kicking and beating, told the evil manager Zhao that he was not only a scoundrel, but also had a brain problem. Zhao then released the girl Lu Min. He apologized for making her wait for a long time and asked if she was okay. The freed girl happily threw herself into the main character's arms. Han Hao replied happily that everything was already fine. The main character took the girl in his arms and carried her to the exit of the building. The producer was very much amazed after seeing Han Hao come out with the girl. The main character was carrying the girl in his arms. He said he had to take her to the hospital. The producer excitedly asked if something serious had happened. The girl said she was fine and the main character was exaggerating a bit. Han Hao said that he had to go to the hospital and have the girl examined. The observer was using a camera to take pictures of the protagonist and the girl. After that, Han Hao along with the producer brought the girl to the hospital. The Lu Min girl said, in an apologetic tone to the guy that she had gotten him in trouble again. The producer told the guy to accept their sincere thanks. He also added that there will be problems with the performance for now. Han Hao replied that the girl should rest and recover. There is nothing to worry about the performance for now. Lu Min girl confidently and optimistically shouted that she would definitely perform. Late at night, the protagonist was awake. He was at his home in a luxurious mansion. Han Hao was lying on the roof of his house. He was thinking about what would happen to him if he faced the boss fighter Wu again. The protagonist asked the system daddy, doesn't he have any way to defeat the boss Wu at all? Daddy explained that the guy and the boss have a big difference in abilities. Han Hao can increase his power with new abilities. The main character told System Daddy that he wanted the coolest ability. System Daddy reported that the most powerful ability is called Pangu Unleashed Heaven and Earth. The protagonist remembered that he needed to pay for immortality points. He asked, what is the price for the ability? The protagonist felt absolutely pierced and crushed when he learned that the price of the ability would be a whole billion. Han Hao asked the System Daddy, are there any systems he can afford? The guy had 110 immortality points left. Daddy explained that a guy could buy 1 volume of training at a time. The price of the first volume is 100 points. Subsequent volumes will cost 10 times as much. The protagonist asked if he could use the skill Tom had acquired to defeat the immortal killing finger skill. Daddy replied that the guy would have no problem defeating it. The protagonist confidently shouted that he was buying the first volume of Tech. The instruction of evil spirits from all parts of the world are presented in 4 volumes. Han Hao bought the first volume. The main character said he can already feel the tech going straight to his head. Han Hao said excitedly. He couldn't wait to start practicing his technique already. Han Hao started training right on the roof. One of the neighbors was surprised that the guy decided to do gymnastics in the middle of the night. The protagonist ended up practicing on the roof all night until the wee hours of the morning. The protagonist said to himself, surprised that he hadn't noticed that he had been practicing all night and was tired. The guy walked into the room and said hello to the Mojo girl. She was working on her tablet at the time. The main character noticed that the girl looked sad and had tears in her eyes. The protagonist was surprised to see a girl suddenly run past him out of the room. Han Hao asked surprised, what kind of tricks was his girlfriend Moji pulling? The guy picked up the tablet. He figured to himself that the girl was grieving over some soap opera. Han Hao noticed a news item talking about his relationship with Lu Min girl. The main character was very amazed. He couldn't understand how journalists could make such a thing up. The main character was annoyed and amazed. He couldn't understand who could have made up such news about him. At that time, the phone rang. Han Hao picked up the smartphone in his hands. He couldn't figure out what number had just called him. A guy overheard a call from the producer of a Lu Min girl. The guy asked the producer what was going on with the news. The man yelled for the guy to come to his place soon. The producer reported that the Lu Min girl was in trouble again. The main character wondered what had happened. The producer said the hospital was overflowing with journalists. He also added that he had moved Lu Min to a hotel. The protagonist arrived at the hotel. The producer explained that he hadn't called the police, since the case was complicated. The producer opened the door to the room and said he had no one else to turn to but Han Hao. The main character was very amazed. He saw the girl Lu Ming sitting tied on a chair. Han Hao excitedly asked who tied Lu Ming. After a short pause, the producer replied that he was the one who tied up the girl. The main character asked amazed, why did the producer do that? The producer explained that it all started last night. The girl started acting strange. A man knocked on the girl's door. The producer noticed surprised that the door wasn't closed. He decided to go inside. The man noticed that the girl was sitting on the windowsill and wanted to jump down. The producer grabbed the girl's arm and shouted to her fearfully to be more careful. The producer shouted angrily to the girl not to do anything stupid and asked what on earth was she doing. She kept repeating in an inadequate state that she was coming to see someone. The producer realized that if he left the girl on her own, she'd kill herself. That's why he tied her up. The protagonist looked at the girl and heard her repeating the same words that she was coming to someone. After that, the guy took a closer look at the girl. He saw something suspicious. The guy looked closely and saw something unusual on the girl's forehead. The producer said he couldn't see anything. Han Hao noticed an obscure black thread on Lu Min's forehead. The guy was very surprised. He looked at the girl carefully and activated his abilities. Han Hao noticed with surprise some old woman sitting with a picture of a girl and papers with various spells. The protagonist saw the old woman looking very carefully at the photograph of Lu Min. The main character thought excitedly that someone had put a curse on the girl. Han Hao demanded that the producer contact the hotel security department. We need to check the security cameras and see who else came yesterday. After that, the guy and the producer went into the surveillance room. Han Hao noticed something interesting on the videotape. Some old lady asked a girl for an autograph. The guy told the producer to rewind the video. They needed to find out where the old woman went next. The man scrolled through the video and noticed that the old woman had gone to the second floor. The main character turned around and started to walk away. He yelled to the producer that he would do the rest on his own. Then Han went to the right door. That's where the old woman was supposed to be hiding. The protagonist stood near the door. He realized the right place must be here. Without a moment's hesitation, Han Hao kicked the door to the room as hard as possible. The boy saw that on the table were the very same spells on sheets. The protagonist asked if there was anyone in the room. At that time, the old woman stood behind in the darkness. The old woman said angrily that the protagonist dared to come and disrupt her plans. The old woman asked the guy, did he really have the guts to go into the demon mother's room? The guy asked with interest to the old woman, why does she look like a gypsy if she is the mother of demons? The old woman said she didn't have time to chat with the guy. She has to finish the business for Mr. Wang. The protagonist realizes that someone else is involved and is running things from behind the scenes. The old woman shouted threateningly to the guy that it was time for him to go to the other side of the world. The protagonist rushed out to attack the old woman, flying at him in midair. The guy was surprised that his rival was able to withstand his blow. It wasn't like a normal person. The old woman jumped back to the corner of the room. She prepared to attack the guy again. Han Hao decided to himself that he had gotten a good chance to try out his ability to admonish evil spirits from all over the world. The overjoyed protagonist prepared to use his new skills against his rival. The old woman shouted threateningly to Han Hao not to be so presumptuous. Afterward, the old woman yelled to the guy that she was just warming up. The demon mother flew up and shouted to the guy to prepare to die. Han Hao thought that he had only practiced techniques before. This time, he decided to use key energy. System Daddy wanted to warn the guy about something very important. The protagonist shouted menacingly as he used his spell for a powerful shot. The old woman was spinning in a very fast circle, flying in space around the room. The protagonist launched his spell against the flying mother of demons. The old woman couldn't understand what was happening to her now. Her spinning began to stop. The demon mother cried out fearfully. The protagonist amazed her with his skill. Finally, after a powerful spell, the old woman flew at full speed into the wall. The protagonist was very much exhausted by one spell. It took a lot of his strength. Han Hao thought the admonition was using up a lot of energy. He felt exhausted. System Daddy said that the guy was still not trained enough. He added that Han Hao could hit the old woman with a normal attack. The old woman began to regain consciousness. She had the strength to stand on her feet. The protagonist was glad the old woman was alive. He had to interrogate her again. The mother of demons told the guy that he could only kill a copy of her. After which, the old woman cried out disappointedly that she had raised her copy for 70 years. Han Hao grabbed the old woman's head. He asked her angrily, "Why is she squealing?" The protagonist angrily asked the old woman, who demanded to curse the girl Liu Min, and who is Mr. Wang. The demon mother said she wasn't going to give the protagonist information about her client. Han Hao asked angrily to the old woman, "Does she want to try his trick again?" Demon mother said that Wang Bansheng is the richest man in the city. He is the one who hired her to curse Liu Min girl. The old woman explained that Mr. Vanya's son had recently passed away. In his life, he had been in love with a girl named Liu Min. The father decided to put a curse on the girl so that she would commit suicide and accompany his son to the next world. The protagonist was unpleasantly surprised. He couldn't believe such stupidity was causing all this to happen. Han Hao said cheerfully to the old woman that he wouldn't just leave it at that. The mother of demons told the guy to have mercy on her as she had no choice. The old woman told me that her children died long ago along with her husband. Now she herself spends every day in hunger and cold. The protagonist was very surprised by such a story he heard from the Mother of Demons. The old woman said unhappily that when she was asked to cast the curse, she strongly resisted it with no choice in the matter. The old woman asked the guy to take pity on her and let her go. The protagonist said he understood everything. The Mother of Demons got very excited. She thought that the protagonist would have mercy on her. Hanhao told the old woman that she was a wretch who was steeped in sins. She could no longer be saved. The Mother of Demons was very much surprised. She realized that her words didn't pity the guy. Hanhao shouted angrily to the old woman that her fate had nothing to do with him. He also added that the Mother of Demons was making up nonsense. The protagonist said the old woman had killed a lot of people, so she couldn't even hope for a pardon. The Mother of Demons frustratedly told the guy that he never bought her ruse. The old woman began to rise from her seat. The guy noticed the chandelier from above the ceiling began to swing. The demon mother raised her hands up and shouted menacingly at the boy to try and save himself, at which point the chandelier ripped off the ceiling and flew downward at full speed. The protagonist was surprised to notice how the chandelier had completely penetrated the Mother of Demons. Hanhao decided to himself that he was able to use the technique to swing the chandelier. The protagonist turned around and started to walk away. He was glad he didn't even have to get his hands dirty. Hanhao thought happily to himself that everything had ended with a happy ending for him. The girl Lu Min gradually came to her senses in the hotel building. She was in her room. Lu Min looked around. She didn't realize where she was. The main character stood next to the producer. Hanhao was surprised and pleased. He asked the girl if she was all right. Girl asked the man with the boyfriend what happened to her after all. The main character in all details told the singer Lu Min what happened to her and how she ended up in the hotel. Hanhao excitedly told the girl that he had broken the spell and the curse had fallen from Lu Min. The girl said very sadly she wouldn't have thought that Wang Bancheng had invited her to the corporate party for such a purpose. The producer said thoughtfully he only now realized why Van had offered a lot of money for the performance. The main character said that the best option now would be to find an excuse not to perform. The producer thought about it and said it would be best for them to leave town. At that time his phone rang. The producer noticed that Mr. Van Bancheng was on the phone with him right now. The girl asked fearfully, what should they do now? The protagonist thought that Mr. Wang didn't know what had happened to the demon mother yet. He offered to pretend to refuse. The man agreed. The producer told Mr. Wang that the Liu Min girl is not feeling well and won't be able to perform. Mr. Van told the producer that the girl could at least come and have dinner with them. The producer timidly said that maybe the girl shouldn't go to dinner. Mr. Van told the producer he was already at the hotel door. He was there with the guards. Mr. Van afterwards cheerfully told his interlocutor that they were on their way up. After that, Mr. Wang hung up the phone. The producer got very worried. The man told the girl and her boyfriend that Mr. Van was already downstairs. Lu Min was really scared. The main character said very excitedly that the whole thing was an ambush. The producer excitedly asked the guy, what are they all going to do now? Hanhao thought to himself that his chi energy had not yet fully recovered. He suggested that his friends change their clothes now. The Lu Min girl was very surprised to hear such a sentence. She didn't understand it right away. The protagonist told the girl judiciously that she needed to change. He added that she wouldn't go to the meeting in her nightie. The Lu Min girl only now noticed that she was wearing a nightgown. She shouted excitedly that she would go and change. The protagonist a little shyly told the girl to prepare a set of clothes for him as well. At that time there was a knock on the door. It was Mr. Wang and his subordinates. Mr. Wang said very kindly that he had come for Mrs. Liu. At the same time, the door to the room opened. Mr. Wang was a little surprised. The Lu Min girl came out. She said that they were already ready. Next to her was the producer and the main character. Mr. Wang inquired of the girl what kind of lord was standing next to her. The man said he was the girl's producer. The singer's security guard named Han is standing next to him. Mr. Wang gestured to his companions to follow him. The girl went out and noticed a group of Mr. Vanya's guards in the hallway. The protagonist whispered to the girl not to worry as he would protect her. Singer Lu Min was happy. She had full confidence in the main character. The protagonist took a closer look at the costume of one of the guards. Hanhao saw clearly that a gun was hidden under the clothes of one of the guards. After that, Mr. Wang brought his guests to his palace. He invited them to come in. Mr. Wang looked towards the main character and was slightly surprised. Liu Ming was surprised when the main character took her in his arms. Hanhao said that the singer was not feeling well and needed someone to take care of her. One of the guards told the protagonist that Mr. Wang only invited the girl Lu Min. Mr. Wang told the guard to let the protagonist with the girl in his arms through. The protagonist thought to himself grudgingly that Mr. Van was already up to something. A man also wanted to come in. He told the guard that he was the producer of the Lu Min girl. The guard wouldn't let him in. The producer was very surprised and embarrassed. He realized he'd have to stay on the street. The protagonist and his girlfriend were walking through Mr. Vanya's mansion. The host invited the guests to sit down wherever they wanted. Mr. Wang told the boy and girl that the main course was almost ready. after which a servant came and poured tea from the teapot into the cups on the table. The servant suggested to the guests that they should have some tea. The protagonist and Lu Min were indecisive. A girl wanted to try the tea. The main character told her to wait. Han Hao took the cup in his hands. He said he wanted to taste it himself first. The guy thought to himself that if a person seems to be dispatched, he will realize it with the chaos technique skill. The taste of the tea struck the protagonist very strongly. He realized that he had tasted a very delicate and moderately strong tea. The main character liked the tea very much. He felt calm and peaceful. Afterward, the protagonist remembered excitedly that the tea had almost made him lose his guard. The guy thought to himself that there could be no problem with the tea. He offered it to the girl to drink Lu Min. Mr. Van told the protagonist not to be shy and to take a seat soon. The protagonist replied to the master that he was used to it and could stand for a while. Suddenly, the boy suspected something. He asked Mr. Wang how he knew his name. Mr. Wang didn't answer anything. He only glared menacingly at the protagonist through his glasses. At that time, Han Hao heard the cup break. It was dropped from his hands by the girl Lu Min. The main character noticed with excitement as the Lu Min singer slumped completely unconscious on the couch. The guy excitedly ran up to the girl and yelled for her to come to her senses. At this time, the servant slyly said that it was he who had purposely put a conspiracy on the water. Han Hao was surprised at such words. After that, the servant threw off his clothes, and underneath was the garb of a warrior. He added that the conspiracy did not work on people seeking immortality. If an ordinary person takes a sip, he will immediately lose consciousness. Master Wang turned to the warrior and called her Master Tsu. The master demanded that the master act sooner. Master Chu took out a sword and a piece of paper with a special spell. He prepared to activate it. The main character was very surprised and frightened. He asked the warrior what the warrior was up to. After that, the protagonist along with the girl Master Chu and Mr. Vanyam teleported out of the room. After teleportation, all the people found themselves in an underground dungeon with bars and a stone floor. The main character was holding a girl. He couldn't figure out what kind of place they'd just gotten to. Han Hao asked System Daddy what kind of technique Master Chu had used. The System Daddy replied that the master had just collected some displacement amulets somewhere. Mr. Van was sitting on the sofa. He said calmly that now it was time for the main course. Master Chu told the master to put everything in his hands. The protagonist and the girl were sitting on the floor. Han Hao shouted sternly to Mr. Wan, "Did he really decide to sacrifice a living human being?" Mr. Wang said sternly to the protagonist that he too is made unscrupulous by his past deeds. Han Hao excitedly shouted at Mr. Wan that he was slandering people. They had never met before. Mr. Wang reminded the protagonist that he had taken the pill away from Yang Hua. Then he beat up Yan Tianxin. The protagonist said judiciously that he now realized where he had gotten into a lot of trouble lately. He added that he would sort it all out. Han Hao stood up and said confidently that he would deal with old and new problems. At this time, Master Chu turned to the main character and said sternly to not ignore him. After that, Master Chu used a spell on his sword. He added that now the protagonist along with the girl would go to the other world. The protagonist angrily asked the warrior, "Does the latter think he's afraid of him?" Suddenly, Master Chu extended his hand towards the protagonist and told him to wait. The guy stopped. He couldn't understand why Master Chu was avoiding the fight right now. He couldn't understand how Master Chu wanted to deceive him and take him by surprise. Master Chu turned to Mr. Wang. He reminded the master that earlier they had agreed on only one girl, but now there were two victims. Afterward, the warrior said sternly to the master that he would have to pay extra. Mr. Van said annoyedly to the warrior that he would not shower him with money. The main character got angry when he heard such a conversation. He decided that he would trample Mr. Vanya. Master Chu then shouted to the head hero to get ready. Han Hao excitedly wondered what the warrior would do this time. System Daddy said that Master Chu was not easy. The protagonist decided to take things more seriously. Master Chu prepared to use his sword to attack the protagonist. The protagonist was fully focused. He prepared for battle. Han Hao managed to dodge the blow that Master Chu gave him with his magic sword. The protagonist realized that his opponent was still hiding his power. He bent down and prepared to attack. Han Hao ducked down and with all his might struck Master Chu's stomach with his hand. The strong blow sent the martial artist flying aside. He didn't have time to defend himself. Master Chu collapsed on the sofa in an unconscious state after the heavy blow. Mr. Wang was very much displeased. Mr. Wang asked the battered Master Chu if he was all right. Master Chu said in a very weak voice that he seemed to be doing fine. The protagonist realized to himself annoyed that his opponent's level was nothing more than a street con artist. Han Hao asked grudgingly at the system, "Daddy, what made Master Chu seem so difficult to him?" Daddy replied that the warrior was not even simple. The main character was walking down the hall. He told Mr. Vanya that he had been cheated out of money and asked how he was going to cope. At that time, the master took out a piece of paper with a special spell. He prepared to use it. After that, the master tossed the magic paper upwards. He shouted for the shadow fiend to appear. The magic spell began to activate. Dark swirls appeared around the paper. After that, a huge demon appeared in the center. Mr. Van commanded the demon to destroy the protagonist. The protagonist was amazed at the appearance of the demon. He didn't expect such opponents for himself. The demon began to attack the protagonist. Hanhao managed to dodge and fend off the blow with his hand. Then the protagonist decided to strike back. His hand flew into the void. Hanhao kept trying to throw punches. The demon was dissolving in the air and the guy couldn't catch it. After another failed blow, the demon smiled at the boy and disappeared. The protagonist noticed that the demon's black hand had vanished into thin air. After that, the demon suddenly decided to attack the guy from the side with his arm. Hanhao was ready to fight back. After that, the protagonist decided to strike back. All his blows went into the void and did not hit the demon. Hanhao realized that the demon could attack him, but there was no way he could hit it back. System Daddy said judiciously that it all looked like the product of some kind of black magic. Hanhao shouted that he didn't understand anything. System Daddy informed him that it was almost unrealistic to kill such a demon. The boy asked excitedly, "Is his rival really invincible?" Daddy said that there is no invincible black magic in the world. After which the System Daddy explained to the guy that if he wanted to catch the bandits, he had to start with the ringleader. The protagonist was still fighting against the demon. He yelled that he couldn't see the ringleader here yet. System Daddy told the guy to find someone named Van. The overjoyed protagonist replied to the System Daddy that he understood everything. The guy decided to once again crush the demon with a strong arm punch. Hanhao was unable to hit Po Demon as he immediately dissolved into thin air. The protagonist continued to strike. He said that if the demon wouldn't let him hit himself, he would attack his master. The demon was surprised and wary when he heard such words from the protagonist. The protagonist accelerated and prepared to attack Mr. Vanya. Mr. Van told the evil protagonist that he had foreseen everything in advance. Suddenly, a demon appeared between the boy and Lord Van. Hanhao was surprised. The protagonist excitedly realized that the demon could also teleport. Hanhao decided to hit the demon with an arm punch. The demon was able to grab the guy's arm. The flustered protagonist realized that the demon in front of him now was not a teleported demon. Hanhao realized with consternation that the demon had begun to use the split to attack. One of the demons headed full speed toward the Lu-Min girl sitting on the floor. The main character was scared. He had to decide something quickly as things were getting worse and worse. Then the guy turned around and started running towards the girl. Mr. Van cleverly told the protagonist that he was doomed to fail. He can't chase two birds. The demon rushed after the protagonist. The guy didn't have enough speed to escape. The demon caught up with the protagonist and wrapped his arms around him from behind. Hanhao couldn't move. After that, the second demon turned around and flew towards the protagonist. The guy found himself stiff and defenseless against the demon flying at him. The protagonist shouted angrily, "Did the demon want to take him by surprise?" The protagonist stood in the arms of a demon. He remembered that he also had a special weapon. Hanhao took out a special dagger and used it to strike the demon that was holding him very hard. After a tremendous amount of blows, the demon shattered into pieces. Hanhao was completely free. Then the chief looked menacingly at the second demon. He had to deal with him too. The demon glared angrily at the protagonist. It prepared to attack him. Hanhao used his special dagger to slash and crush the demon. The protagonist looked at his dagger, which was called the Immortal Slayer, with satisfaction. At this time, the angry Mr. Wang shouted at the protagonist that he was a bastard. The master angrily said that the boy had destroyed his demon, that he had nurtured for years. Mr. Van shouted angrily to the protagonist that he was declaring him his sworn enemy from this day forward. At this time, the three figures sitting up above shouted to Mr. Vanya that they could handle the protagonist. Hanhao raised his head and looked up in surprise. He hadn't expected someone to be there. One of the warriors told the master that they were heroes from the Yin Mountain. They will help Mr. Wan to teach the main character a lesson. Mr. Wang was pleased. He said he hadn't paid a lot of money for nothing. System Daddy has informed the protagonist that there are 3 immortality seekers above. The fire warrior said that he would use his special art of wielding fire to sizzle the protagonist. Hanhao remembered that his ki energy had already recovered. System Daddy reported that the opponent's technique level was much lower than the protagonist's. After that, System Daddy announced that Hanhao should defeat the fire warrior with a single blow. For that, he would receive 20 immortality points. At this time, the fire warrior flew down from the heights to attack the protagonist. Hanhao concentrated. He decided to try his best to fulfill System Daddy's task. The fire warrior was approaching from the heights. Hanhao prepared to repel the opponent's attack. The fire warrior wanted to grab the arm of the protagonist with his hand. Hanhao dodged it. After that, the main character turned the fire warrior's arm and prepared to attack back. With a huge swing, the protagonist delivered a devastating uppercut blow to the fire warrior. From the powerful blow, the fire warrior flew aside and fell unconscious to the floor. The other warriors standing on top were surprised and angry at the protagonist. The fat warrior threateningly told the protagonist that they weren't done with him yet. The fat warrior shouted that he was activating his new skill called firebombs. Several huge fireballs came from high above and exploded on the floor. The main character happily said that the bombs flew very slowly. He could see every one of them. The blue-haired fighter told the fat warrior that they would now attack together. Protagonist asked the system daddy if he can now use the skill of guiding evil spirits. Daddy replied to tell the guy to take his time. Han Hao asked why he had to wait. System daddy said that someone hadn't revealed their cards yet. The boy looked at Mr. Wan. The main character looked at the master. Mr. Wan was completely calm. At this time, Han Hao heard the two remaining opponents descend towards him. It turned out that there were two firefighters behind and in front of the protagonist. Han Hao excitedly realized that the opponents were able to surround him from all sides. The fighter launched a huge fireball from his hand against the protagonist. The protagonist managed to jump up very quickly and the fireball flew below him. In the end, a huge fireball struck the warrior standing behind the main character of Tolstoy. The protagonist was left alone with his opponent. The two of them looked in surprise at the fat warrior who had been hit. The burnt-out fat warrior could only call out to his little brother one last time. The fighter shouted angrily to the boy that he had killed his brother, and now he was definitely dead. Han Hao replied that the warriors were the first to start it. The martial artist menacingly said that he was about to use a secret fire-wielding technique from the Yin Mountain. The fighter didn't have time to attack, as the protagonist kicked him with all his might. As a result, the fighter flew unconscious to the side from the strong blow and remained lying on the floor. The protagonist angrily asked, "Did the warrior really think anyone would wait for him to finish activating his spell?" After defeating his opponents, the protagonist found himself alone in the center of a large hall. Mr. Wang silently and angrily looked at the protagonist with an unseeing gaze. Master Chu woke up at that time. He wondered when he had time to lose consciousness. After that, the warrior told his master that there had been a slight misunderstanding. He added that he would deal with the protagonist now. Master Chu said that the protagonist was not amiss. He added to Mr. Vanya's address that additional payment would have to be discussed. Mr. Wan stood silent. He looked at Master Chu and thought about something. After that, Mr. Wang said cheerfully to Master Chu that he wanted to help him. The protagonist, angrily and surprised, shouted to his opponents, "Do the two of them really want to attack him alone?" At that time, Master Wang grabbed Master Chu by the throat. The warrior was breathless and couldn't even scream. Mr. Van shouted angrily to the warrior, "Does he dare to bargain with him yet?" Master Wang angrily shouted to the warrior that he would pay with his life. Master Chu was lying on the floor unconscious. The protagonist smiled and told his host that he would make him sorry for cutting his ranks. Mr. Wang told the guy that when he saw him pull out his thing, he decided that he wouldn't let him out alive. Han Hao couldn't understand which thing the master was talking about. Mr. Van menacingly told the protagonist that his dagger slayer immortal would pass into new hands today. Han Hao accelerated and prepared to attack. He shouted that it was not the master who would decide whether his dagger would pass into new hands. The protagonist wanted to take his opponent down with a solid punch to the stomach. Mr. Wang grabbed the protagonist's fist with his hand. He asked the boy, "Is this really all he can do?" Whereupon the owner grabbed the lad's arm and prepared to kick it with all his might. Mr. Wang shouted menacingly that he would take the protagonist's hand for himself. The guy's body was pierced with pain. He lost control for a while. The protagonist made a desperate attempt and managed to twist his arm out of the grip. Mr. Wang was surprised. He looked angrily at the protagonist. He couldn't believe that the guy was able to break free. Once free, the protagonist quickly bounced to a safe distance. Mr. Wang asked in surprise, "Is that really all the main character can do?" Han Hao looked at his master and noticed that his body was trembling violently. Mr. Wang thought that it would be foolish to engage in a direct confrontation with the protagonist. The host asked the protagonist if he knew why he would lose. Han Hao replied to his opponent that he was talking nonsense. After that, Mr. Van shouted threateningly to the protagonist that he had weaknesses and he didn't. At the same time, the master prepared to activate the spell. Mr. Wang slammed his hands on the floor with all his might. There was a very strong shockwave. The protagonist was surprised and frightened. He realized that his rival was up to something. The underground dungeon began to shake. Huge stones fell from the ceiling to the floor. The protagonist asked excitedly to Mr. Vanya, "Did he really decide to bury them both here?" Han Hao said to the master cheerfully that he would manage to die here first. Mr. Wang calmly told the protagonist that he had weaknesses. At that time, there were huge explosions in the air. The guy remembered the girl Lu Min. The protagonist turned around and angrily called the owner a bastard. He had to run to help the girl. The girl was sitting unconscious on the floor. A large pile of rocks was flying at her. The protagonist rushed off to help the girl. Han Hao was rushing at full speed towards the girl Lu Min. Above him from above was a huge pile of rocks. In the end, the main character, along with his girlfriend Lu Min, was buried under a huge pile of rocks. Mr. Wang said calmly in remembrance of the main character that the latter was still very weak to contend with him. The master headed to the side. He decided that he was done with the protagonist. Although he had to expend Chi energy, Mr. Wang remembered that he still needed to find the immortal Slayer dagger and the deed would be done. Suddenly the owner noticed some extraneous noise coming from the pile of stones, after which the protagonist lifted the pile of rocks that was above him in his arms. Han Hao held the Liu Ming girl in his arms. He asked angrily at Mr. Wang, was this really his trump card? The protagonist said angrily to his rival that he's as worthless as ever. Mr. Wang was astonished. He didn't understand how Han Hao could have escaped. The protagonist stood and supporting the girl Lu Min, with his hand above his head holding a pile of rocks. Mr. Wang was surprised. He couldn't understand where the guy got such power from. Han Hao shouted angrily to his master to pick up his rocks and launch the pile at him. Mr. Van was a little frightened. A big pile of rocks flew at him. The owner very cleverly and in time bounced aside. The stones flew past him. Mr. Wang asked, surprised at the protagonist, did he really think to hit him with such a throw? The protagonist realized that he needed to use his skills once more to attack. Han Hao shouted for the master to try and dodge another attack. The protagonist activated a spell called Heavenly Maiden's Flower Rain. Mr. Van wondered what was beginning to happen to the stones in the room. The host noticed how heavy rocks began to fly upwards for unknown reasons. Mr. Van said calmly to the protagonist that he was only wasting his energy. The master calmly kicked away a small pebble. He said he would not be harmed by such an attack, at which time the master noticed a small pebble fall from above and shatter the floor. Mr. Van was surprised because the small stones had become very heavy. The master felt small pebbles begin to fall on him, knocking him to the ground. Mr. Van felt that he could not stand and began to slump to the floor. The host on his knee angrily asked the protagonist what he had done. Han Hao tossed a small pebble and said that he simply made ordinary stones very heavy. The host angrily shouted to the protagonist that a few pebbles wouldn't make him worship. The protagonist looked at the master in surprise and said that he was able to stand. Han Hao shouted that this was not all. He swung around and prepared to throw the stone. After a throw from the protagonist, a small pebble flew towards Mr. Wang at a great speed. The owner realized the rock was coming very fast. He wouldn't have had time to dodge it. The stone hit the master. Mr. Wang flew far to the side from the powerful impact. A small pebble became very heavy under the influence of magic and knocked its owner across the room. The impact from the stone was so powerful that Mr. Wang took out the wall. After a swift and violent flight, the host broke through the wall with him and lay on the floor in a heap of ruins. The protagonist leisurely approached the lying host. He prepared to finish him off. Han Hao tossed the stone in his hand. He asked cheerfully to his master, how did he like such an attack? The lying Mr. Van looked angrily at the protagonist. He was injured after being hit by the stone. Han Hao was surprised that his opponent was still conscious. He realized that the host could hold a punch pretty well. Mr. Wang took out a piece of paper with a spell. He said in a weak voice to the protagonist to remember one thing. The master shouted to the guy that he would never forgive him for this. He prepared to activate the spell paper. The protagonist was surprised to see his rival disappear without a trace. Han Hao realized that master had used a teleportation scroll. He asked System Daddy, will they let him escape? Daddy replied that Mr. Wang would be teleported to a random place. They wouldn't be able to find him right away. The protagonist worriedly thought to himself that the host would become a constant threat to them. The protagonist walked up to the lying Lu Min girl and touched his hands to her neck. Han Hao decided to infuse his Qi energy into the girl. It was supposed to help her recover. The girl woke up. She asked in a weak voice, what happened to her? The girl asked the guy, wondering where she was and what happened. She was still sitting on Earth. The protagonist told the girl cheerfully that everything was fine and all problems were over. The girl got excited. Lu Min looked at the guy fondly and thanked him happily. After that, the Lu Min girl wanted to kiss the protagonist as a token of gratitude. Han Hao turned away and told the girl not to thank him now, but only later when they got out. The boy turned around and asked the girl what was wrong with her face. Liu Ming said she was fine. Han Hao offered to carry the girl in his arms. The main character told the sedate girl that they would be out of the dungeon very soon. Lu Min told the main character that she believed him, but also added that they had been walking around here for half an hour. The girl slowed her step and asked the protagonist, are they really lost now? Han Hao said reassuringly to the girl that they were not lost. He asked how on earth she could have thought such a thing. The protagonist pointed his finger forward and said that right around that corner would be the exit. The protagonist, along with the girl, walked over to the corner and peered out carefully. Han Hao saw an iron door in front of him. He wondered if there really was a way out. The main character told the girl that he didn't cheat her. Lu Min told the guy happily that she agreed with him. The protagonist went to the door and tried to push it open. He noticed that there was no handle either. And then the guy kicked the door with all his might, but it didn't budge. The girl excitedly called out to the protagonist. Han Hao replied to the girlfriend that he handled it calmly. The guy said he'd use a move that would eat up all his strength. Eventually, he'd be able to get out of here with the girl. Lu Min pointed the guy to the button to press to open the doors. The protagonist was surprised. He told the girl to press the button. After pressing the button, the door opened with a creak. Han Hao said, apparently the door had not been used for a long time. Main Edge, along with Lu Min's girlfriend, walked alone through the door that opened. Inside the room, the protagonist, along with the girl, was greeted by two elders. The main character was frightened and wary. He covered the girl and asked who was standing in front of them. An elder said that the boy and the girl had entered the closed area of the Van family's property. He asked, how did the guests get here? Another elder said that they were guarding the place. He also added that the boy and the girl were servants of Mr. Wang. He asked why they had come here. The main character said that he is Mr. Wang's personal guard, and the girl is the master's assistant. Han Hao then told the guards that they had been sent here by Master Wang himself. The elder asked, why didn't the master come here himself? The protagonist hesitated. He had to give some kind of answer as soon as possible. Han Hao angrily shouted that Master was being attacked, so he sent to alert the guards. The elders were very much surprised and agitated. One of them asked what happened outside. The protagonist said that the Master was attacked by Han Hao and Mr. Wang has no chance of dealing with the enemy. One guard told another that the guests looked suspicious and offered to kill them. Another old man said that he heard some sounds and maybe they weren't being tricked. He asked the protagonist if the host had sent him to check the pill of the original key. Han Hao thought to himself, the pill of primordial qi sounds like something useful. The protagonist confirmed that Mr. Wang had sent him personally to test the pill. The guard told the protagonist that if he cheated, he'd be dead. The other said they'd see them off, if it was Mr. Wang's personal order. The guards then told the standing guests to follow them. Liu Ming's girlfriend asked the protagonist excitedly, will everything be all right? Han Hao told the girl not to worry. The guards led the guests to a huge red door. Then the elders approached the locks. To open the door, the elders put their hands on a special scanner. After the scanning procedure, the door opened. The protagonist saw something lying in the center of the room on a table. The guard said for the guests to make sure the pill of original key was lying intact. The protagonist, along with the girl, looked at the yellow pill that was lying on the pad. Han Hao thought to himself that the pilula looked somehow not very interesting. Suddenly, an elder turned to the side and asked Wang-san, why did he come? The protagonist and his companion were very much frightened when they heard that the master was here. After that, the protagonist and the girl turned around. They noticed that the surroundings were empty, and there was no one around. One of the guards said angrily, he knew right away that something was amiss here. The elder said that the expression on the guests' faces did not seem like a natural reaction to Mr. Wang's arrival. Another elder asked the guests who they were. The protagonist and his companion were very frightened. They realized that they would have to justify themselves somehow. The guards sternly asked the guests, don't they want to tell the real reasons for their visit? The protagonist told an elder that he still wouldn't believe they were lost. One guard said that the guests covered themselves with Mr. Wang's name and wanted to deceive their trust. The elder became angry and shouted menacingly that it was time for the guests to try his fist. After that, the guard swung his arm leisurely. He made all his movements smoothly. Then the elder very slowly moved his hand palm forward. The guard leisurely pointed his hand in the direction of the protagonist. The protagonist asked the old man if he had decided to take up gymnastics, after which the old man banged his palm into the wall next to the protagonist with all his might. After the blow from the guard, the wall collapsed. The old man said he missed a bit since he hadn't practiced in a while. Another guard began to activate the spell. He told his colleague that their duet was unbeatable. The spell hit the protagonist and hit him. The guy didn't have time to defend himself. The main character realized he couldn't move. He asked the system daddy what had happened to him. Daddy explained that Han Hao had been stricken with paralysis and could not move. Han Hao asked, how long will the spell last? Daddy replied, to break the spell, the caster must distract himself. The old man told the protagonist that his spells rendered even the strongest helpless. Daddy told the protagonist that the spell did not paralyze the chi energy. The guard approached the girl and told her she was no assistant at all. Then the old man grabbed the girl by the neck. She was out of breath and couldn't scream. The guard yelled to the girl that he didn't care who they were at all. The Lu Min girl started to choke. The guy realized it was time to act, after which the guy shouted menacingly to the guard to immediately let the girl go. The old man angrily asked the guy, does he really care about other people's misfortune? The guard began to concentrate and prepared to attack the guy. The protagonist was very angry. He yelled at the guards that they were asking for it. The guy started to activate his skills. An old man stood next to him, concentrating for the punch. The protagonist activated his ability called Vortex. After that, the guy was able to use a strong magical surge to throw the old man into the wall. One guard got very worried when he saw his colleague being thrown hard. He let the girl go. The protagonist jumped high up. He prepared to attack the old man. Han Hao, with great acceleration and with all his might, elbowed the guard on the head. The old man couldn't defend himself from the powerful elbow strike and flew sideways. After a heavy blow from the protagonist, the guard flew into the wall unconscious. Excited protagonist walked up to the girl and asked her if she hurt herself. She said she was fine. The guard came to his senses and shouted angrily to the protagonist that he couldn't leave. Then the old man pressed a button in the wall in the cave, and a great noise was heard. Rocks fell from above. Han Hao said excitedly to the girl that the place was about to collapse. The protagonist shouted fearfully to the girl that the door was closing, and they had to make it in time. Behind the girl protagonist, everything piled up. Lu Min said excitedly that if they were a little late, they'd be buried alive here. The lad, together with his companion, saw with consternation that the entrance in front of them was blocked. Liu Min girl asked the protagonist with fear, "Are they really stuck here?" Han Hao said that everything will be fine. The guy looked up. He said cheerfully that they had that earthquake to thank it all. Han Hao said there was a light creeping in from above among the rocks. He added that now he knew what to do. The protagonist took the girl in his arms and yelled for her to hold on tight. A very excited protagonist shouted to the girl that they were going to get out of this hole. The producer was sitting outside and noticed a huge beam of light rising from Mr. Wang's mansion. The man was frightened and surprised. He immediately ran up to the house to find out what had happened. The producer noticed the silhouettes of two people appearing among the puffs of smoke. The man noticed the protagonist came out to him with the girl Lu Min. The producer ran up and asked excitedly, "What happened?" Han Hao said it would take all day to tell the story. The main character asked the producer to take the girl to a place where she could rest. The man asked, "What's wrong?" The girl said in a weak voice that she was fine. The producer said fearfully that if the ligaments were damaged, it was very bad. The main character stepped aside. The girl was sitting in the grass. Next to her was the producer. The main character asked the system, "Daddy, what's the pill for?" He took it out of his pocket. Daddy said that the pill helps you reach a new level. It also gives you a 10% chance of entering a state of insight. Han Hao was surprised that it was only a 10% chance. Daddy said that if 2 pills were used, the chance would increase to 50%. Then Daddy asked the boy, "Hasn't he remembered yet?" Han Hao remembered about the pill he had once found in his wallet. The boy remembered what Mr. Wang said about Yang Hua. The protagonist couldn't understand how Yang Hua could have the pill. Daddy said that Yang Hua might not understand the value of the pill or be a middleman for the transfer. The protagonist looked pleased at the pill and thought he knew it was a very useful thing. The producer, along with singer Lu Min and the main character, headed to the mansion gate. The protagonist noticed something glowing and clicking suspiciously in the bushes near them. The guy got really pissed off and couldn't figure out who was able to hide here. The protagonist and his companions noticed a male photographer behind a bush. The man stood up and greeted the protagonist. He recalled how they had once seen each other outside the restaurant. The protagonist remembered how he had once kicked that photographer with all his might. Han Hao kicked the photographer with his foot and shouted, "Is he the one who always follows him around and takes pictures and then makes up gossip on the internet?" The photographer said affably to the protagonist that he could help clean up his reputation after all the news releases. The man smiled and said cheerfully to the boy that he had one condition. The protagonist asked the man how dare he put conditions on him. The producer told the guy he could listen to what the photographer had to say. After a brief pause, the photographer said he needed to reintroduce himself. The man said that his name was Chadui, and he was a journalist. He decided to also say his condition. The man pointed his finger at the protagonist and said he wanted to follow him. The photographer said cheerfully that when he follows Han Hao, he always has the best news. The man then told the protagonist that he would help sort out all the past newscasts. The protagonist thought about it. He realized he might need a man's connections. The protagonist told the photographer that the girl Lu Min in a couple of days would be performing in karaoke bars. He could come through too. The photographer agreed. The producer was looking at the main character and the photographer. He said it looked like the guy and the man had pulled off a big deal. A couple of days later, the protagonist was on the phone at home. Mr. Lee told him that they had already released the members of the Scarlet Mother clan. After that, the protagonist was overjoyed to hear that the clan members would no longer appear in Qingshui City. The guy greeted the girl with a motzi. She was sitting on the couch reading the news on her tablet. The girl looked away and greeted the protagonist very cheerfully. Han Hao asked Moji if she had read the news. He said, "Journalists will do anything for a scoop." The main character asked his girlfriend if she was jealous of the singer Liu Ming. Moji said she was jealous of him for spending time with celebrities. Han Hao noticed a note of sadness in the girl's voice. He realized that her friend was in a bad mood. The guy remembered that Moji's girlfriend's birthday was coming up. He decided to make her happy somehow. The guy had a hunch. He realized that the girl was jealous of him because he could see the singer Lu Min. At this time, Moji thought to herself that her friend and singer Lu Min couldn't be together. The protagonist told his girlfriend excitedly that in a couple of days he could arrange for her to meet and introduce her to Lu Min.